with the same formula.
But let's be clear,
I
much
would gladly
more
join the
needs
chair
to
in
be done.
exploring
I look
solutions to
forward
address
to
the high
hearing
cost of
from our
prescription drugs.
CEO
I'm a
panelists
doctor.
this
I
morning
worked in a
as to
public
how
hospital for the
they
uninsured
are
for
going to go
25
forward
years.
to
I
substantially
did my
lower
best to
the
get
My gosh,
let's just
it shouldn't be high, but it is
everybody on
Bad actors
this
game the
panel
system, and we need
cares about
solutions
the
that
high
benefit
cost of
patients
prescription
and improve
drugs
access.
and wants to work
But
on real
the majority was
solutions
not
to address
interested in
this.
working with
But
this
it's
side
also
of the
clear
dais
that this
to hold
hearing
a
is not
serious
about
hearing to
finding
inform serious
legislative
legislation.
solutions. They didn't
It's
seek
kind of
Republican
following a
input.
formula.
The goal was to haul you guys
we
in to cry
publicly attack
capitalism
private-
and blame these
I
corporations
don't,
for
but
the high
others
cost of
publicly
drug
attack
prices.
private citizens
Oh,
for
by the
being
way, of
successful
course,
under
drug companies play a
capitalism.
role.
We
And hopefully we'll
grossly
get answers today to
oversimplify a
legitimate
problem and
questions
blame
about how
corporations.
drugs are
We
priced. Demand
But the problem
CEOs
is
come
far
before the
greater
committee
and
for
more complex
verbal
than
individual companies.
We
Or
reject
even
the offer
a
to
set of
send
companies
top
within an
executives with
ecosystem
subject
which is
matter
incredibly
expertise and
complex.
responsibility
Why do
regarding
Americans
issues
pay
at
more
hand
for certain drugs than
threaten
patients
a
in other
subpoena when
countries?
CEOs
To
are
understand, we need
suspicious
to have
that
a
they
serious
won't get
effort
a
to
fair
navigate
shake.
the network
Hold the
of
hearing,
perverse
get the sound
incentives
bites, then pick
throughout
another
the healthcare
set of
system.
CEOs for a
I
show
lived in it
trial,
for 25
but
years.
we don't
I'm
pass
very
meaningful
kind of
legislation.
aware of it.
Taking
That
a
sounds
substantive
familiar.
look
It's
at
been the hearing with
insurance
Starbucks
benefits
founder
design,
Howard Schultz,
price transparency,
Moderna
regulatory
CEO
barriers,
Stefan
intellectual
Bancel,
property barriers,
and now
the
this
perverse
hearing with the same
effect
formula.
government discount programs
I would
have
gladly
on
join the
prices
chair in
charged to commercial
exploring
patients,
solutions
etc.
to address the high
One
cost of
example,
prescription drugs.
just to say again,
I'm a
a little
doctor.
bit of complexity
I
here.
worked in a public
The 340B
hospital
drug
for the
program
uninsured
resulted
for
in a
25
$54
years.
billion in
I
drug
did my
discounts in
best to get
2022.
care to those who
But we
otherwise
actually
would
don't
not have
know if those
received.
discounts
I am aware
lowered
of this.
prices
I'm
for
also
the
aware of
patient
the
who bought
perverse
the drug.
incentives.
There are reports that
the kind
patients
of,
paid
like, my
cash.
gosh,
It shouldn't be high, but it is
the
high.
intermediary took
Bad
the
actors
full
game the
price,
system, and we
even
need
though
solutions that
340B
benefit
should have
patients
lowered
and
it.
improve access.
That is a serious
But the
investigation
majority
being
was not
conducted by
interested
this
in
side of
working
the
with
dais,
this side of the
that
dais
the other side
to
of
hold
the
a
dais was
serious
not
hearing to
interested in
inform serious
participating in.
legislation.
That they didn't
is
seek
an
Republican input.
understanding of an
The
ecosystem.
goal was to haul you guys
I
in
understand.
to cry capitalism and blame these corporations.
There's no one
for
more
the high
eloquent
cost
than
of
Chair Sanders
drug
on
prices.
Medicare for All.
Oh, by the way,
And
of course,
we
drug
can
companies
cherry
play a
pick
role.
examples of how
and
other
hopefully we'll get
countries
answers
are doing
today to
something better.
legitimate questions
I can
about
cherry pick the
how
opposite.
drugs are priced.
Canada
But the
is struggling
problem is
just to
far
show you
greater
that
and
there's a
more
complexity
complex
here. Let me
than
just take an example.
individual companies.
Canada is struggling with
Even
specialty care.
a set of companies
In May of
within
last
an
year, the Canadian
ecosystem
government
which is
began to
incredibly
send
complex.
4,800 Canadians
Why do
from
Americans
British
pay more
Columbia
for certain drugs
to
than
Washington
patients in other
State
countries?
to, quote,
To understand,
ensure
we need to have a
people have
serious
faster
effort to
access
navigate
to
the network of
life-saving
perverse
radiation
incentives
treatment.
throughout
End
the
quote.
healthcare system.
They can afford
I
their
lived in it for
system
25
because we're right
years.
next door.
I am very
Relatedly,
aware of
to this hearing and to
taking
that,
a substantial
Allison
look at insurance benefit
Declazo,
design,
a Canadian woman,
price
paid for her own
transparency,
treatment
regulatory
in the United
barriers,
States
intellectual
after
property
the
barriers,
Provincial Health Authority
the
in
perverse
British Columbia
effect government
denied
discount
her
programs
access
have
to
upon
life-saving
prices charged to
chemotherapy.
commercial patients, etc.
One example,
Canada
just to
had
say
a lower
again, a little
cost
bit of
drug so
complexity
low
here.
they didn't carry the
The
chemotherapy.
340B drug
So she paid
program
for it out of
resulted in a
pocket in the
$54
United
billion
States,
in
so she
drug
could have
discounts in 2022.
life-saving chemotherapy.
But we actually don't know
The United
if
States
those
is not
discounts
perfect.
lowered
But if we
prices
cherry
for the
pick
patient who bought the
from
drug.
other countries,
There are
we have
reports
to
that
do a
patients
more
paid
thorough
cash
investigation to
when
see is there a
the
balance
intermediary took the
Now
full
let's
price,
return to prescriptions.
even though 340B
Canadians pay
should
more
have
less
lowered
than
it.
we do.
That
Let's
is a
figure out
serious
why.
investigation
But
being
let's also
conducted by
point
this
out that
side of
public
the
health
dais
insurance in Canada
that the
only
other
covers
side of the
21%
dais is not
of
interested
newly
in
developed
participating
drugs.
in. That
Now,
is an
maybe that's a
understanding
trade-off.
of an ecosystem.
But I can tell you, you
I
tell an
understand.
American that they can't have access to a life-saving
There's no
court-
one more
a
eloquent
life-saving
than Chair
drug,
Sanders
they're
on
going to see you
Medicare
in
for
court.
All.
And
they're
we
going
can
to
sue,
sue,
and
and
they're
they're
going
going
to
to
say,
say,
I
I want
want
that
that other
access.
countries are doing something
The
better.
UK only covers
I can cherry pick the
48% of
opposite.
newly available drugs.
Canada is struggling, just to
Americans
show you
just
that there's
would
a
not
complexity
tolerate
here. Let me just take an example.
It's fair to say that
Canada
Ms.
is struggling with
Declazo,
specialty care.
or those
In May of
radiation
last
treatment
year, the
patients,
Canadian government
or
began
those
to
not
send
getting the newly
4,800
developed
Canadians
life-saving
from
drugs
British
to Columbia
Columbia
to
might
Washington
die
State
in
to,
those
quote,
countries
ensure
that don't
people
have
have
access
faster
to the same
access to
treatments
life-saving
as do
radiation
we
treatment
in the U.S.
End quote. They can afford
These are
their
serious
system
questions.
because we're right
One more
next door.
time, I'm a doc.
Relatedly,
I am
to
aware
this
of
hearing
this.
and to that,
But we need
Allison
to fully consider
consider
a
all
Canadian
these
woman
issues,
paid for her own
and then
treatment
maybe
in the
bring you in
United
at the
States
end.
after
But
the
we'll bring
Provincial
in
Health
with a
Authority in British
context which is
Columbia
complete,
as
denied her
opposed
access to
isolating.
life-saving chemotherapy.
As I said at the start, it would be best if this were a genuine
Canada
exercise.
had a lower cost
I am
drug
so
so they
willing
didn't
to
carry
do
the
the work on this,
chemotherapy.
as are my
So
colleagues.
she paid for it out of
We've
pocket
shown that
in the United States so she could
willingness
have
on work on
life-saving
PBM reforms
chemotherapy.
and generic drugs.
The United States is
Um,
not perfect. But if we cherry pick,
and
even though the chair and I got
from
off to
other
a rocky
countries,
start, we did some
we
pretty
have
good
to
work
do
on
a
that,
more
Mr. Chair.
thorough investigation.
I
to
think
see
we got
is there
some
a
good
balance there.
bipartisan
let's
legislation.
return
So
to
this committee,
prescriptions.
I agree with you,
Canadians
can
pay
accomplish
more,
that.
less than we do.
But I don't
Let's
want
figure
the
out
committee
why.
to devolve into a
Well, let's
CEO
also
whack-a-mole
point out that public health
ends up
insurance in
with no
Canada
serious
only covers
legislation as a
21% of newly developed
Further
drugs.
proof.
Now, of
Maybe
what I
that's a
consider
trade-off.
the unserious
But I
and
can
cynical
tell you,
nature
you
of
tell
this
an
hearing
American that
is
they
that
can't
the
have access
minority
to a
asked the
life-saving
chair to
court-
have a
a
witness on the
life-saving drug,
panel
they're going to
that
sue
could
you in
actually
court.
explore some of these
They're
issues
going to
side
sue,
by
and they're
side
going to
these
say, I want that
CEOs.
access.
That was turned
The
down.
UK only covers 48%
We wanted an academic
newly
expert in
available
drug
drugs.
pricing who could provide unbiased and
Americans just would
substantive
not
input to the
tolerate
issues at hand.
It's fair to
Our
say
witness
that
was not
Ms.
allowed.
Decluseau, he'll be on the next.
Are those
but
radiation
the way this
treatment
works
patients?
is this
Are
gets
those
all
not getting the
publicity,
newly developed
and the next one gets
life-saving drugs
crickets.
as quickly?
And so we've not
might
had that
die
opportunity.
in those countries that don't have access to
And
the
I'll also
same
point out, we didn't
treatments
split
as
the
do
majority
we
and minority
in the
witnesses into
US.
different panels during several
These are
hearings
serious
which promoted
questions.
kind of
One more
labor
time,
union
I'm a doc.
issues.
I can
I
think
am
of no
aware of
reason
this.
to not
But
allow
we
our
need to
witness
fully
to be here
consider
now,
all these
except
issues,
perhaps
and then maybe
ruining
bring
the
you in at the end.
As I said at our
but we'll
last
bring in
markup,
with a context which is complete,
what ends
as
up being
opposed to
hollow messaging.
isolated.
As I said at the
Gives
start,
DC
it
a
would be
bad
best if this
reputation.
were a genuine exercise.
Folks want
I am
real
so
answers.
willing to do the work on
They
this,
want
as are
relief
my
from high
colleagues.
prices.
We've
It
shown
is in
that-
part of what we're
that
going to hear
willingness
today,
on work on
but it will
PBM
be
reforms and
separated from
generic
a
drugs.
context
That would have made
Um,
it a lot more.
And even though
productive.
the chair and I got off to
If
a
you're
rocky
telling
start, we did
voters
some
you're
pretty
gonna
good
do
work on that,
something
Mr. Chair.
when you know
I think
at
we've
the
got some
get-go
good bipartisan
you'll have no
legislation. So
legislative
this committee,
solution
I agree with
which
you, can accomplish that.
emerges. And that's
but
why
I don't want
folks
the
don't.
committee to devolve into a CEO
So,
whack-a-mole. Ends up
if we're
with
just
no
looking for a
serious
social media
legislation as
clip,
a
then I
result.
suppose we've accomplished
Further
something.
proof, but let's make a difference for the people
Of
who
what
we
I
represent.
consider the
For
unserious
those
and
patients
cynical
in
nature of this
hospitals where I
hearing
once
is that
treated,
the
who
minority
otherwise
asked the
would not
chair
have
to have a
access to
witness
care.
on the panel
We have the ability
that
to
could
craft
actually
meaningful
explore some of these
legislation.
issues
Let's do
side
it.
by side
With
these
that, I yield.
CEOs.
Thank
That
you, Senator
was
Cassidy.
turned down.
Our
We
first
wanted an
witness will
academic
be
expert in
Joaquin
drug pricing who
Duato,
could provide unbiased and
Chairman and
substantive
CEO
input to the issues at hand.
of Johnson &
Our
Johnson.
witness was not
Mr.
allowed.
Duato has served
He'll be
as
on the
Johnson
next,
& Johnson's
but the
chairman
way this works
since
is this gets all the
2023 and Chief
publicity,
Executive
and the next
Officer
one gets crickets.
since 2022.
And so we've not had that
Mr. Duato,
opportunity.
thanks very much for being with us.
And I'll also point
Chairman
out, we didn't split
Sanders,
the majority
Ranking
and
Member
minority
Cassidy,
witnesses
and
into
members
different
of the
panels
committee,
during
thank you
several
for the
hearings which
opportunity
promoted
to
kind
be
of
here
labor
today.
union issues.
Johnson &
I can
Johnson
think
has
of no
collaborated
reason
with
to
this
not
committee
allow
over
our
several
witness to be here
decades
now,
to advance healthcare solutions for
except perhaps
patients,
ruining
including
the
on
outcomes.
diversity on clinical trials,
As I said at our last
nursing and
markup,
healthcare workforce, pandemic
what ends up
preparation,
being hollow
mental health,
messaging
and regulatory pathways for
DC a
novel
bad
cell
reputation.
and gene therapies. I
Folks
applaud
want
this
real
committee for your
answers.
commitment to
They want
such
relief
critical
from high
priorities.
prices.
I
It
have
is in
been with
part
J&J for
what we're
more
gonna
than
hear today,
35 years
but
and
it will
have
be
held roles
separated
in
from a
Europe
context
and in the
that would have
US.
made it a
I
lot
understand the global challenges and
productive.
complexities of
If you're
healthcare
telling
innovation
voters
and
you're gonna
delivery.
do something
And today, I look forward
when you
to
know at the
discussing
get-go
our approach to
you'll have
pricing
no
and the work we do
legislative
to advance
solution which
healthcare for
emerges.
all Americans.
And that's why folks don't.
Fundamentally, our decision-making is guided
if
by
we're
the
just looking
values
for a
set forth
social
on
media
our
clip,
credo,
then I suppose
which
we've
states
accomplished
that our
something.
first
But let's make a
responsibility
difference for the people
is
whom
to
we
the
represent.
patients.
For those
Our
patients
drug
in
pricing
hospitals where I
decisions
once
reflect
treated,
our
who
commitment
otherwise would not
to
have
bringing
access to
forward
care.
innovative
We have the
medicines for
ability to
patients
craft
today
meaningful
and for
legislation.
patients
Let's do it.
tomorrow.
With that, I yield.
First, our
Thank you,
prices
Senator
are
Cassidy.
based on the value our
Our first
medicines
witness
bring
will
to
be
patients,
Joaquin
the
Duato,
healthcare system, and society.
Chairman and CEO
We take into
of
consideration that our
Johnson &
medicines
Johnson.
improve
Mr. Duato has
patients'
served
quality
as
of life
Johnson & Johnson's
and
chairman
survival rates,
since
while often
2023 and Chief
reducing
Executive
healthcare
Officer
costs. And
since
for context, in
2022.
2022,
Mr. Duato,
the
thanks very much for
average
being
net
with us.
price of our medicines declined
Chairman
for the sixth
Sanders,
year in a row
Ranking Member
by
Cassidy, and
3.5
members of the
percentage
committee,
points.
thank you for
Over
the
those 6
opportunity
years,
to be here
prices
today.
have declined by
Johnson &
almost
Johnson
20%.
has collaborated with this
and the
committee
real
over several
inflation-adjusted
decades
price
to advance
decline
healthcare
was
solutions
more
for patients,
than 40%.
including on diversity on clinical
Second,
trials,
we price
nursing
our
and
medicines
healthcare
to support
workforce,
patient
pandemic
access.
preparation,
In 2022
mental
alone,
health,
we paid
and regulatory
$39
pathways
billion
for novel
in
cell
rebate
and
discounts
gene
and
therapies.
fees,
I
almost
applaud this committee for
60%
your
of
commitment
the
to
average
such
list price
critical
of our
priorities.
drugs.
I have been with J&J for more than 35
benefit
years
from
and have
these
held roles
substantial
in
cost
Europe
savings.
and in the
We
US.
also support patient
I understand the
affordability
global
and access
challenges and
by
complexities
funding
of healthcare
patient
innovation
assistance
and
programs.
delivery.
In
And today, I look
these
forward to
programs
discussing
helped
our
more than
approach to
1
pricing
billion
and the work we
1
do to
million
advance
underinsured
healthcare
patients.
for all
And we
Americans.
donated $3.8
Fundamentally,
billion
our
in
decision-making
free
is
medicines
guided by the values set forth on our credo, which states that our first responsibility we price our medicines to meet our drug pricing decisions, reflect our commitment to bringing forward innovative medicines for patients today and for patients tomorrow. Is massive. First, our prices are based on the value our medicines bring to patients is more the healthcare system and society. However, take into consideration that our medicines improve patients' quality of life do not survival rates, while often reducing healthcare costs. R&D investment for context, in 2022, the average net price of our medicines declined for the 6th year in a row by 3.5%. The tremendous investment required over those 6 years, prices have declined by almost 20%, not increased significantly real inflation adjusted price of total overall more healthcare costs. 40%. In fact, drug spending in the U.S. price our medicines to support patient access. In slightly below the average, we pay the rest $39 billion in rebate, total discounts and fees. Healthcare spending almost 60% than other developed nations. This spending allows American patients to benefit from this substantial cost savings. We also support patient affordability and access by the burdensome patient obligations imposed in 2022. These programs help to meet more than 1 billion access and 1 million underinsured patients. The GAO found that patient copay obligations often exceed payer patients for their drugs. No insurance. This means that patients sometimes we price our medicines to meet our commitment to innovate clearly and develop this part of the system is not working as intended. The investment we support proposals to reconcile this inequity and to ensure patient access through clinical trials. As outlined in my testimony, is more Congress should stop middlemen from taking for themselves more than 90% that pharmaceutical companies in trials for patients do not make it. And finally, it is essential that we reject our R&D price caps and controls that exist in other countries which stand innovation. Since 2016. Our nation's robust biopharmaceutical industry, the tremendous investment required by policy choices that prioritize costs in the U.S. earlier patient access increased significantly as an percentage of investment in medical healthcare costs. Thank you for the bipartisan efforts of this committee and for the opportunity to engage in today's discussion. I look forward to your questions. While total U.S. healthcare spending is higher than other developed nations, this spending allows American patients to receive cutting-edge healthcare earlier than any other country in the world. However, the burdensome copay obligations imposed in the U.S. are hard for patients to meet and undermine access and health equity.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today.
Remarkably,
as the CEO of Merck, I'm here to offer concrete policy suggestions to address the barriers American patients may encounter as they attempt to access our medicines
sometimes
and
pay
the current
more for
pricing
their
system,
medicines
while also ensuring Merck may discover and develop
this
the next
part of the
generation
system
of life-saving
is not
medicines
working
and
as
vaccines.
intended.
Based in Rahway, New Jersey, our
to
company
reconcile
is one
this
of the world's
inequity
most
and
advanced,
to ensure patient
research-intensive
access. As
biopharmaceutical
outlined in my
companies,
testimony,
an
Congress
organization
should
at the
stop middlemen
forefront of
from
providing
taking
innovative
for
health
themselves
solutions
the
that
assistance
advance the
that
prevention and
pharmaceutical
treatment of
companies
disease in
intend
people
for
and
patients.
animals.
And
I've
finally,
worked in the healthcare
it is
industry for the
essential that we
entirety of my
reject
34-year
the price
career.
caps and
I
controls
joined
that
Merck
exist
10 years
in
ago
other
in large
countries
measure because
which
the company
stand
was on the
innovation.
precipice of its
Our
first approval
nation's
for
robust
a
biopharmaceutical
revolutionary
industry
oncology treatment.
was created by
At the
policy
time,
choices that
people close to me
prioritize
were battling
earlier
cancer,
patient access
and
to breakthrough
unfortunately,
medicines
they were not able
and
to benefit
incentivize
from this amazing
investment
discovery.
in medical innovation.
Following that first
Thank you
approval,
for the
Merck has
bipartisan
demonstrated
efforts of
the
this
efficacy
committee
of Keytruda
and
in
for the
39
opportunity to
indications
engage
and reached
in today's
nearly 2 million
discussion.
patients
I look
with
forward
many of the
to
most
your
widespread
questions.
cancers
Thank
afflicting
you very much,
Americans.
Mr. Duato. Our next witness
The impact
will
of
be Robert
Keytruda and
Davis,
other recent advances
Chairman and
is difficult to
CEO of Merck.
overstate.
Mr. Davis has
With
served
a
as
recent
Merck's
American
chairman
Cancer
since
Society
December
report finding
2022
that
and
cancer
CEO
mortality in the United
since
States
2021.
has fallen 33%
Thank you very
from
much, Mr. Davis, for being
1991
here.
to 2021.
Chairman Sanders,
representing an
Ranking
estimated
Member
4
Cassidy,
million
and members of
Americans
the committee.
whose deaths
Thank
have
you
been
for the
averted.
opportunity to
And
be
our
here
work
with you today.
continues. As we advance
As the
Keytruda
CEO of
into
Merck,
even
I'm
more
here to
tumor
offer
types
concrete
and earlier
policy
stages of
suggestions
cancer
to address the barriers
Remarkable
American
progress
patients
like
may
this does not
encounter
come cheaply.
as they attempt
For
to
Keytruda
access
alone,
our
between
medicines
2011
and the current pricing
and
system
2023,
will also
Merck
ensure
has
Merck
invested
may discover
$46
and
billion
develop
in development.
the next generation
and we
of
expect to
life-saving
invest
medicines
another
and
$18
vaccines.
billion into
Based
the
in Rahway,
2030s.
New Jersey, our company
And
is one of the
oncology
world's
is just
most
one of
advanced
Merck's many areas of
research-intensive biopharmaceutical
Right now,
companies.
we have nearly
An
20,000
organization at the
researchers
forefront
seeking
of
breakthrough
providing
treatments
innovative
for
health
immune
solutions
disorders
that advance
infectious
the prevention and
diseases,
treatment of
Alzheimer's,
disease in
and
people
other
and
ailments
animals.
threatening the health of
I've
millions
worked
of
in the
people.
healthcare industry for
To
the
advance
entirety
this
of my
critical
34-year
work,
career.
we've invested more than
I joined Merck 10 years
$159
ago
billion
in large
R&D
measure because the
since
company was on the
2010,
precipice
including
of its
$30
first
billion
approval for
in
Keytruda,
2023 alone,
a revolutionary oncology
and have invested
treatment.
more than $10 billion in
At the
capital.
time, people close to me were battling cancer.
Both investments
And
in
unfortunately,
manufacturing
they were
and
not
R&D
able to benefit
over the
from
last
this
5
amazing
years in the
discovery.
United States, creating
Following
more
that first
jobs
approval,
for Americans.
Merck has demonstrated
We do
the
not
efficacy
hesitate
of
to make these
Keytruda in
investments
39 indications
because they are necessary
and reached
to further
nearly
Merck's
2 million
mission to serve
patients,
patients.
with many of the most
At the same
widespread
time,
cancers
many Americans are
afflicting
struggling
Americans,
to afford health care.
The
Including
impact of
prescription
Keytruda
medicines,
and other
and we're
recent
eager
advances is
to
to
find
find solutions
solutions
to these access and affordability
With a recent
challenges.
American Cancer Society
That's why
report
we
finding
supported
that changes
cancer
to the
mortality
Medicare
in the
Part D
United
program
States
to
has
create an
fallen
out-of-pocket
33%
cap that
from
allow
1991
beneficiaries to
to
pay their costs over
2021.
time.
representing an estimated 4 million U.S. pricing data, including the average rebates and discounts we provide. As we advance to treat into even more tumor types, a patient assistance program for those who remarkable progress cannot afford medications they need. For Keytruda alone, between 5 years, this program has helped nearly 800,000 Merck has invested $46 million free of charge, and we expect an estimated value of $18 billion into the 2030s. But the reality is that Merck's efforts alone many areas of discovery. They do not and cannot. We have nearly 20,000 underlying systemic and breakthrough treatments for immune disorders underpinning our system. Infectious diseases, as more power and control has been other ailments threatening the health of the ever smaller number of vertically consolidated players. We've invested more than $159 million in R&D. In contracting since 2010, Merck continues to experience $30 billion increasing pressure in 2023 to provide even larger discounts and have invested more than $10 billion in capital, and net price continues to grow. In the form of and patients both investments in manufacturing and R&D discounts we provide. Over the last 5 years, these problems could be addressed, creating more jobs other actors' revenue streams were delinked. We do not hesitate to make these investments, thereby removing because they are necessary to further favor highly served patients. This would also ensure that less value in the struggling to afford these middlemen, including not create these medicines, and we're eager to not discover or develop or manufacture access and affordability. In addition, the substantial savings that's why we supported changes to Medicare Part D program should be required to create an out-of-pocket cap patients that allow beneficiaries to pay their out-of-pocket costs. We firmly believe that reforms like pricing data will create a drug pricing average rebates and discounts incentivizes the discovery. In addition, we offer coupons and support, while at the same time ensuring patients can afford those who cannot afford the medications they need. Future treatment breakthroughs hinge on what we do now. We must hold on to a U.S. pharmaceutical market to obtain Merck products free of charge, competitive and with an estimated value one that encourages and rewards investment. One that drives the reality is that Merck's efforts alone are far from sufficient, and one that continues to deliver innovation and new treatment the underlying systemic and structural issues to pledge our support and cooperation in these efforts. As more power and control for your time concentrated consideration into the ever smaller number of vertically consolidated players.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Their negotiating
Davis.
strength has increased dramatically.
Chris Boerner,
in contracting
CEO
with them,
Bristol
Merck continues to
Dr.
experience
Boerner has
increasing
served as
pressure
CEO of Bristol
to provide
Squibb
even larger
since
discounts,
November
and the gap between list
2023.
and
Thanks for
net
being here,
price
Mr. Boerner.
continues to grow.
Chairman
Patients are
Sanders,
not benefiting
Ranking Member
from the
Cassidy,
steep
and
discounts
members
we
of the
provide.
committee,
These
thank you for
problems
having me
could
here
be
today.
addressed if other actors'
I'm proud to be
revenue streams were
representing
delinked
Bristol Myers
from list
Squibb,
prices,
an American
thereby
company
removing
that is
incentives for the
committed
system
to
to favor
transforming
high-list
patients'
prices.
lives through science.
This would also ensure that less
I've
value in
spent
the
more than
system
20
flows to these
years in
middlemen
this industry,
who do
the
not
majority
create these medicines,
in smaller,
who do not discover or
science-driven
develop or
biotechnology
manufacture them.
companies.
In addition,
I
the
joined
substantial
BMS
savings provided by
because
Merck
we have
and
a
other
similar focus
manufacturers
on driving
should be required to
leading-edge
be passed through
scientific
to patients
innovation,
to
and
lower
our scale
their out-of-pocket costs.
allows us to bring more
We
medicines
firmly believe that
to more
reforms like
patients
these
faster.
will create a drug pricing system
help
that
illustrate the type
incentivizes
of
the
work that
discovery
we've
of
been
new
doing
and
for more
important
than
medicines,
150
while at the
years
same
at
time
BMS.
ensuring patients
Let me
can afford
provide two
those
illustrations
life-saving
of
medicines
how
and
our
innovations.
innovative medicines have
Future
helped
treatment
patients
breakthroughs hinge on
and
what we do
provided
now.
tangible
We
benefits
must
to
hold on
society.
to a U.S. pharmaceutical
Our
market
work in
that is free,
HIV/AIDS
competitive, and
transformed this
predictable,
disease
one that
from a death
encourages and
sentence
rewards investment,
into a chronic
one that
condition.
drives the American economy and
Similarly,
creates jobs,
our
and one
pioneering
that continues to deliver
immuno-oncology
innovation
treatments, Opdivo
and new
Yervoy,
treatment discoveries.
harness
I'm here
the
today
body's immune
to pledge
system
our
to fight
support and
cancer
cooperation in these
and
efforts.
have
Thank
contributed
you for your time and
significantly
your
to
consideration
improved
of these important
outcomes
perspectives.
across a number of tumors.
Thank you very much,
including
Mr. Davis.
metastatic
Our third
melanoma,
witness will be Chris
where the
Boerner,
combination of
CEO
these two
Bristol Myers
medicines
Squibb.
has
Dr. Boerner
changed the
has
median
served as
life
CEO of
expectancy
Bristol
from
Myers
less
Squibb
than 9
since
months
November
to over
2023.
6
Thanks for being here,
years.
Mr. Boerner.
proud Chairman that our Sanders, record of Ranking innovation Member continues Cassidy, today. and members
We've
of the
invested
committee,
more than
thank you for having me here today.
in research and development.
I'm
over
proud
the
to
past
be
decade.
representing Bristol Myers
This has
Squibb,
resulted
an American
in truly
company
novel and
that is committed to
medicines,
transforming
like
patients'
Camzyos
lives
in
through
cardiovascular
science.
disease.
I've
our
spent
cell
more than
therapy
20 years in this
platform in
industry,
cancer,
the majority
and we are
in
working
smaller,
toward bringing
science-driven
to patients
biotechnology
the first
companies.
medicine for the treatment of
I joined
schizophrenia
BMS
in 30 years.
because we have a similar focus
These
on
medicines
driving
are but a few
leading-edge
examples of the
scientific
innovation that results
and our
from
scale
an American healthcare
allows us
system
to bring more medicines
that not only
to more
accounts
patients
for the majority
faster.
of new medicines launched
To help
each
illustrate
year,
the type of work that we've been
but
doing
also
for
one
more
that
than
delivers those
150
medicines to
years
U.S.
at BMS,
patients
let me
faster
provide two
than anywhere else
illustrations
in the world
of how our
This
innovative
isn't by
medicines
chance.
have helped patients.
The United States has
provided
provided a healthcare
tangible
system that
benefits to society.
prioritizes patient
Our work in
and physician
HIV/AIDS
choice,
transformed
as
this
well as the
disease
broad and
from a
rapid
death sentence
availability of
into a
cutting-edge
chronic
medicines.
condition. Similarly,
This is in stark
our pioneering
contrast to many
immuno-oncology
systems
treatments
outside of the
Opdivo
United
and
States
Yervoy which while they may
harness
deliver
the
lower
body's immune
prices,
system to fight
carry
cancer,
and often
and
overlooked
have contributed
trade-off
significantly to
that
improved
patients often
outcomes
wait longer
across
for
a
new
number
medicines
of tumors
that are
including
sometimes
metastatic
never approved
melanoma,
or reimbursed.
where the combination
For example,
of these two
Canadian
medicines
patients have
has
access
changed
to
the median life
approximately
expectancy
half
from less than
of
9
the
months
medicines available
to
in the
over
United
6
States,
years.
and patients in other countries
I'm proud
face a
that our
similar
record of
reality.
innovation continues today. We've
Despite
invested more
its
than
benefits,
$65 billion
we know our
in
American
research
system
and
is far
development
from
over the
perfect.
past decade. Patients bear the
This
brunt
has
of a
resulted
complex U.S.
in
system
truly novel and
that results in
transformational
increasing
medicines,
healthcare
like
costs
Camzyos in
and a lack of
cardiovascular disease.
affordability. Our cell
We
therapy
have
platform
to
in
make the
cancer,
system work better
and
for
we are
them.
working toward bringing to patients,
After all,
the
innovation
first
that does
medicine
not
for
make
the
it to
treatment of
patients
schizophrenia
is no innovation
in 30
at all.
years. These medicines
While prescription medicines account
examples
for
of
a
the
relatively
innovation
small
that
portion
results
of
from
overall
American
healthcare
spending,
spending,
we believe we have an
that not
important
only
role to
accounts
play
for the majority
in
of new
prioritizing the
medicines
development
launched
of medicines
each
that will bring savings,
but also one that
to the
delivers
healthcare
those
system, and
medicines
as an
to
industry,
U.S. patients
we should
faster
set a higher bar
than
for
anywhere
doing
else
just
in the
that.
world.
Similarly,
This isn't by chance.
we have a role to play
The
in
United
addressing
States has built a
affordability
healthcare system
and
that
stand ready to partner
prioritizes
with Congress
patient
and
and
others to
physician
address
choice,
this issue,
as well as
for
the
patients
broad
in a
and
holistic
rapid
manner.
availability of cutting-edge
But in developing
medicines.
those solutions, we
This
should
is in
not
stark
abandon our
contrast
system for
to
one
many
that
systems
denies
outside
US
of the United
patients
States,
the broad
which, while
and
they
rapid
may deliver
access
lower
to
prices,
vital medicines
carry
that they
an
appreciate
often overlooked
today.
trade-off.
We support
That
policies
patients
that
often
lower patient
wait
out-of-pocket
longer for new
costs
medicines
without
that
ultimately
are sometimes
harming
never
innovation.
approved or reimbursed.
For
The
example,
need to strike this balance
Canadian
should not
patients have
be
access
abstract.
to approximately
I expect
half
many
of
the
us in this
medicines
room
available
have
in
lost
the
a
United
loved one to
States
cancer, and patients
another
in other
devastating
countries
disease.
face a similar reality. In
My
my case, it was one of my best
Despite
friends,
its benefits,
and it happened as
we
he
know
awaited
our
a
American
medicine
system is far
that
from
I believe
perfect.
could have saved his life. Patients bear the brunt of a complex
This is an
US
almost
system
daily reminder
that
to
results
me
in increasing healthcare
that making
costs
patients wait
and a lack of
for weeks,
affordability. Months,
we have
or years
to make the
can
system
be the difference
work better
between
for
life
them.
and death. After all, innovation that does
Thank
not
you
make
again
it to
for having me
patients
here
is
today
no innovation. On
at
behalf
all.
of BMS and the
While
more than
prescription medicines
30,000
account for a
employees
relatively
who
small
share my
portion
passion for
of overall
delivering new
healthcare
medicines for
spending, we
patients,
believe we have an
I look forward to
important
answering
role
your
to play
in prioritizing
Boerner,
the
thank you,
development of
very
medicines that
much.
will bring savings to the healthcare
Before I,
system, and as an
begin the
industry,
first round of
we should set a
questions,
higher bar for doing just
let me
that.
remind our witnesses
Similarly, we have a role
that
to
while the
play in
Health
addressing
Committee does not
affordability
swear in
and stand
witnesses
ready
as
to
a general
partner with
rule,
Congress
Federal
and
law
others to
at
address
18
this
U.S. Code
issue
section
for patients in a holistic
1001
manner.
prohibits knowingly
But in
and willingly
developing
making
those
any fraudulent
solutions, we
statement
should not
to the
abandon
Senate
our
regardless
system
of
for
whether a
one that
person
denies
is
U.S.
under oath.
patients the broad
I
and
would
rapid
also
access
say,
to
in
vital
response
medicines
to
that they
many of
appreciate
your
today.
testimonies,
We support
are aware
policies that lower
of
patient
the many
out-of-pocket costs
important
without
life-saving
ultimately
drugs that
harming
your companies
innovation.
have produced, and that's
The
extraordinarily
need to
important.
strike this
I
balance
think,
should
as
not
all
be
of you know,
abstract.
those drugs
I expect
mean
many
nothing
of us
to
in this
anybody
room have lost
who
a loved
cannot
one to
afford it.
cancer or
And
another
that's what we're
devastating
dealing
disease.
with today, that millions
In
and
my
millions
case,
of our
it was
people
one of my
cannot
best
afford the
friends,
outrageously high
and
cost
it happened as he
of
awaited a
prescription
medicine
drugs
that
in
I
this
believe
country.
could have saved his life.
Now, my time and
This
the
is
time
an
of
almost
all of
daily
the members
reminder
is
to
limited.
me
So we're going
that
to
making
just,
patients wait
I'm going to ask.
for weeks, months, or years can be the difference between
So
life
my time is
and
limited.
death.
So I'm going to start
Thank
by
you again
asking
for
all
having
of
me
you
here today
a number
on
of
behalf of
questions, and
BMS
I would appreciate it
and the
if you
more
could
than
respond,
30,000
with
employees
yes
who
or
share
no
my passion
answer.
for delivering new medicines for patients.
It
I look
turns
forward to
out
answering your questions.
that in our dysfunctional, Boerner, thank you, an extraordinarily expensive healthcare system, hundreds of thousands of Americans have gone to GoFundMe let me remind in order to raise money to pay for their while the Health Committee does not swear in for their prescription drugs. General rule, federal law let me ask Mr. Davis Code section 1001 have you ever prohibits knowingly and willingly GoFundMe any fraudulent for your cancer drug to the Senate regardless of whether a person is under oath? We also say staff have in response to we have found of your over 500 stories. We are aware of people trying to raise funds important to pay for their life-saving drugs that your companies have produced. One of those stories is extraordinarily named Rebecca, a school lunch lady, as all of you know, with those kids who died of cancer after setting up a GoFundMe page because she could not afford what we're dealing with today. That millions Rebecca had raised $4,000 on her GoFundMe page, prescription drugs, but said the cost of Keytruda and her cancer treatment. My time, 25,000. All of the members is limited every 3 weeks. I'm going to ask Mr. Davis, and please, yes or no. Is it true that the list price my time is limited is $191,000 a year in all of you?
That is close to being true, yes.
Appreciate it if you could respond. Is it true that that same exact drug can be purchased in Canada for $112,000 a year that $44,000 a year in Japan? An extraordinarily expensive healthcare system. Mr. Davis, even though the price of Keytruda have gone to GoFundMe in order to raise money in Japan for their healthcare needs in the United States and for their prescription drugs, your company, let me ask Mr. Davis if I might, selling Keytruda, have you ever searched on GoFundMe for your cancer drug? So what I understand is you make a profit selling Keytruda in Japan for we have the price my staff have that you sell it for. We have found the United States over 500 stories of people trying to raise funds to lowering the price of Keytruda in the United States. One of those stories is a woman named Rebecca,
well, Senator,
school
I
lunch
think
lady from Nebraska,
first I acknowledge the prices in the United
died of
States
cancer after
are
setting
higher
up a
than they
GoFundMe
are in many of
page
the countries
because
you
she
said,
could not
and
afford
not
to
for all
pay
drugs, but for
Keytruda.
many drugs, and that's the
Rebecca
reality
had
we
raised
face.
$4,000.
But I think it's also important to point out that you get
but said
access
the cost
in the
of
United
Keytruda and
States
cancer treatment
faster
was
and more than anywhere in the world.
$25,000
We have
for
39
infusion
indications for
every
Keytruda
3
across 17
weeks.
tumor types in the United States.
Mr. Davis,
If you look
and
across
please,
Europe,
yes or no,
it's in the 20s.
is it true
If you look
that the
across
list
Japan,
price
it's in
of
that
Keytruda
number a little bit
is
less.
$191,000
there is
a year
a
in the
reason
United
why the
States?
prices are different. That is close to being true, careful because we are also seeing
Is it true
in those
that
markets
that same exact
that
drug
they are
can be
unwilling to
purchased in
support the
Canada
innovation, and
for
we are very hardly
$112,000 a year
working
and
hard to try to get them
$44,000 a year
to
in
understand the
Japan?
need to help it. Generally,
I
yes.
apologize for cutting off.
That's fine.
Mr. Davis, even though the price of Keytruda is one quarter, we all appreciate, of the price important drugs that you and other in Japan compared to the United States. No debate about that. I do want to point out your company, after all is said and done, and after all the money we spend on prescription drugs and healthcare in general, the life expectancy in Japan is 9 years. Make a profit selling Keytruda in the United States for one quarter of the price. Senator Cassidy talked about Canada. The life expectancy in Canada is 6 years longer than in the United States. Will you commit to lowering the expectancy in Portugal is 6 years longer? The life expectancy in the UK is
well, Senator, I think first I acknowledge the prices in the United States are higher than they are in many countries, question you said, and
Mr.
not
Davis.
for all drugs, but for many
As
drugs.
I understand it, you
that's
made
the reality
$52
we
million
face.
in total compensation.
But I think it's
in
also important to
2022.
point out that you get access
Will you
in the United
commit
States
to not
faster
accepting
and
a
more
single
than
dollar
anywhere in the
more in
world. We have
compensation
39 indications for
until there
Keytruda
is not a
across
single
17 tumor types in the United
GoFundMe
States.
page for
If you look across Europe,
Well, I can tell you
it's
at
in the
Merck,
20s.
we are very
If you look
much
across Japan,
sensitive
it's
to
in
what's
that
happening with
number a little
patients.
bit
That's
less.
why we
So
have
there is
very
a reason why
important
the prices
patient
are different,
assistance programs.
and
We
commented
need
on
to
the
be
fact that we
careful
have over
because we
800,000
are also
patients
seeing
benefiting in those markets
where we provide free
that they
drug
are unwilling
for those
to
who
support
can't
the
afford it,
innovation,
as well
we
as
are
other
very
assistance
hardly
programs that
we're
help
working
with
hard
copay
to
and
try to
others. So
get
we are
them
very committed
to understand the need
as a
to
company.
help it fund the
I
innovation.
apologize
to
for
do.
cutting
That's,
off.
that's fine.
That's
Try to
two
help
others, but I
alleviate
did want to
the
make this
challenges patients face that you're focusing on.
Again, we
and
all
that's my
appreciate
focus as the
breakthrough in
CEO.
important drugs that you and other companies have produced that save lives. No debate about that. Bristol Myers Squibb. But I do want to point out, Carolyn, that after all is said and done, and after all the money we spend on prescription drugs and healthcare in general, stop taking it. Life expectancy in Japan is 9 years. Longer than it is in the United States. Again, yes or no, please. Senator Cassidy talked about Canada. Life expectancy in Canada is 6 years longer a year in the United States. Life expectancy in Portugal is 6 years longer. At Yale University life expectancy in the UK that it costs just $18 to manufacture a year's supply of Eliquis, $7,100. Let me ask the last question. $1,800 to manufacture. As I understand it, is it true that the same exact drug, Eliquis, can be purchased in Canada for $900
Will you
a year?
commit
To
Senator,
not
that's
accepting
roughly
a
correct.
single dollar more in compensation. Let me ask you this.
Until there is not a
Even at
single
13% GoFundMe page
for Keytruda.
of the cost
Well, I
in
can
the
tell you at
United
Merck,
States,
we are very much sensitive
does
to what's
Bristol
happening with
Myers
patients.
make
That's why
a
we have
profit selling
very
Eliquis
important
for
patient assistance
$900 a
programs.
year
We commented on the
Canada?
fact that we have over 800,000
Senator, we do make
patients
a profit.
benefiting.
All right, so you're
where we
selling the
provide
product
free drug for those who can't
for
afford it, as well as other
13%
assistance programs
of
that
what
help with
in
copay
Canada,
and
of
others.
what
So
we
we
pay
are
in the
very
United
committed
States.
as a
And
company
obviously you sell
to
it there
doing
because
what
you
we
make
need
money.
to do to try to
Mr.
help
Boerner, will
alleviate
you
the
commit
challenges
today
patients face that you're
that
focusing
Bristol
on.
Myers
And
Squibb
that's
will
my
reduce
focus
the
as
list
the
price
CEO.
of Eliquis in the United States? Boerner? to the price that you charge in Canada where you make a profit. Carolyn from
Senator,
Florida
we can't make that
says
commitment
that she
primarily
cannot afford
because the
Eliquis,
prices in these two
so she will,
countries
quote,
have
"Stop
very
taking it,
different
though
systems
I need
that
it to prevent
prioritize
the
very
risk of
different
having a
things. In
stroke,"
Canada, medicines are
Mr.
generally
Boerner,
made less available,
again, yes
and
or
it
no,
takes
please.
oftentimes
The list
considerably
price of
longer
Eliquis
for those
is
medicines to be available.
$7,100 a year in
On
the
average,
United States.
roughly
I apologize. I do apologize. Dr. Melissa Barber, an expert at Yale University, has estimated that it costs just $18 to manufacture a year's supply. Mr. Boerner, your company spent over $12 billion on stock buybacks in 2022. Is it true
Given that
that the
reality,
same exact
can you
drug,
tell Carolyn,
can be purchased
why you
in
can't
Canada
lower the price of
for
Eliquis?
$900 a year?
Senator, that's
First,
roughly
Senator,
correct. Let me say no patient
let me ask
should
you
have
this.
to go through the types
Even
of
at
choices that the patient
13%
you just described go
of the
through.
cost in
It
the
is our
United
commitment
States,
to continue to bring down the price
does
of
Bristol
medicines
Myers
in the
make a
U.S.
profit
And I would love the
selling
opportunity
Eliquis
to bring down
for
the price of
$900
Eliquis in
a
the
year
U.S. Our
in
net
Canada?
prices, what we Senator, we do make a profit.
All right, so
Have
you're
actually
selling
over
the
the
product
last 5 years declined.
for 13%
At that same time, the
of
list
what in
prices
Canada,
have
of what we
increased.
pay in the
Why
United
is
States.
that?
And
Because of the
obviously you sell it
complexity
there
of this
because you make
system
money.
and the
So, Mr.
billions
Boerner,
of
will you
dollars
commit
in rebates
today
that we have
that
provided to
Bristol Myers
intermediaries
Squibb
that
will
unfortunately
reduce the
do
list
not
price
go
of
to
Eliquis
lowering
in
the
the United
price
States
of medicines like the
to
patient
the
you just
price
described.
again,
that
I
you
charge in
apologize. I wanna
Canada
get
where you
very
make a
briefly,
profit? To Mr.
Senator, we
Duato,
can't make
who's
that
with Johnson &
commitment
Johnson.
primarily because the prices in these two countries
Mr.
have very
Duato,
different
is it
systems
true
that
that the list
prioritize
price
very
of
different things.
Stelara
In Canada,
is $79,000
medicines
a
are
year in the
generally
US?
made less available,
that roughly
and
right?
it takes
It's
oftentimes
roughly right, but
considerably
it's also
longer
true that
for those
the
medicines to
average
be
discount of
available.
Stelara
On
in the
average,
US is
I
roughly
apologize. I
70%.
do apologize.
So it's
All
just-
of that, and we've dealt with life
Life
expectancy, and we're
expectancy
going to
in
get to that,
Canada
I'm
is
sure,
6
this,
years longer
this
than it is
morning.
in the United States.
Is it true that while charging $79,000 in the United States, Mr. Boerner, your company spent over $12 billion on stock buybacks for 2022?
I don't know
Given
the
that reality,
price in
can
Spain.
you tell
I
Carolyn
can tell you that
why you
the
can't lower the price of
average
Eliquis?
discount in the US is 70%.
First,
so
Senator, let
the
me
price
say
that you
no
quote is
patient
30%
should have
of
to
that.
go through the types of choices that the patient
Mr.
you
Duato,
just
is
described
it
go
true
through.
that it costs
It is
less
our
than
commitment
$15
to
a year to
continue to bring down the
manufacture
price of
Stelara?
medicines in the
The
U.S.,
manufacturing
and I would
cost is
love the
only a
opportunity to
component
bring down the price
that
of
goes
Eliquis
into
in the
our
U.S.
pricing.
Our net
When we
prices, what
price
we
our medicines,
are
we're looking at the
compensated,
value that the
have actually
medicine
over the
brings
last
to the
5
healthcare
years
system.
declined.
Our ability
At that
to
same
continue to invest
time,
in research,
the list
we invested
prices have
$15 billion
increased. Why
last
is that?
year. And
Because
also,
of the complexity
we
of
look at
this
affordability.
system and
The
the
average
billions of
copay,
dollars
if
in
they use our
rebates
copay assistance
that we have
programs in the
provided
US
to
for a
intermediaries that
patient using
unfortunately do
Stelara
not go
is
to
$10
lowering the
to
price of
$15
medicines like the
per
patient you
month.
just
I
described.
apologize.
Again,
I'm over
I
my time.
apologize.
I'm going to
I
give
wanna
Senator
get very
Cassidy
briefly,
the same time with
that,
Mr. Duato, who's with Johnson &
Thank you all.
Johnson.
Mr. Duato,
Mr. Duato, is it true that the list price of
2021,
Stelara is $79,000 a year in the U.S.?
Janssen
Is that roughly right?
constructed
It's roughly
an
right, but it's also
exclusionary
true
contract
that
with their
the
PBMs to
average
protect
discount of
Remicade,
Stelara in
their
the
black
US
box
is
drug. A
70%.
treatment for ulcerative
So
colitis.
all of
very
that,
familiar with
we've
it, a
dealt
wonderful
with
drug,
PBMs, and we're
changed
going to
the
get to
outcome
that,
for
I'm
people
sure, in
with
this
UC.
morning.
But
Is
this
it true that while
deal
charging
protected,
$79,000 in the United States,
Remicade from competition by a
that
new
the exact same
biosimilar,
product
Inflectra,
is sold in
which was
Spain for
launched at a
$18,000?
16% lower cost
I
than
don't know the
Remicade.
price
Now,
in
I
Spain.
understand this is
I can tell you that the
confidential
average
in
discount
terms of the settlement
in the US
with the
is
courts.
70%. So
But,
the
and by
price
the way,
that
let me
you
just
quote
say,
is
this involves
30%
a
of
rebate
that.
wall. So for the sake of those
Mr.
who are
Duato,
watching, a
is it
rebate wall
true that
is
it
an
costs less than
anti-competitive
$15
tool
a year
which
to
can be used
manufacture
to
Stelara?
restrict a
The
competitor's entry
manufacturing
into a
cost is
formulary.
only a
A
component
manufacturer would
that
offer
goes
more
into our
significant
pricing.
rebates to a health
When we
plan
price
through a
our
PBM
medicines, we're
for
looking
access
at
to
the
the
value that the
formulary
medicine brings to the
contingent upon the
healthcare system,
PBM blocking a
our ability to
biosimilar.
continue to
Now,
invest
we
in
have been
research. We
discussing
invested
the
$15
promise of
billion last
biosimilars
year.
to lower the cost
And also, we
in
look
a
at affordability.
market-oriented,
The
competitive
average
way.
copay,
So if we're not
they
going to
use
have
our
government
copay assistance
regulation,
programs
we've
in the
got to
US
have a
for a
market
patient using Stelara
situation,
is $10
and the market
to
would be a biosimilar, but this sort of
per month.
arrangement
I apologize.
blocks the
I'm over my
biosimilar
time. I'm going to
infringement.
give Senator Cassidy
So,
the same time that I had.
So, in the full support of a market-oriented
Mr. Duato,
approach, do any of your current contracts employ rebate walls to prevent lower-cost biosimilars from formulary access.
Janssen
We welcome
constructed
biosimilars and
an
generics.
exclusionary
We
contract
believe
with
it's
their
an integral
PBMs to
part of the
protect
system.
Remicade,
As
their
a matter of fact, in the
blockbuster
US,
drug. A treatment for
90%
ulcerative
of the
colitis, very familiar
prescriptions
with it, a wonderful
are
drug,
biosimilars and
changed the
generics,
outcome
and
for
that's
people
one of the
with
reasons
UC.
pharmaceutical
But this
expenses have remained
deal
flat
protected
or increased single digit during
Remicade
the
from
last
competition by a new biosimilar
years.
Inflectra,
We believe that biosimilars
which was
and generics
launched
foster patient access, and we care deeply about that.
Now, I understand this is, but let me ask, because my specific question, do any of your current contracts employ and by the way, let me just say, this involves a rebate wall. So for the sake of those who are watching, a rebate wall is an anti-competitive tool which can be used. Now, I think at least two of you, maybe all three of you are working on gene therapy. I've been concerned that we don't really know how we're going to price them through a PBM. And I think one of the concerns is that there will not be a market force to lower the cost of initial gene therapy. Now, we have been discussing the promise of biosimilars. It's amazing the lifetime of in a market-oriented, competitive way. So if we're not going to have government regulation, we've got to have a market. But I was speaking to a medical director of and the market would be a biosimilar, but this sort of arrangement and he was telling me that the pharmaceutical costs related to Medicaid is now 35% in the full support of a market-oriented approach. Do any of your current contracts employ rebate walls to prevent lower-cost biosimilars from formulary access? I don't know how it's going to be priced, but my state has a lot of sick.
Biosimilars and generics.
I don't know how my state's going to be able to afford,
an integral part of the
given
system.
it to everybody
As a matter of fact, in the U.S., 90% of the prescriptions
very concisely,
are biosimilars
how are we going
and generics,
to
and that's one of the reasons
show restraint
pharmaceutical
on the
expenses
price of some of these new gene therapies, which already is driving up Medicaid? So again, 35%
we believe that
of
biosimilars
Medicaid
and
is now
generics foster patient access,
Mr.
and
Boerner,
we care
I'll start with
deeply
you.
about that.
Senator, we actually don't
but
work
let me
in
ask,
gene therapy.
oh, then let me go to my
Davis.
specific question. Do
We
any
actually
of your
do not work in
current
gene
I thought I saw you had a
contracts
press release that you
employ
were doing
rebate
so. You had a
walls.
vector or something.
Our current contracts do not employ
we're doing some
any
very basic
technique
research,
to
but we have
avoid
nothing in
biosimilars
advanced
and
stages.
generics to have
We do
uptake
have a
in the
gene
market.
therapy
thank
served
you.
for
Now,
treating
I think at least
inherited
two of you, maybe
retinal
all three of you,
diseases,
are working on gene
and we
therapy.
support
I've been
legislation
concerned that
in order
we
to
don't
be able
really know
to
how we're
do
going to price
value-based
those.
contracts in the case
And I
of
think
gene
one of the
therapy.
concerns
So
is
we
that there will
welcome
not be a market
legislation
force to
in order
lower
to
the
be able
cost
to have
of
value-based
initial gene
contracts.
therapy. And that's a real, that's good.
incredible.
Value-based contracting will be important, but it still doesn't address the opening cost.
That gene therapy
Because if the opening cost is sky high, you see where I'm going with that. Now, what would you give to us speaking to a medical director of Medicaid CMO, and he was telling me so much it would be difficult for society related to Medicaid, the gene therapy. And I could put in any other drug, but let's just start with gene therapy. And he says it's being driven by
have
gene
to look
therapy.
at the value of these
And when sickle cell
therapies
comes
and the
widely
fact
spread,
that gene
it's
therapy
going-
for
I don't know how it's
inherited
gonna be
retinal
priced, but
diseases
my state has a lot
may
of
affect
sicklers.
only
I don't know how my
less than
state's gonna be able
1,000
to
people in the
afford
world. So we have
giving
to
it to
understand
everybody
that,
who
and
should have
you can
access.
rest assured that if we are
So,
fortunate enough
very
to bring this
concisely,
solution that
how are
people
we
that
going to
has diseases that can
show
lead to blindness
restraint on
will
the
sit
price
down
of some
and
of these new
evaluate very
gene
thoroughly
therapies,
our
which
pricing in
already
order to
is
make sure
driving
that
up
patients, all
Medicaid.
patients
So
that
again,
need this therapy
35% of
are
Medicaid
able
is
to
now
afford it.
pharmaceutical
I think I
costs.
recall a couple of years ago there was a study that was
Senator,
shown respecting.
we actually don't work in
you
gene
probably
therapy.
know
Oh, then let me go to
better than I.
Davis.
That
Mr.
$2 million
Davis.
We actually do
for
not
gene
work in
therapy
Oh, I thought I saw you had a
for
press
rare
release that y'all were doing
diseases
so.
was
You had a
reasonable-
vector or something.
a
No,
reasonable
we're,
sort of.
well,
it
we're doing
covered
some
the
very
cost that would
basic
create
research,
the
but we have
incentive to
nothing in
produce
advanced
more.
stages.
And that would be for the
We do
ultra
have a
rare,
gene
where presumably
therapy
you wouldn't
served
have
for
the
treating
ability to produce
inherited
more.
retinal
Obviously, the more you
diseases,
produce,
and we support
get a little bit extra
legislation
profit.
in
You
order
know
to
where I'm
be
going with
able to do
So,
value-based contracts in the case of gene therapy. So
but that
we welcome
shows
legislation
restraint,
in
if you
order
will,
to be
on
able
the
to have
behalf of the
value-based
manufacturer.
contracts.
And that's a real, that's good. Value-based contracting will be
incentive,
important, but it still
but
doesn't
we
address
want to
the
be able
opening
to
cost.
provide access.
Because if the opening cost
And
is sky
without
high,
access,
you
it's
still
as
you
if
see
the
where I'm
drug has
going
never
with
been
that.
invented.
Now, what would you give to
So,
us who believe
in
is there any
markets,
other thoughts you have on how
a
society
solution to an opening price that would be
if
so
that's
much,
ultra rare,
it would
$2
be
million,
difficult for
presumably if
society
it's
to
not
afford,
ultra rare, it'd be
the
less.
gene therapy. And
How
I
can
could
we
put in
have a
any other
market-oriented
drug.
approach to this?
But let's just start with
Because I
gene therapy.
truly am concerned about the ability
we
of a
have to
Medicaid
look at the
program to be
value
able
of
to
these
afford some of these gene
therapies
therapies.
and the fact
We
that
care
gene therapy
deeply
for
about
inherited retinal
our
diseases
medicines
may
getting to
affect
the
only
patients that need it,
less than
especially
1,000
in
people in the
as
world.
you have
So we
mentioned,
have to
ultra
understand
rare
that,
diseases
and
that have
you can rest assured that if
therapy
we are
can have
fortunate enough to
life-changing
bring this
consequences.
solution that
So
people that
we will
has diseases that
always
can lead to blindness,
sit down
and make sure
evaluate
that
very
the way we
thoroughly
price our pricing in
reflective
order
of
to
the
make
value
sure
of the
that
medicine,
patients,
but also
all patients that
importantly,
need this
it
therapy
enables
are able to afford
affordability.
I think I recall a
and
couple
it
years
makes it
ago there was
possible
a
that
study
every
that was
patient that's
shown
needed in
respected.
America
Now, the
you
affordability,
probably
though,
know
we're
better than
defining
I,
affordability
that
for the
$2 million
patient. So
for
Medicaid
gene
covers
therapy
it.
for
It's by
ultra-rare
definition
diseases
affordable for
was
the
a
patient.
reasonable-
Our insurance
a
does.
reasonable
But then
sort
that
of-
doesn't
it
necessarily
would
make it
cover the cost,
affordable
it
for
would create the
society.
incentive to produce more.
And that would be for the ultra
society
rare,
has
where
got to pay
presumably you
for it,
wouldn't
and
have
obviously
the
Medicaid is
ability
taking
to
more and
produce
more of the
more.
state's
Obviously,
budget,
the more you
frankly, more and more of the
produce,
federal budget.
you get.
I'm not sure there's an answer there, but let me just challenge you, because we want market-oriented oriented solutions. But that shows restraint, and we want to create incentives so that good companies like the three of you and others are making these new things. But we want to be able to, if my state goes bankrupt, paying without access, it's as if the drug has never been invented. Then my state's, the taxpayer, is there any other thoughts you have on how society... let me just go to one more thing. If that's ultra-rare, $2 million, presumably if it's not ultra-rare, companies will do life cycle management. Have a market-oriented approach to exclusivity? Because I truly am concerned about the ability of a Medicaid program that actually defeats innovation, because as opposed to making profit,
we care deeply about our medicines getting to the patients that need it, especially in these, as you have mentioned, ultra-rare diseases that have
Senator, I think life cycle management, if you think about the extension of new indications for a product, is incredibly important to
and make sure
really
that
being able to deliver additional benefits to patients. Obviously, the patents associated with any product will dictate when a generic enters. We have been in favor of a robust generic entry.
Now, the affordability, though, we're defining affordability for the patient. So if Medicaid covers it, it's by definition affordable for the patient.
You start the treatment of cancer very late in
disease. But then that doesn't necessarily make it affordable for society.
Learn more about how the drug works, show it safe, but ultimately you can bring that into early stage cancer where you have the potential to potentially cure patients.
I'm not sure there's an answer
now that takes quite a bit of time, but that's an example of a life cycle management where you are actually showing the true potential of a medicine. I would hate for us to cut off the opportunity to show those benefits. At the same time, we should be, as an industry, welcoming of generic competition, because ultimately our focus as a company is to take resources as we get close to generic entry and focus those resources on the next wave of new product innovation, which is where I think we ultimately want to go for patients.
Mr. Davis, you got 20 seconds. Sort of exclusivity of a drug.
Well, the short answer is, as I look at it, one,
actually
we
defeats
very much
innovation, because as
support
opposed to making profit
generic drugs and biosimilar drugs. I think it's the core of how our system works. We have a period where we're protected. We are able to recoup our investment, and then society benefits in perpetuity.
Senator, I think life cycle management, if you think about the extension of new indications for a product, is incredibly important.
I'll give you a live example.
Really being able to deliver additional benefits to patients. Obviously, the patents associated with any product will dictate when a generic enters. We have been in favor of a robust generic entry, primarily because our focus is on innovative products. But think, for example, in cancer, where typically you start the treatment of cancer very late in disease, learn more about how the drug works, show it safe, but ultimately you can bring that into early stage cancer where you have the potential to potentially cure patients. Now that takes quite a bit of time, but that's an example of a life cycle management where you are actually showing the true potential of the medicine. I would hate for us to cut off the opportunity to show those benefits. At the same time, we should be, as an industry, welcoming of generic competition, because ultimately our focus as a company is to take resources as we get close to generic entry and focus those resources on the next wave of new product innovation, which is where I think we ultimately want to go for patients.
Countries like
Davis, you got 20 seconds.
Canada or France, which
look
the
short
to me
answer
to be
is,
about
as I look at it,
one, the price that you get from the United States. Are those prices
generic
covering
drugs,
your
biosimilar
costs?
drugs. I think it's the core of how our system works. We have a period where we're protected. We are able to recoup our investment, and then society benefits in perpetuity beyond that. As we look at life cycle management, we always are asking, are we bringing value to the patient? I'll give you a live example. If you look
Are
at
the prices you're receiving
now, as I mentioned,
from these
39
other
indications
countries,
across
so
17 tumor types.
let's say France,
It is revolutionizing the care.
I'll give you the
of
benefit of
patients
your
facing
argument.
cancer.
France is still
The reality of it is still only
50%
30% of people
the US
show overall response.
cost that you're
so
claiming.
as great as it is,
Are
patients
those
are still suffering.
countries'
And what we are doing
prices
is investing in
your
combination
costs?
therapies
They do.
to be able
The
to
difference
extend
is that,
and go
for
beyond
example, in
that
Canada,
30%,
which was the first
which
country
means
you quoted,
much better benefit and value to the
Stelara,
patients
which
that
is
will
mainly indicated
ultimately
for
use those drugs.
inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, and ulcerative colitis, not for
Thank you very
arthritis,
much, Mr.
is
Chairman.
not
Thank you
yet
for
reimbursed in the
holding this
public
really
system.
important,
So Canadian
hearing.
patients that want to access Stelara, they cannot do
Mr.
it
Duato,
in the public system because
looking
8
at
years
your
later
arthritis
is not
drug,
yet
and we've
reimbursed
talked
there.
already.
So you
a
don't
little in this hearing
identify
about the
any
difference
free
in
rider
price
syndrome
between the United
today
States
in which the
and
United
other
States
countries
is
annual
paying
cost
higher
around
prices,
$80,000
allowing
in the
other
United
nations
States,
to
$20,000 in
lower
Canada,
prices.
$12,000 in
I agree
France.
with you.
Are
that
the
prices
prices
in the US
that you receive
are generally
from
higher for
a
medicines,
country like
more aligned that
Canada or France, which
as
look
the rest
to
of
me
the,
to be about
of
one
the
quarter
healthcare
of
system
the
prices
price that
are.
you get from the
The
United
percentage
States.
of
Are those
pharmaceutical
prices
expenses over
covering
total healthcare
your
expenses in
costs?
the US is 14%.
Yes, they do. To
And
clarify,
that is lower
Senator,
than most of the price in the US is discounted
The real
by
difference is that in the
70% of
US,
the patients
appropriate
get comparison
comparison would
therapy,
be
life-saving therapy
in the case of
years
Stelara,
before they do
if you are
in the context
considering
that you
that
mentioned.
price.
If the United States
are the prices you're receiving from these other
the
countries,
prices
so let's say
would
France,
that create
I'll give you the benefit of your argument.
negotiating
France is still
dynamic in countries that
right
right now,
50%
for instance,
of the
are
U.S.
cost that you're
50%
claiming
of what
are the
United
those
States
countries
pays.
would it allow
Prices
you in your
covering your
negotiations
They
to get
do.
higher
The difference
prices
is that,
from
for example, in
other
Canada, which
nations
was
that
the
right
first
now are
country you
paying far
quoted,
less than the United States?
Stellara, which is
we
believe
believe
that
that
price
for
caps, inflammatory bowel
are
disease,
not
Crohn's
the way
disease, and
that
ulcerative colitis is going to be fostered, is
we
not yet
have
reimbursed
worked
in the public
with the
system.
United States
So
Department
Canadian
and with
patients
US
that want to
embassies
access
around the world
Stellara,
to try to
they cannot do
reject
it in the
price
public
caps
system because
that
8 years,
some countries,
as the
as
one
the
you
leader
mentioned,
is
is not
not
yet
yet
reimbursed
and
yet.
we welcome the support
So
of the
you
US
don't
government
identify
in
any
avoiding
free
that
rider
these governments
syndrome
ultimately
today in which
imposing
the United States
price caps
is
on us that
paying
are
higher
not
prices,
benefiting their
allowing
patients
other
neither.
nations
What do you
to
say
receive
to
lower
Americans
prices.
who look at the
I agree with you
way that
that
you
the prices in the
allocate
US
revenue
are
and wonder
generally
why,
higher for medicines,
in
more
your
aligned
case,
than
for
what you are
instance,
describing,
you
as
are
the rest
spending
of
$6 billion
of the
on stock
healthcare system
buybacks,
prices are. The
$11
percentage of
billion
pharmaceutical
on
expenses over
dividends,
total
and
healthcare expenses in
$14
the
billion
US is
on research
14%,
and development.
and that is lower
You spend
than
all of
most
your
the
advertising
advanced
time talking
economies.
about the
The
research
real
and
difference is
development
that in the
spend.
US,
But
patients
I
get
think
access
most Americans
to
would
therapy,
be pretty
life-saving therapies,
surprised,
years before
given
they
how
do
much
in
the
the countries
industry
that you
talks
mentioned.
about
if the United
research
States
and development,
were
that you are actually spending
restrict
more money. The prices shelling out
would that
money
create
to investors
a different negotiating
and buying
dynamic
back in countries
stock
that right now,
than
for
you
instance,
are
on research and
paying
development? What do you
50%
say to
of what
folks who
the
look
United
at that
States
and
pays? Would it
come to the
allow
conclusion that
you
you care
in your
much
negotiations
more
to get
about
higher prices
keeping
from
your investors
other
happy
nations that right
and
now are
keeping
paying far less than
your
the United States?
We
executives
believe that
happy
price
than you
caps
do in
are not
research
the
and
way
development,
that
the next
innovation is
class
going to
of
be
drugs that's
fostered.
going to help
We care
with the
deeply
US
about
State
patients,
Department
Senator, and we
with
care
US
deeply
embassies
about
around the
being
world
able
to
to
try to
discover
reject
the next
price
medicines
caps
that are going to
that
address
some
major
countries,
problems
as the
like
one you're mentioning,
Alzheimer.
impose.
Our
I'm not,
welcome the support of the US
but
government
explain to me
in
how you
avoiding that
justify
these governments are
that
ultimately imposing
division of
price caps
dividends
on
and
us
stock
that are
buybacks
not
versus
benefiting
research and
their
development. You could
patients
just
neither.
choose,
What do you say
instead
to
of
Americans who look
using
at the
$6 billion to buy back
way
stock
that
to put
you
that into
allocate
more research and
revenue
development, but you don't.
and wonder why
Our level of R&D
in your
investment
case,
in
for
the 2
instance,
years that refer to the
you are
$6 billion
spending
program
$6 billion
buyback, which were
on stock
2022 and
buybacks,
2023,
$11
is 6 times
billion
higher.
on
So in that
dividends,
period, we invested
and
$30
$14 billion
billion in
on
R&D
research and
and $6
development.
billion in stocks.
You spend all of your
So we
advertising
spend
time
6
talking
times
about the
more in
research and
developing
development
cures for
spend.
patients that we
But
did in stock
I think
buyback.
most
Well, I'm
Americans
looking
would
at
be pretty
2022
surprised,
profit spending by Johnson
given
&
how
Johnson,
much the
and it
industry
shows me
talks
$11 billion
about
in dividends,
research and development.
$6 billion
that you are
in
actually
stock
spending
buybacks,
more money,
$45 million in
shelling
executive
out
compensation,
money
and
to
$14
investors
billion in research
and buying back
and development.
Can you
stock
understand?
than
Let me
you
ask you a
are
different question. Can
on
you understand
research and development?
that,
What do you say to folks
one of
who
my
look at
constituents
that
in Connecticut
and come to the
look at
conclusion
those
that you
numbers
care
and think that you
much
care
more
more about
padding,
keeping
your
the pockets
investors
of the
happy
folks that,
and keeping
your
work for you and invest in you than
executives
in happy than you
Our
do
priority is
in
investing in
research
R&D.
and
We
development.
have spent
the next class of drugs that's
$77
going to help
billion since
regulate.
we care deeply about patients,
we have to
Senator,
pay
and we care
dividends
deeply about being
because
able
it's
to discover
the only way that
the next medicines that are going to address major problems like Otherwise, if we are not sustainable, we are not able
explain to me
fulfill
how
our
you
mission of
justify
developing medicine for
that
patients and making them
division
affordable.
of
Mr.
dividends
Boerner,
and stock
talked in your
buybacks versus
testimony
research and
about
development. You could just
the United
choose
States has a healthcare
instead of
system that prioritizes
using $6 billion to buy back stock to put that into more research and development.
I
But
just
you
want to
don't.
present you with the
Our
case
level
of one of my
R&D
constituents
investment
and
in the
ask
2 years
you
that refer to
about
the $6 billion
the choices that
buyback,
she
which was
faces.
2022 and
So I have a
2023,
constituent who
is
needs
6 times
Eliquis.
higher. So in
This
that
is a
period,
blood
we
thinner
invested $30
that
billion
is
in
critical
R&D
to her
and $6
survival.
billion in stock
She
buyback.
has
So we
priced a
spent 6
Medicare
times more
plan
in
that
developing
gets her
cures
the
for
best
patients that we
possible
did in
price.
stock buyback.
Well, I'm looking at
And
2022
that
profits
price
and spending by Johnson
is
& Johnson.
$350
and it shows me $11 billion in dividends.
The average Social
$6
Security
billion
benefit
in stock
in
buybacks,
Connecticut is about
$45
$1,700
million
and
of course somebody who's on Eliquis is likely on
and
other
$14
drugs
billion
billion in research
So
and development.
here's her Can you understand? Let me ask you a different question.
Her
Can you
choice
understand
is to pay the $350.
one of my constituents in
and
Connecticut
go without, would look at those numbers and think that you care more about padding the pockets of the folks that not take the work for you and invest in you than risk heart attack
Our
or
priority
stroke.
is investing in R&D. We
Is
have
that the
spent
choice you're
$77
talking
billion
about
since
when you refer to a
2016.
healthcare
And yes,
system
we
that
have to pay
prioritizes
dividends
the
because
important
it's the only way that the company can remain operational and sustainable.
Senator, absolutely not.
Otherwise,
and in
if
fact,
we are not operational and sustainable,
I would say
we are not
on behalf
able
of
to
all of our
fulfill
employees
our
at
mission of
Bristol Myers Squibb, that
developing
is a
medicine
choice
for
no
patients and
patient
making
should
them
have to make.
affordable.
Mr. Boer, you talked in your testimony about she makes it because the United States has a healthcare system that prioritizes the important role of patient choice.
Senator,
I just
we
want to
have
present you with the case of one of my
Eliquis
constituents
in
and
the US.
ask
in our estimation,
about
in fact, we
the
try to do this
choices
for
that
all
she
of our
faces.
medicines.
So I have a
consistent with the
constituent
value
who
it
needs
brings.
Eliquis.
And we're very happy
This is a
with
blood
the fact
thinner
that Eliquis
that
is the
is
leading
critical
anti-stroke
to
drug.
her survival. Why not
She has
put
priced the
$8 billion
Medicare
into
plan
stock buybacks.
that gets her the
Why not
best possible
do
price.
$4 billion and instead take the rest of the money and
that
bring the price of the drug down?
is $350 a month.
I'm going to keep people.
The
to
average
7.
Social Security benefit
Senator
in
Tupperville.
Connecticut is about
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
$1,700 a month. And
thank you
of
for
course,
being
somebody
here
who's
today.
on Eliquis is likely on other
Pretty
drugs
well known
as well.
where our chairman
So
stands
here's
on
her
this.
choice.
His worldwide
Her
view.
choice is to pay the
Clear
$350
that, he
and
believes
go
you
without
guys are setting drug
food
prices.
or pay
And
her rent.
It's all
rate,
about corporate greed.
or
I'm a true believer
not
of
take the drug
capitalism. I believe
and
that we have
risk
the
heart
best
attack
healthcare
or
system in
stroke.
the world.
Is
Problem
that the
we've got
choice
the
you're
federal
talking
government
about
involved in it,
when you
and
refer
it's
to a
not
healthcare
implemented
system
the way
that
probably it
prioritizes
should
the
be.
important
That being said,
role of choice?
I just got a few questions.
Senator,
here on a
absolutely
couple
not.
of things. Mr.
And
Davis,
in fact,
can you explain
I would
me
say
something?
on behalf of
The Biden
all of our
administration has
employees at
two
Bristol Myers Squibb, that is a
huge
choice
priorities.
no patient should have to make.
Dictate prices of prescription drugs.
But she makes it
specifically
because you have
small
chosen to
molecule
price a
drugs
drug
and cure cancer.
at a point that is unaffordable.
Can you walk me through
Senator,
how those
we
priorities
have
might
priced
be in direct
Eliquis in the
contradiction of each
U.S.
other?
In our estimation,
Well, Senator,
we try to do this for all of our
I think what you're
medicines,
referring to is
consistent with the
what is
value
called
it
the
brings.
pill penalty.
And we're very happy with the fact that
underneath the
Eliquis is
IRA,
the
and what that
leading
does
anti-stroke drug.
is effectively
Why not take? Why not? You
says
put
that
$8
at 9
billion
years
into
post
stock
your first
buybacks.
approval,
Why not?
your
do
price
$4
or your
billion
drug will be
and instead take the
negotiated.
rest of the
if
money
it's
and
a
bring the
small
price of the
molecule,
drug
it's
down?
13 if it's a large. The issue
I'm going to keep people to 7.
that raises
Senator Tupperville.
is that it
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
disfavors small
thanks
molecule
for being here
development.
today.
And the reality of it is, if you
Pretty
look
well known
across the
where our
majority of
chairman
cancer treatments,
stands
they
on
are
this,
still small
His
molecules.
worldwide view.
And as Chris
clear
pointed out
that,
earlier,
he
the
believes you
development
guys
of
are
cancer drugs
setting
usually
drug
starts
prices.
in a
And
phase starting at the,
it's all
at the
about
very
corporate greed.
most sickest patient,
I'm a true believer
the last stage of disease,
capitalism.
and then you
I
work
believe that
forward
we have
into
the
earlier
best
stages
healthcare
of the
system in the
disease,
world.
where in fact you can start to maybe
Problem
talk about
is,
cure.
we've got the federal
To
government
do
involved in
those
it.
studies in early
and
stage
it's not
disease, often
implemented
called
the way
adjuvant or
probably it should
neoadjuvant
be.
care,
That
and
being
we have
said,
9 approvals in that space. Those studies can take
I just got a
7
few
to 9
questions
years
here on
to
a couple
do.
of things. Mr.
So
Davis,
obviously,
can you
if
explain
at
me
9
something?
years,
The Biden
I have
administration
to
has two
significantly
huge
reduce the
priorities.
price of that drug to a point that it is
Dictate prices
potentially,
of prescription drugs,
basically no profit.
specifically small
My incentive
molecule
to do
drugs
those
and
follow-on
cure cancer.
studies is
Can you
not
walk
there.
me
And
through
that is our worry,
how those
that if
priorities
you look
might
at cancer
be in
care, you're
direct
going to see
contradiction of
patients
each other?
suffer because we can't get
Well,
to
Senator,
really talking about cure, which
and I
is
think
an
what you're
early stage
referring
of
to
disease.
is,
I'd also
what
point
is
out,
called
you
the pill
didn't ask
penalty.
about
That's correct.
Alzheimer's
the
and
IRA,
neuroscience,
what that
diseases, but
does
most
is
CNS
effectively,
diseases also require small
says
molecules
that at
because
9
large,
years post
large
your
molecules
first
biologics
approval,
can't
your
penetrate
price
the
or your
blood-brain
drug
barrier.
will be
So we are,
negotiated.
and if it's a small molecule, it's
disincentivizing some of the
13 if
largest
it's a large.
areas of
The
sickness and
issue
chronic need in our
that
society
raises
through that pill penalty you
is
referred
that
to.
it disfavors
Thank
small
you, Mr.
molecule
Boehner.
development. And the
we hear a lot
reality of it
about how
is, if you look
healthcare
across
costs
the
are
majority of
ridiculous
cancer
high. I
treatments,
think
they
all of
are
us
still
would agree to that to
small
some
molecules.
degree.
And
I want to peel back the onion
as
here a
Chris
little bit.
pointed out
Today
earlier,
we're being led
the
to
development
believe
of
that
cancer
these costs
drugs
are due to
usually
corporate
starts
greed. I
in a
wanna know
phase
if
starting at the
we're going to
very
talk
most
about some
sickest
additional
patient,
drivers of healthcare
the
costs.
last stage
When
of
the federal
disease,
government
and then
dumped
you work
trillions
forward
into
into
various
earlier
industries
stages
during
of the
COVID,
disease, where in fact you can
we
start to maybe
upended our
talk
markets
about
and
cure.
drove prices
To
through
do
the
those
roof.
studies
You know,
in
when I
early
talk to
stage
healthcare
disease,
folks back
often
in
called
Alabama,
adjuvant or neoadjuvant care,
labor cost
and we have 9
is
approvals
one
in that space.
huge
Those studies
problem.
can take 7 to 9 years
But
to
there
do.
are other costs,
So
including
obviously,
supplies and raw
if
materials.
at 9 years,
What impact
I have
are these
to
having
significantly
on the drug
reduce the price of
development and
that
high
drug
drug
to a
costs?
point that it is potentially,
Certainly,
advantageously
Senator, when we look
no
at the
profit.
cost basis for
My
us doing
incentive
what we
to
do
do
as
those
a company,
follow-on
which is
studies
to bring
is
forward
not
new
there,
medicines
and
for
that is our
patients,
worry,
we have to
that
factor in
if you
all of
look
those
at
costs.
cancer care, you're
I'll give you an
gonna see
example
patients
in
suffer
cellular
because we can't
therapy,
get to really
which
talking
is
about
really
cure, which is an
transforming
earlier stage
very
of disease.
late-line
I'd also point out, you
hematologic
didn't
diseases.
ask
These
about,
are very complex medicines.
Alzheimer's and neuroscience
Taking
diseases,
patient
but
cells,
most CNS
manufacturing them, and
diseases also
re-engineering
require
allowing them to really target and hone in on cancer cells, and then you re-inject them in the patients. This is really a first-generation technology. Unfortunately, it has very high labor costs because this is one that's very manual. It's a multi-step process to manufacture these products. Their transportation costs, their raw material costs, all of those factors go into a cost of these first-generation medicines. Now, we're very focused on trying to innovate to get to a second and third generation quickly so we can bring those costs down, not only because it's important for us to be able to funnel additional research into development, but also so that we can bring ultimately the cost down to patients. So they are absolutely a factor, Senator.
When I talk to healthcare folks back in Alabama, Mr. Duato, labor cost, I'm going to ask you this with your accent in mind. You'll probably have a tough time. But there are other costs, including supplies and raw materials. I know you're probably aware in 2021, are these having, I don't think at that time, but the Biden administration announced a mandate that U.S. troops.
Certainly, Senator, when we look at the cost basis for us doing what we do as a company, which is to bring forward new medicines for patients, we have to factor in all of those costs. I'll give you an example in cellular therapy, which is really transforming very late-line hematologic diseases. These are very complex medicines.
I was not
taking
aware of
patient
that, sir.
cells, manufacturing them, and re-engineering them to really target and hone in on cancer cells, and then you re-inject them in the patients. This is really a first-generation technology. Unfortunately, it has very high labor costs because this is one that's very manual. It's a multi-step process to manufacture
effort in the COVID
products.
vaccine
Their
that we
transportation
collaborated with the
costs,
government, it was a
their
time
raw
of a
material
global
costs,
emergency,
all of
so
those
we thought
factors
that
go
as
in to a cost
healthcare
of these
company that cares
first-generation
for
medicines.
patients,
Now,
we
we're
needed to
very
collaborate with the
focused
US government
on
that
trying to
was
innovate to get to
entirely
a second and third
non-for-profit.
generation quickly so we can
think the
bring those
soldiers
costs
who
down,
were expelled
not
from the
only because it's
military
important for us
was
to
the
be
right
able to
thing
funnel
to do,
additional
and should
research
they be
into development,
reinstated?
but also
I was
so that
not
we can bring
aware of this
ultimately the cost down to
situation, sir.
patients. So they are absolutely
I
a
am
factor,
not
Senator.
aware of these circumstances, so I cannot comment on that.
Mr. Duato, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to ask you this with your accent in mind. We'll probably have a tough time.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Murray.
I know
Thank you
you're
very
probably
much,
aware
Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. I think you know we hear from our constituents constantly and frighteningly about the cost of some of the drugs that they take. So this is really an important hearing, and I continue to hear, as many have said, that sky-high drug costs are forcing many people, including in my home state of Washington, to choose between filling their prescription and paying for other things they need, essentials like groceries or rent.
No, I was not
And
aware
I
of that,
often
sir.
talk to people who are skipping their prescription altogether because they can't afford it, and it puts their life at risk. So I really believe that Congress does need to do more here.
We did not, sir.
I have for a long time, and I
How
also
much
think
did Johnson &
pharmaceutical
Johnson benefit
companies
financially from
need
the
to do much more to
administration's
put
military
patients
COVID
first.
vaccine mandate?
And that
Could
doesn't
you
mean that private
have any kind of
companies
guess
can't
to
make
that?
a profit.
Our
And I
effort
think
in
we
the
all
COVID
have a
vaccine that we
really sincere
collaborated with the government, it was a
appreciation for the
time
cutting-edge
of a global
research that
emergency, so we
happens at
thought
each
that
of your
as a
companies.
healthcare
But when
company
you
that
say
cares
you're
for
in the
patients, we needed
business
to
of saving
collaborate with
lives
the US
and
government on that.
curing
Was
disease,
entirely
you have to think about putting
non-for-profit.
patients over profits.
Do you think the
Because,
soldiers
as we all
who
know,
were expelled from
life-saving
the
drugs don't
military
do anyone
was
any
the right
good.
thing to
People
do,
can't afford
and should
them.
they be reinstated?
So I want to ask you about
I was not aware of this
and I've
situation,
heard the
sir.
numbers. I was listening in my
I
office.
am not
Mr.
aware
Duato,
of these
your
circumstances,
drug
so I
company
cannot comment on
makes
Thank you.
a
Thank you, Mr.
product to
Chairman.
treat arthritis, Stelara. It costs $79,000
Thank you, Senator.
annually here
Senator
in
Murray.
the U.S. 12,000
Thank you very
in
much,
France.
Mr. Chairman, and thank you
Mr.
all
Davis,
for
your
being
company
here.
makes
We really
a drug
appreciate
to treat
it.
cancer.
I
Keytruda.
think
You know
been talking
we hear
about
from
it
our
annually. The
constituents
cost here
constantly.
is
And frighteningly about the cost of some of the drugs that they take. So this is
Boerner, your
really an
company
important
makes
hearing,
a
and
drug,
I
Eliquis,
continue to
treat the
hear,
risk
as
of
many have
stroke
said,
that costs
$7,100
sky-high
drug costs are forcing many people, including in my home state of Washington, to choose. I mean, between filling their prescription and paying for other things they need, essentials like groceries or rent. And I often talk to people who are skipping their prescription altogether because they can't afford it, and it puts their life at risk. Ask each one of you. I really believe that Congress does need to do more here. Why it costs for a long time, and I also think pharmaceutical companies and they understand need to do much more to put patients first. Let me talk to and that doesn't mean that private companies can't
We
make
share
a
your
profit,
concerns about
and I think we all have
what
a
patients
really
have to
sincere
pay
appreciation
at the
for
pharmacy counter
cutting-edge
for
research
medicines.
that happens
In the case
at
of
each your
Stelara that you
companies.
mentioned,
But when you
the
say
net
you're
price in the
the
US
business of
is
saving lives
70%
and
lower than
curing
the price that
disease,
you
have to
refer,
think
so
about putting
it would be
patients over profits.
$24,000.
Because
It's
as we
still
all know,
higher than in
life-saving
France,
drugs
but it's
don't
more
do
aligned
anyone any good if
than
people
here.
can't
The
afford them.
difference is that patients with inflammatory bowel disease, which is the main indication with Stelara, were able to afford the Stelara years earlier than they did in other countries. As a matter of fact, in Canada, after 8 years that Stelara was approved, Stelara is not reimbursed in inflammatory bowel disease, nor in Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. What are we doing for that? We have strong patient assistance programs. A patient that has commercial insurance pays $10 to $15 a month for Stelara, and if they are not insured or underinsured, we have free medicine program. We distributed $3.9 billion in free drugs in 2022.
So if you look at Keytruda and the example you're bringing up between the U.S. and Japan, first of all, like all of us, we are trying to focus on making sure that patients everywhere in the world get access to our medicines. Each market operates differently. Japan is a unique market.
We share your concerns
in
about
that the way they price
what
their
patients
drugs,
have to pay
and we
at the pharmacy
have
counter
been
for
working
medicines.
hard to get this to change.
In the case of Stelara that you mentioned, the net price in the U.S. is 70% lower than the price that you refer, so
for every indication that comes afterwards,
it's still higher than in France, but it's more aligned.
And in addition, if a competitor launches a drug,
is that
then
patients
you
with
also still take a price decrease because
inflammatory
of the
bowel
competitor
disease,
drug.
which is the
And we're
main
in a strange
indication with
situation,
Stelara,
and one
were
that's a
able
very
to
concerning
afford the
situation to
Stelara
me in Japan,
years earlier
where in
than
reality,
they did in other
we,
countries.
as the
As a matter
most
of fact,
innovative, we have
in
the most
Canada,
indications.
after 8 years that
driving the market
Stelara was
fastest.
approved,
We have
Stelara
by
is
far
not
the lowest
reimbursed
discounted
in
price
inflammatory bowel
in
disease,
Japan, and the
nor in
levels
Crohn's
in Japan
disease
would not be
or
sustainable
ulcerative
to support.
colitis. What are we doing for that?
$6
We
billion,
have strong
$48 billion
patient assistance
we spent on
programs.
Keytruda. So
A patient that
we
has
are
commercial
working hard
insurance
to help
pays
those
$10
markets, and
to
we could use
$15 a
government help
month
there
for
to
Stelara.
understand
And if they are
that we need
not
to,
insured or
across the
underinsured,
globe,
we have
share
free
in
medicine
making
program.
sure we can invest to support innovation.
$3.9 billion in free drugs in 2022.
Mr.
I
Davis?
think, well, on one hand, look at it's a different question on lowering prices here. I think that's a question I'm sure we're going to get to. But this, first of all, how do we focus on what all of us we are really large discrepancy between the list price everywhere in the world and the net price, which I believe we need to focus on is the out-of-pocket cost to the patient. That is really Japan is a core unique market. We need to address that. But in addition, we need to continue to work together, and we have been trying to drive innovation to change into trade agreements. We've had some success with that. Gotten some of it also help us in those markets outside. After you initially launch your drug, for every indication that comes,
Senator, there's no doubt that patients are going to pay less for
and in
our drug
addition, if a competitor launches a drug
outside of the U.S. than in the
then
U.S.
you also still
that
take a price decrease because of the competitor
fairly
drug. And
significant
we're
cost
in
for
a
those
strange
patients outside of the
situation,
U.S.
and
In
one
Canada,
that's a very concerning
patients will
situation
wait
to me in Japan.
roughly 3.5 to 4 years
we,
to get
as the
access to a
innovative, we have the
medicine
most
that is available in the U.S.
We were
You
driving
see
the
similar
market
sort of
fastest.
stats in
We have
virtually
by
every
far the
European
lowest
country and
discounted
in
price
Japan.
In Japan,
What we can do more
would not be
in the U.S. to
sustainable
do
support
is try to bring
40,
out-of-pockets down,
$6 billion, $48 billion
For Eliquis, for example,
so
the average
we are working
out-of-pocket
hard
is
to help
roughly
those markets,
$50,
and we could use government
$55
help
in the
there
U.S. Most
to
patients will pay less than
understand that we
$40.
need
However,
to,
there
across
are
the
still
globe,
patients for whom this drug is absolutely not affordable. That's not acceptable. Medicare in particular is a space where we can't provide those types of co-pay support programs that we do in the commercial setting, so we would love to work with Congress on that.
That's a question I'm
But
sure
probably the most
to,
important thing, and Eliquis is a great example of this, that we can do
really large
is
discrepancy
try to
between
bring
the
down
list
the
price
list cost
and the
of
net
Eliquis.
price, which
So
I
do you
believe
set the list
we need to
price?
focus on is
So
the
we
out-of-pocket
set
cost
the
to the
list
patient. That is
price,
really
but that
the
list
core.
price for
We
Eliquis
need to address that.
is
but in
driven
addition,
up
we need to continue to
by
work
the
together
incentives
on,
of
we can work on
intermediaries. And let me give
trying
you
to
an
drive
example of
innovation
order of
clauses into
magnitude.
trade agreements. We've
Over
had
the
some
last
success with
5
that
years,
to also
we have
help
as a
us in
company
those
paid
markets
almost
outside the United States as
$100
well.
billion in rebates and discounts. Senator, there's no doubt that the majority of those were on Eliquis. And our ability, that's unfortunately what patients pay is a copay on that list price. We would love to work with Congress to bring cost for those patients outside of the U.S. In Canada,
all right, thank you, Mr.
patients
Chairman.
will wait
Mr. Boerner, I'll start with you.
roughly 3.5 to 4 years to get access to a medicine that is available in the U.S. You see similar sort of stats in virtually every European country and in Japan.
Treating patients, I was using
what
Coumadin,
we can do more
heparin, and
in the U.S.
It might
to
take
do
3 or 4
is try to
days
bring
to get someone
out-of-pockets down,
heparinized, and then we
out-of-pocket
switch
costs
them over
down.
to
For
Coumadin, and they
Eliquis,
might be in
for
the hospital
example,
for 10
the
or
average
14
out-of-pocket
days.
is roughly
So in its own right,
$50,
Eliquis,
$55 in the
saves
U.S.
money.
Most
It saves
patients will
that
pay
length
less
in
than
the hospital
$40.
and prevents
However,
hospitalizations
there are
as
still
well.
patients
So I
for
want to
whom this
point
drug
that
is
out.
absolutely not
And
affordable. That's
as
not
we
acceptable.
talk about rationing
Medicare
care, we
in
discussed
particular
how
is a
we're
space
rationing
where
care
we
in
can't
foreign
provide those types of
countries.
copay support
But I
programs
want you
that
to
we
speak
do in the
about
commercial
rationing
setting,
care
so we
in
would
this
love to work with
country.
Congress on that.
How do PBMs
But probably the most
ration
important thing, and
care
Eliquis is
when
a
they
great
take a
example
drug
of
like
this, that
Eliquis
we
and
can
don't
do
allow it on
is
their
try to
formulary?
bring
Does that
down
ever
the
happen?
list cost of Eliquis. Senator, I'm glad
do
you
you
raised
set
that
the
point.
list price?
We have
So
had
we set
absolutely
the
that
list
case
price,
happen on multiple
but
drugs.
that
We've
list
had it
price
happen
for
on
Eliquis
We've had it
is
happen
driven
where
up
when we have not
by
been
the
able to
incentives
reach
of
an
intermediaries.
agreement
Let me give
with
you
an
an example,
intermediary
order of magnitude.
on a rebate
Over
that
the
they've
last
taken
5
Eliquis off a
years,
formulary. And when
we
that
have, as a
happens,
company,
those
paid
patients no longer
almost
have access to
$100
Eliquis,
billion
and they have to go on to another
in
branded
rebates
or
and discounts
in
to
many cases they may
intermediaries.
go on
The
to
majority
warfarin,
of
as you
those
say.
were on Eliquis.
Eliquis is the
And our
number
bill,
one
that's
product
unfortunately what
in the
patients
oral
pay as a
anticoagulant space.
copay on
So
that
I'm going to
list
start to
price.
catch. So,
We
so
would
they
love
have to go
work
back
with
to
Congress
warfarin, the
bring that
Coumadin,
down.
the drug that I was
Senator
using
Marshall.
in medical school in the,
Thank you,
in the
Mr. Chairman.
1980s.
Mr. Boerner, I'll start with you.
A drug with significant complications.
Bristol Myers,
hassle factor. The patient has to go get blood testing done. You know, I was maybe twice a week as well. But with your drug, Coumadin, one of the miracle parts of it, it might take 3 or 4 days to get someone heparinized, and then we switch them over. And 2, they don't have to go get their blood testing done once a week as well. So it's a huge amount of innovation. Eliquis, and it saves money. It saves that. It amazes me how much power these PBMs have obtained as well. Let's go to Mr. Davis. So I want to point that out. I want to talk about delinking. As we talk about rationing care, we discussed a miracle drug of care in foreign countries. There's a list about rationing care in this country. How much of that? How do percentage of that list price ration typically when they take a drug like Eliquis and don't allow it on their formulary?
Senator,
Does that
if you
ever
look
happen?
at Januvia, which is the drug you were
Senator,
speaking
I'm
to,
glad you raised that
the
point.
list price is
We have had absolutely that case
$6,900
happen on
per year,
multiple drugs. We've had
per
it
year.
happen on Eliquis. We've had
for
it
Merck,
happen
we
where
recognize
when we have not been able to
$690
reach an
on that
agreement
drug
with an
per year.
intermediary.
So of the
on a
list price,
rebate,
you're
that
only
they've
getting
taken Eliquis off a
10%.
formulary.
It's a
And when
90%
that happens,
discount.
those patients no
90%
longer have access
discount.
to
Where does the rest of
Eliquis,
that money go?
And they have to go on to
into
another
the-
branded or
into the
in
middlemen,
many
into
cases
the
they may
system
go on
as a
to
whole.
warfarin, as you say.
If
Eliquis is
we
the
had the
number
time
one
and the
product
energy
in the
and a
oral
chalkboard,
anticoagulant space.
would you be able to explain
So
to
I'm
me
gonna
and
start
show
to
me
get-
all the little So they have to go back to
places that
warfarin, the Coumadin, the drug that I was
but
using in medical
think you
school in
appreciate
the
it is
1980s.
highly complex
A
and so
drug with
complex that at
significant
times, even
complications.
learned people who play in the
hassle
space
factor, the
can't
patient
understand.
certainly I can't explain blood testing done. That's my point. You know,
Is it
maybe
so
twice a week as well, but we don't know where this money is going.
Parts of it,
But certainly, A, they don't bleed into their brains.
we know
the pharmacy benefit managers are taking 50 to 75 cents of that as well. So you're only getting huge amount of innovation of it. And I'd like to know where the rest of it goes. Amazes me how much Mr. Boerner similarly have obtained with your drug. Let's go to Mr. Davis. What type of? I want to talk of that list about delinking. You all are taking. And you have at the time a pretty miracle drug of your own to
relatively
treat
smaller
diabetes
percentage,
with.
as I mentioned before.
There's a
we've paid
list
over the
price.
last 5 years about $100
How much of
billion
that?
in
What
rebates and
percentage of that
discounts,
list
and the
price does
majority of that go
typically
to one product, and that's Eliquis.
Merck get at the end of the day? Go back to Mr.
Senator,
Davis.
if you look at
Let's talk
Januvia,
about
which is the drug
you
you were
all have an
speaking to,
antiviral
the
drug
list
that's
price
been
is
approved.
$6,900.
How many
per
drugs
per year.
did you go
For
down
Merck,
when
we
COVID hit?
recognize
You were trying to develop multiple
$690
drugs. How many have
on
made it
that
across the
drug per
finish
year.
line? What did you spend? So of the list price, you're only getting 10%.
Yeah, so
It's a
when
90%
discount. When the
90%
COVID situation
discount.
hit,
Where does the rest
we,
of that money go?
Drove two
into the
four key
into the
programs,
middlemen,
two
into
in
the
vaccines,
system as a whole.
Two in antivirals.
If we had the time
only
and the
one of
energy
those
and a
succeeded,
chalkboard,
which is the drug
would you be able to
Lagevrio.
explain to me and show me all
total
the little
spend
places
across,
that goes?
those four programs is
I
a little
could,
over
but
$2.5
I
think you
You
appreciate
spent $2.5
it
billion.
is
You got
highly
one across the
complex
finish line, an
and so
antiviral.
complex
Is that
at
being used in
times,
the United
even,
States?
learned people who play
very
in the
little.
space it has
Well,
emergency
certainly I
use
can't explain
authorization. It never
and that's
got
my
to full
point. Is it
approval,
so
and so we're actually seeing it being
non-transparent?
used much
We
more
don't know
outside
where
the
this
United
money
States.
is. So in actuality, you spent $2.5 billion and got We know that the pharmacy benefit managers are taking 50 to 75 cents of that dollar. Mr. Duato, and you're only getting 10% of it. I would like to know where the rest of it goes. Then in my 25 years, similarly, with your drug, with Eliquis, what type of, able to find what percent of that list price do you think that you all are taking home? 340B
Senator,
programs,
it's a relatively smaller
rebates,
percentage. As I mentioned before,
there's
we
always
paid over the
exceptions
last
to the
5
rules,
years
but
about $100 billion
what type of
in
efforts does
rebates and
J&J
discounts, and the
make
majority
to
of that
work with
go to one
340B
product, and that's
programs
LL.B.
and to help some of these people that need help? Go back to Mr. Davis. Let's talk about, you all have
we
an
care deeply
antiviral
about
drug
patient
that's
affordability,
been approved.
but also we care about the
How many drugs
sustainability of the
did you
rural
go down
hospitals and small
when COVID hit? You were
hospitals
trying to develop
that take care
multiple
of
drugs. How many have
patients
made it across the
that
finish line?
are
What did you
underserved.
spend
So
on
we
R&D
believe
as
that
you
the
look at those all
340B
together?
program,
Yeah, so
it's an important
when the
program
COVID
to support those
situation hit,
hospitals, and we are fully,
drove
fully
four key
looking forward to
programs,
collaborate
two in
with
vaccines,
them in any way we
two in
can to
antivirals.
support patient
Only one
access
of
on
those
those hospitals.
succeeded,
And I'm going to point
which
out
is
once
the drug
again, it's just not
Lagevrio.
rural hospitals, it's our
The
community
total
health
spend
centers are
across,
taking great
those four
advantage of
programs
the
is a little over
340B
$2.5
program
billion.
as well.
You
Trying to make sure that $1 billion, you got one across the finish line, an antiviral, is that being used in the United States? Plus having access to
Very
affordable
little.
drugs
It has
as
emergency
well.
use authorization. It
I
never
might make a
got to
couple
full
quick
approval,
points.
and so we're actually seeing it being used much
The
more
people of
outside the United
Kansas
States.
sent me
So
here to save $2.5 billion and got none to save Medicare, significant market share in the United States despite treat Alzheimer's. Mr. Duato, I'll talk to you for a second. It seems to me that Americans bear the burden. In my 25 most years of the R&D in this world, and other countries, we were always able to find a solution for their drugs that they need, and that impacts the price. 340B programs in many ways as well. There's always exceptions to the rules. Why does it feel like to me that what type of efforts does J&J make to work with 340B programs and to help?
Well, I think, Senator, it gets down to, as you look across the globe,
we care deeply about patient affordability, but also we care
I
about
appreciate
the
what the U.S. does. I
sustainability
think
of
the U.S. favors
rural
innovation,
hospitals
values
and small hospitals
values access for our
that take care of patients
fast access,
that
most
are
access.
underserved.
Many markets
So
around
we
the
believe
world
that the 340B
don't do
program,
that. What they focus
it's
on
an
more
important
is their
program to
budget and how
support
they
those
meet
hospitals,
those
and we are
budget
fully,
needs, and we appreciate the
fully
budgetary constraints
looking
that
forward
everyone
to collaborate
faces.
with them
But as a result of
in
that,
any way we
often
can
patients
support
aren't getting
patient
access to
on
meds.
those hospitals.
They don't get them
And
as
I'm going to
fast,
point
which
out
we've
once
commented
again,
on
it's just
today.
not rural
And
hospitals,
it's
it's our
harder to
community
see
health
how you can
centers are
support the
taking great
innovation we need to
advantage
do
of the
in that
340B
situation.
program as well, trying to make sure that every patient in America has access to primary care, true affordable access to primary care, plus having access to affordable drugs
Thanks so much,
as
Senator
well.
Baldwin, for
I might make a couple quick points.
Mr. Chairman, thanks for the hearing.
The people of Kansas sent me here to save Medicare.
A sense that I have back home.
To save Medicare,
when I talk to
need
people in
a
Pennsylvania,
miracle drug to treat Alzheimer's.
A lot of your companies have a lot of interest in
It seems to
Pennsylvania.
me
I hear
that
over and
Americans
over again,
bear the
this
burden of
problem,
most of the
cost
R&D
of
in this
prescription
world,
drugs,
and other countries benefit
it's like a
from
bag
it.
of heavy rocks. It's been people have been
And that
carrying
impacts
this
the
around on their
price
shoulders every day,
in
year after
many
year,
ways as well.
and they're tired of it.
Mr. Davis,
and
am I wrong?
they
Why
don't
does it
believe
feel
that
like to me that Americans
any
are feeling
player
most
in
of the
this is
brunt
doing
of the
enough.
R&D cost, or is that not accurate?
I think most
Well, I think,
Pennsylvanians are
Senator,
happy that
it gets down to,
that
as
I
you
could
look
vote for a
across
bill in
the
2022 that allowed
different
Medicare
markets,
to negotiate for
and I appreciate what the
prescription
U.S.
drug
does. I
costs,
think the
and that we
U.S.
could
favors
cap the cost of
innovation.
insulin,
It
$35
values
a
access
month
for our patients,
Medicare
fast
Part D
access,
beneficiaries.
most access.
They're happy that we can
Many markets around the
cap the
world
out-of-pocket costs.
don't do that. What they focus on
about a year
more
from
is
now,
their
but-
budget and how do they meet those budget needs.
They're not
and we
happy.
appreciate the budgetary
They're not
constraints that everyone
satisfied that even
faces.
Congress is doing
But as a
enough,
result
House
of that,
or Senate,
often
or either
patients
party.
aren't getting
But
access
they're
to
certainly not
meds.
happy with
They don't get them as fast, which we've commented on today.
the level of
and
work
it's harder
that
to see
you've
how
put
you
into
can
this.
support the innovation we need to do.
Look, I
in that
hear all
situation.
this talk
Thank you.
about rebates and
Senator Baldwin.
and cost reductions you're trying to put
Senator
in place.
Casey.
But it's not cutting. It's
Thanks
not
so much,
cutting
Senator
back
Baldwin,
home.
for allowing me
And
to
when
jump
I
ahead.
talk to people
Mr. Chairman,
that,
thanks for the
that
hearing.
see what PBMs
I
are
want to
doing,
start with
they know that
without
they're a sense that I have
meeting
back
the
home.
obligation that they
When I talk to people
would
in
expect them to.
Pennsylvania,
So,
and
a lot of your
there's no
companies have
question that
a lot of
that your
interest in
companies, and
Pennsylvania,
I hear
and
over and
big
over again,
pharmaceutical companies are
this
playing a role in this
problem. You bear
The
a
cost
measure
of
of
prescription
responsibility
drugs.
in this. It's like a bag of
I
heavy
wanted to
rocks.
ask you a couple
It's been
questions
people
about
been
that.
Carrying this
First
around
and
on their
foremost,
shoulders
tell me what
every day, year
concrete
after year.
steps,
Very
and they're
specific
tired of it.
steps, and they don't.
Each
They
of you are
don't believe that
taking, and your
any
companies are taking,
any player in
to
this
make
is doing
sure
enough that we can get these costs
they're-
down.
I think they're
most Pennsylvanians
even
are
by
happy
way
that,
of repetition. You may have already said
that I could vote for a
I
bill
don't-
in 2022.
worried about
that
you repeating
allowed
yourself.
Medicare to
But we
negotiate
need to
for
know
lower
specifically
prescription drug
what you're doing to lowering cap the cost of insulin, no $35, especially someone who needs a life-saving Medicare Part D intervention, a life-saving treatment. Very happy that we could is going to be denied that out-of-pocket solely. That'll go into effect solely because about a year from now. But I'll start on the left, Mr. Duato. They're not happy.
Thank you, Senator
They're
Cassidy.
not satisfied that even Congress
absolutely want to be part of the solution. We understand that copay obligations for U.S. patients are burdensome, and it does create health inequities.
Look, I hear
what are we doing for that? We have a very extensive patient assistance program that for commercial patients enables them to be able to pay low copays, $5 to $15 per month. We supported more than 1 million patients in 2022 with our copay assistance programs. If a patient is underinsured or not insured, we provide free drug. We gave $3.9 billion in free drug in 2022. But I think we can do more.
I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about that. First and foremost, tell me what concrete steps,
even in Medicare, as you mentioned, because that's a real need that we are committed, all our employees are committed in order to make sure that our medicines get to the patients.
Even by way of repetition, you may have already said it.
Well, Senator, very much like J&J, we have
but we need to know specifically
tiered levels of
what you're doing to lower
assistance programs
costs
because we want to make sure that patients who need our drugs can access them. If you have insurance, but you fall below certain needs where you're not able to handle your copay, we will give copay assistance to those patients through a program.
Thank you, Senator Cassidy. We absolutely want to be part of the solution. We understand that copay obligations for U.S. patients are burdensome, and it does create health inequities. What are we doing for that? We have a very extensive patient assistance program that for commercial patients enables them to be able to pay low copays, $5 to $15 per month. We supported more than 1 million patients in 2022 with our copay assistance programs. If a patient is underinsured or not insured, we provide free drug. We gave $3.9 billion in free drug in 2022. But I think we can do more, and we can work together.
If we're able to do that, we have one in late-stage development now called an oral PCSK9,
in Medicare, as you mentioned, because that's a real need that we are committed, all our employees are committed in order to make sure that our medicines get to the patients that they deserve.
We need to address the price challenges today. We have to lower out-of-pocket costs. J&J, we have innovation, like ultimately tiered levels of patient assistance programs.
Senator, maybe I would highlight three things.
Patients who need our drugs
First,
can access them.
We obviously have a very robust on the commercial side copay assistance program that brings out-of-pocket costs down in many cases for certainly our oral oncologics, for example, almost to zero. They're complex at times, so we are working very hard to make those more universally available. That's step one. Step two, we would like to work with this Congress to find ways in which we could apply the same sort of programs in Medicare. There's some complexities. We want to make sure we're not diverting from the use of generics, for example, but we think there are potential ways that we could do that, and we would love to explore those opportunities with Congress to bring out-of-pocket costs down for Medicare patients. The second thing I would say is we are looking at doing more innovative work, innovative contracting work where we can, for example, if our drug works, we get paid. If it doesn't work, we get paid less, and in some cases maybe even not get paid at all. There are technicalities in the U.S. that prohibit us from doing that more in the U.S.
If we're able to do that, we have one in
late-stage development now called an oral PCSK9, which is for heart disease. But we do believe that innovation plays a role here. Cellular therapy, well, not gene therapy, previous question.
So I think we need to
those
also
are
think about how
expensive
can
therapy.
Innovation
We have got to bring those costs down.
We need to address
the
price challenges today.
We will innovate to the next generation, which hopefully is way less complex than what I described previously.
Well,
Senator, maybe I would highlight three things.
Thank you,
First,
Thank you.
We obviously have a very robust on the commercial
I'm not
side
an apologist
copay
for big
program
pharma.
that brings
in fact,
out-of-pocket
when corporations
costs down
manipulate
in
government
many cases
to their advantage,
for
crony
oral
capitalism,
oncologics, for
I'm an
example,
unfettered critic.
almost to zero.
But in defense of
They're
capitalism,
complex at times, so we are working very hard to make those more
unapologetic
universally available. That's
Milton
step one.
Friedman once wrote
Step two, we
that if
would
you
like
want
to
to
work
create a
with this
shortage
Congress
of
to find
tomatoes,
ways in
just
which
pass a law that
we could
retailers
apply
can't
the
sell
same sort
tomatoes
of
for more than
programs in
2
Medicare
cents.
There's some complexities. We want to make sure we're not diverting from the use of generics, for example. But we think there are potential ways that we could do that, and we would love to explore those opportunities with Congress to bring out-of-pocket costs down for Medicare patients. The second thing I would say is we are looking at doing more innovative work, innovative contracting work, where we can, for example, if our drug works, we get paid. If it doesn't work, we get paid less, and in some cases, maybe even not get paid at all. There are technicalities in the U.S. that prohibit us from doing that more in the U.S. We want to work to get those removed.
But unfortunately, this committee and this hearing is not here to celebrate American success.
Is we do believe that innovation plays a role here. Cellular therapy, while not gene therapy per the previous question, those are expensive therapies. We have got to bring those costs down, and the way we will do that is we will innovate to the next generation, which hopefully is way less complex than what I described previously.
Patients diagnosed with advanced lung cancer was 5%.
Some more follow-up
Terrible.
questions for the record. Thank you, Mr.
Since
Chairman.
Merck introduced the cancer drug Keytruda in 2014, the survival rate I'm not an apologist for big pharma. In fact, when corporations manipulate government to their advantage, crony capitalism, I'm an unfettered critic. But in defense of capitalism, I am a consistent, He's alive today because of Keytruda. Milton Friedman once celebrating that if you want to create Johnson & Johnson's Remicade was the first law that retailers can't sell tomatoes chronic conditions like Crohn's disease, instantly you'll have a tomato shortage. Since its approval, I might also Remicade has revolutionized treatments for inflammatory disease. Every shortage of drugs that we've seen in the last debilitating conditions and paved the way price controls for development of other autoimmune treatments. When I began in medicine, the United States virtually all patients with rheumatoid arthritis, because while the U.S. adhered to had crippling, disfiguring arthritis in their hands, now today it's rarely seen. Europe because of the advances of American companies in the 1980s and 90s. It's not surprising that we lead the world in innovation. In 1987, Merck pledged to this committee, this hearing is not stock of its drug American success. To those suffering the majority drags us to conduct a show trial 37 years later, challenging the Inflation Reduction Act's price controls in court. They've simply brought forward people with over 11 billion treatments shipped to endemic countries. 10 years ago, this is charity, my friends, from capitalism. You don't get this under socialism because there is no profit under socialism. They have no money to give. Since Merck introduced the cancer drug Keytruda in 2014, the survival rate has grown nearly fourfold. But they also have some left over for charity, and you don't get that under that instead of because of Merck's donation, 7 countries eradicated the transmission of the number one cause of blindness in the world. Predisposition to cancer. Pharmaceutical innovation has improved cancer rates, cured hepatitis C. Johnson & Johnson's Remicade was the first monoclonal antibody approved for treating chronic conditions like Crohn's disease and rheumatoid arthritis. We've tried price controls in general here. Remicade has revolutionized treatments for inflammatory disease, made remission a reality for patients with debilitating conditions, and paved the way. It was an ultimate disaster for development of other autoimmune treatments. A study at the University of Chicago found that virtually all patients with rheumatoid arthritis over the course of 18 years would have crippling, disfiguring arthritis in their hands. Under communism, they knew this. Rarely socialism, communism, under the advances of American companies, under an American system that allowed profit to occur. In Poland, during the Soviet era, 1987, the story of the guy went to the store to donate the entire stock of its drug ivermectin to those suffering from river blindness. This is the story. Nearly 37 years later, ivermectin donation program. That's the story of socialism. That's the story of price controls. With over 11 billion treatments shipped to endemic countries. And empty shells. This is charity, my friends, from capitalism. You don't get this under socialism because there is no profit under socialism. They have no money to give. They make extraordinary profits. Do they keep some up for their investors? Yeah, that's what they're supposed to do. I don't think you guys did a very good job on answering this. Charity, and you don't get that under socialism. Add into your estimate of whether it's profitable in Canada, whether or not it costs you $2.6 billion on average to develop it. You're talking about manufacturing costs. Pharmaceutical innovation has improved cancer rates, cured hepatitis C, doubled the life span of patients living with cystic fibrosis. If you added in all the R&D, the $2.6 billion to get it through this system, price controls in general the apparatus of your company, you divided all of that out for profitability. It was a disaster, and it led to lines at the gas pump.
I have not done that analysis, but I would say that the profitability
a study at the University of Chicago found that 254 fewer have as much R&D if the whole world were Canada. Do you think you'd be developing dozens of new drugs every year if the whole world were Canada? Socialism, communism, this is what we're arguing economic system of socialism. Sure, you can make it from price now, but it became a running joke in Poland during the Soviet era. So much in the beginning. The guy went to the store. He was looking for eggs, and he asked the clerk, "Is this the store with no eggs?" And they said, "No. And he said, this is an old anecdote, he said, the miracle of capitalism is not that queens have silk stockings, but that factory girls ultimately do. But in the beginning, only the queen has silk stockings. Are the inevitable result of price controls. Rich people drive innovation. The first calculators that came out, $300 them into forgetting that price controls have never worked. Now they're like pennies or free. Let's get back to profitability. But you have to allow the price to be higher. You guys did a very good job on answering this. Brings it down as you have more widespread market. That's capitalism. Add into your estimate of whether it's profitable in Canada. There is no moral price. There is no moral amount of profit. There is no business of any of y'all telling them how much stock to buy back. You're talking about how much it costs to make food and how much you sell it for to say you have a profit in Canada. Do you think it would still be a profit, Mr. Davis, for you to sit in judgment of how much profit they should make and how they should run their companies? To get it through this system. Nothing of running companies. The apparatus of your company, you divided all of that out for profitability. But almost nobody up here has run big companies, billion-dollar companies. And you
I have not done that analysis, but I would say that the profitability would be marginal at best.
List price. Do you think you'd have as much R&D if the whole world were Canada? Do you think you'd be developing dozens of new drugs every year if the whole world were Canada? 2/3 of it.
No, I do not.
Nobody stole that. Arguing against. It disappeared because it never existed. Now, but it didn't start that way. If I build $1 million in charges so much in the beginning, that's capitalism. That's the way it works in capitalism. But because of the confusing nature of the system, the list price is much different than the net. An old anecdote, list price, and then compared to net price in other countries is not that queens have silk stockings, but that factories. The list price means absolutely nothing. Only the queen has silk stockings. Rich people get stuff in the beginning. Rich people drive the innovation. The first calculators came out $300 for adding, subtracting, and dividing machines.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair.
But you have to allow the price to be higher in the beginning, and the market brings it down. You have more widespread market. That's capitalism. We don't know what the correct price is. There is no moral price. There is no moral amount of profit. There is no business of any of y'all telling them how much stock to buy back. Their job is
Senator Hassan go and then
against the law for them not to maximize their profit. For you to sit in judgment of how much profit they should make.
So I just wanted to say
at
the outset that the last time I checked, when a buyer and seller negotiate for a price, that's
run
capitalism.
Big companies, billion-dollar companies.
And I wanted to talk with all three of our distinguished witnesses today, because one of the things that strikes me that we are struggling with is I think at various times in each one of your statements, you talked about your price reflecting the value of your product. And the thing is, human health and life is priceless.
I really was only billing
so if
that's what I was getting paid. But because
the metric
of the confusing nature of the
you
system,
will always have an
list price
excuse
is much different than the net. But
for charging
list price and then compared to
increasing
net price in other
prices
is completely
for these life-saving drugs.
And
what we are trying to do
here
is figure out how you can continue the innovation that Senator Paul just so eloquently spoke about. I would suspect that every member up here has a family member whose life has been saved by innovative medications.
Senator Baldwin, I'm sorry.
Or greatly improved.
I yielded to
but at the end of the day, we have to find a way to allow you all to innovate, but also to make sure that the market here and the system here works for the very people
Senator Hassan
who are helping to save. So I want to start with a question to you, Mr. Davis. While families in New Hampshire
so I just wanted to say
struggle
at the
to
outset
afford these
that the last time I checked, when a buyer and seller
are doing
negotiate
everything
for a
that they
price,
can
that's
to keep their
capitalism.
prices and their profits sky high. And I know
And I
you've all
wanted
talked about
to
that not being
talk
the case,
with
but
all
let's
three
just look
of our
at one thing
distinguished
here. One way
witnesses
that
today,
companies
because
do
one of the
this
things
is by
that strikes me that we are
dozens,
struggling with
even
is I think
hundreds
various
of
times in
frivolous
each one of
patents that
your
lock in their
statements,
exclusive
you
right
talked
to sell
about
their drug
your
for decades.
price
By playing
reflecting,
games like this with the
the
patent
value
system,
of your
companies
product.
block
And the thing
low-cost
is,
alternatives
human health
like
and
generics
life is
from
priceless.
coming to market. So if
Mr.
that's
Davis,
the list price for Merck's cancer
the metric
medication,
here,
Keytruda, is
you
as
will
we've
always
talked about,
have an excuse
$190,000 per year
for
per year.
charging
Can you tell us how many patents have
increasing
been filed on this
prices
medication
for these life-saving drugs?
I don't have the exact number.
And what we are trying to do
but,
here
I would
is
focus
figure out
on
how you
probably
can
the
continue
most
the
important
innovation
patents,
that Senator
which
Paul
are the
just so
composition of matter
eloquently
patents.
spoke
In
about. I
addition to
would
that, we have
suspect that every
formulation and
member
manufacturing
up
patents.
here
There is
has a
one
family
suite
member
of-
whose life has been saved by
composition of matter
innovative
patents that we have,
medications.
and those are what
or
allow us to
greatly
continue
improved.
to have
But at the end of the
exclusivity.
day,
Well, I don't think it would surprise you to learn that
allow
I
you
do
all
know
to
how many
innovate,
patents
you currently
but also
have. It's
to make
168
that the market
this
here
is what this
and the
looks
system
like.
here works
Sheet
for
after
the
sheet
very people
after
whose
sheet.
lives you are
Patent
helping
office
to save.
records show
So I want to start with a
that
question
not only
to
do you have
Mr. Davis.
168, but
While
half
families
of them
in New Hampshire
relate to the
and across
process
country
Merck uses to
struggle
manufacture
to
the
afford
drug,
these
not the
life-saving
way that the
medications
drug is used to
pharmaceutical
treat
companies
patients.
are doing
Merck
everything
is
that they can
using
to keep their
patent
prices
gimmicks
and their
and
profits sky
loopholes
high.
to
And I know
delay
you've all
other
talked about
companies from
that
selling
not being the
lower
case,
cost
but
versions
let's
of this
just look at one
medication,
thing here.
all while
One way
raising the
that
price of
companies do
Keytruda
this
in
is
the
by
US
filing
year
dozens,
after year, even
so
hundreds.
it would be good
of frivolous
if Merck
patents
would
that
just
lock in
stop
their exclusive
blocking
right to
patient
sell their drugs
access
for
to low-cost
decades.
medications
By playing games
using the
like
patent
this with the
system in
patent
this way.
system, it's
Companies
clear that
block
Merck and other
low-cost
pharmaceutical
alternatives
companies, you
like
are not
generics
alone,
from coming
won't
to
stop
market.
abusing the patent system to
Mr.
keep their
Davis,
prices high.
the list price
so it's
for
clear we
Merck's
also need
cancer
to take
medication
action on that. That's
Keytruda
something we
is,
can
as we've
do.
talked about,
Senator Braun and I have a bill
$190,000
called the
per
Medication
year, per year.
Affordability and Patent
Can you tell
Integrity
us how
Act,
many
which would
patents
help
have been
break
filed
up
on
these
this
patent
medication?
walls? And I would urge my
I don't have
colleagues
the
on both
exact
sides of the
number,
aisle to support that.
but
Now, Mr.
I would
Duato,
focus you on
in your
probably the
testimony, you
most
mentioned that
important
Johnson
patents,
& Johnson
which are the
provides
composition of matter
financial
patents,
assistance
in
to
addition to that,
uninsured
the
patients in the
formulation and
United
manufacturing
States.
patents. There
However,
is
the
one suite
barriers to access these
of
programs
composition of
are
matter patents that we
unreasonably
have,
high.
and those are
For an
what allow
expensive
us to
medication
continue
like your
to
company's
have
arthritis drug,
exclusivity.
Well,
I don't think it would
what does a
surprise you
patient have
to learn
do
that
to
I
get
do know how many
assistance
patents
from the Johnson
you
&
currently
Johnson
have. It's
program?
168.
Thank you. We care deeply
This is
about
what
patient
this
access,
looks like.
and we
Sheet
put a
after
lot of
sheet
work
after sheet.
in
Patent
developing
office records show
well and
that
wide
not only do you
patient
have
assistance programs, and
168,
we
but
have
half of
mechanisms
them
for patients
relate
to
to
connect
the
with
process
us
Merck uses to
via,
manufacture the drug, not the way that
mechanism
the
like
drug is used to treat
website
patients.
called Janssen Care
Merck
Path,
is
in which
using
patients can
patent gimmicks
access
and loopholes to
patient
delay
assistance.
other
We
companies
supported
from selling
1.1
lower-cost
million
versions of
people
this
with
medication,
patient copay
all while
assistance
raising
last
the
year.
price of
Well, let me
Keytruda
just
in the U.S.
talk a little
year
bit about
after
that. The
year.
initial
So
application,
it
which
would
I
be
have here,
good
is 6
if
pages
Merck
long,
would just stop
and it requires
blocking
pages
patients'
of additional
access to
documents
low-cost
for income
medications
verification
by using
in
the
the
patent
fine
system
print
in this way.
This
It's
document
clear
even
that
requires
Merck
the patient
and other
to consent
pharmaceutical
to a
companies
credit
you are not
report
alone
check
won't
and
stop
other
abusing
financial
the patent
disclosures
system to keep
Mr.
their
Duato,
prices high.
everyone on
So
this
it's clear we
dais
also
wants
need
you
to
to
take
charge
action
a
on that.
fair
That's
price
something
for
we
your
can
company's
do.
medications.
Senator
But
Braun
if
and I have a
someone
bill
does
called the
need
Medication
assistance paying for their
Affordability and
medication,
Patent Integrity Act,
this process
which would
would
help
have to be
break up these
streamlined
patent
and
walls.
easily
And I would
available
urge
to
my
anyone
colleagues on
who
both sides of the
qualifies.
aisle to
So I
support
would
that.
urge you to look
Now, Mr.
personally
Duato,
at this
in
application
your
when
testimony,
somebody
you
is
mentioned
dealing
that
with a
Johnson
serious
&
illness,
Johnson
the last
provides
thing they need to do is
financial
read the fine
assistance to
print
uninsured
and
patients
decide
in
that
the
they have
United
to
States.
disclose a credit
However,
report,
the barriers
the
to
relevance
access
of which
these
programs
are
escapes
unreasonably
me.
high. For an expensive
Mr.
medication like
and
your
Mr.
company's
Duato,
arthritis drug
we could
Stelara,
also increase competition by making it easier
to
for
get
generic
assistance
drugs to get
from
approved.
the Johnson & Johnson
Mr.
program.
Boerner, let's turn to the
Thank
BMS
you. We
drug
care
prevention
deeply about
drug
patient
Eliquis.
access,
The
and
list price, as
we
we've talked
put
about,
a lot of work
is
in
$7,100
developing
per year.
well
How many
and
generics of
wide
this drug
patient
could
assistance
a
programs, and
patient
we
in
have
the United States
mechanisms
get at the
for
pharmacy
patients to
today?
connect with us via
Senator, in the U.S., there are
mechanisms
not yet
like,
generics available.
website
Right. There
called
are
Janssen
zero
Care Path,
generic
in which
versions of
patients
Eliquis
can
available to
access
patients, even though
patient
the
assistance. We
original
supported
patents on the medication began to
1.1 million
sunset
people
in
with patient
2019
copay assistance last
because
year.
your
Well, let me
company
just
has sued to block
talk a little bit
two
about that. The
approved
initial
generics
application,
from
which
the
I have
US
here, is
market
6 pages
until
long,
2028
and it
at the
requires
earliest.
pages
Isn't
of
that right?
additional documents for income verification.
Senator, we have
in the fine print,
allowed for generic
this
entry in
document even
2028.
requires
That's
the
correct.
patient to consent
Right.
to
So
a
we
credit
have two
report
generics
check
ready to go.
and other financial disclosures.
Your
Mr. Duato,
original patent
everyone
is
on
well
this
past
dais wants you to charge a fair
expired,
price for your
but
company's
you
medications.
still are
But if someone someone does need assistance paying for their medication, this process has to be streamlined and Johnson's autoimmune arthritis medication Stelara is nearly $80,000 annually. So I would urge you to look personally at this application. When somebody is dealing with a serious illness, the last thing they need to do is read the fine print and decide that they have to disclose zero biosimilars for Stelara available in the United States today because Johnson & Johnson has also sued and Mr. Duato the launch. We could also increase competition by making it easier for generic drugs to get approved. You have all talked about Boerner, let's turn to the BMS drug prevention drug, Eliquis. The list price, as we've talked about, is $7,100 getting drugs to market, but then you are actively working to block the less expensive biosimilars and generics to come to market. And that's something we should address. Thank you, Mr.
Senator, in the U.S., there are not yet generics available.
Thank you, Mr.
Right.
Chairman.
There are zero generic versions of Eliquis available to patients,
taking time
even
away
though
from your
the original patents on the medication
your
began to
respective
sunset
companies to
in 2019.
be here and to inform us and in some cases to get berated by
to block two approved generics from the U.S. market until 2028 at the earliest. Isn't that right?
One is that
Senator, we have allowed for generic entry in 2028. That's correct.
Mr. Paul,
right.
or Senator
so
Paul
we have two generics ready to go.
Rand Paul.
Your
and that is
original
that
patent is well past
free enterprise system
expired,
works
but you still are actively
and
trying
I know
to
we
prevent
keep asking
generics
you,
from coming to market.
What are you doing to
Mr.
try
Duato,
and reduce the prices of your products?
Johnson's autoimmune arthritis medication,
that's not what happens in free enterprise and capitalism.
$80,000 annually.
I hope it doesn't
Similar
come as a
to
shock to my colleagues.
There are currently
in
zero
capitalism,
low-cost
if you're running an enterprise where you have a fiduciary responsibility to your owners,
there are
you try and get
zero
as high a price as you
biosimilars
can.
for Stelara available in the United States today because
you try and make as much profit as you can. That's how free enterprise works. You think Chevrolet sits back and says, gosh, how can we get the price of the Chevrolet down?
No,
it's
you
like,
have all
how
talked
high
about the
price
need
can
to
I
have
get
speed of
and
access, and
maximize
Mr.
the
Chairman,
profit for my shareholder?
wrapping right up.
What price does McDonald's charge for a sandwich?
Getting
as high
drugs
a
to
price
market,
as they
but
can
then you
get.
are actively working to
the
block
amazing thing about
the less
free
expensive biosimilars and generics to
is
come to
that
market.
someone
And
figured
that's
out
something
that
we
if
should
everybody
address.
does
Thank you, Mr.
that,
Chair.
and you have
Senator
competition among all the players.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman,
somehow
and appreciate
the prices come
these
down.
executives
And the
taking
quality
time
goes
away
up.
from your
And the access to the
responsibilities
product
at your
is
respective
broader.
companies to
It's
be
the
here and
marvel.
to inform us,
It doesn't
and
seem
in
to
some
make a lot of
cases to
sense,
get
but it's the
berated by us
marvel
and
of
give us an
capitalism.
opportunity to pontificate on our
obviously,
various topics, which
wise
I'm about to
companies
do.
say, well, you don't just raise prices to the
one
roof,
is that
and do things that are going to harm
I fully concur
your credibility
with
and the
Mr.
trust
Paul,
in the
Senator
marketplace,
Paul,
and have your
indicated just a
employees
moment
not
ago,
want to
Rand
work there
Paul.
because they're going to figure they're working for bad
and
people.
that is that
so
a
wise
free
enterprises don't
enterprise
just
system
do all the things
works
I just mentioned. They also say we're going to do other things.
And I
care
know
for the
we keep
poor
asking you,
and care for people who want to come
what are you
work in our
doing to
company.
try
We
and
do those things
reduce
too.
the prices of your
Recognize
products?
free
The
enterprise
answer
is about
that's not
enterprises
what happens
battling
in free
each other
enterprise and capitalism.
with higher prices.
I hope it doesn't
in many
come as a
cases,
shock to
and
my
then they
colleagues.
get pushed out
In capitalism, if you're running an enterprise where you have a fiduciary responsibility to your owners, you try and get as high a price as you can.
As Senator Paul
That's what you
indicated,
try and
there's
do.
some would like price control.
You try and make as
There's
much
some would like
profit as you
socialized
can.
medicine.
That's how free
it's like,
enterprise works.
Have you seen
you
what
think
that
Chevrolet
produces?
produces?
Back? And says,
It doesn't
how can we
produce
get the
new
price of the
drugs.
Chevrolet down?
It
No, it's
doesn't
like,
produce
How
cures.
high price can I get?
It
and
sounds
maximize
great.
the profit
We're
for my shareholder.
What
price
price
control
is
is just
McDonald's
another
charge
name
for a
for
sandwich?
as high a price as they can get.
Socialism light.
But
Our system works.
thing about free enterprise,
But there are ways to improve it.
Is
and
that
I'm very
someone
concerned
figured out that if everybody
this
does
disparity
that, and you
between
have competition
list
among all
price
the players,
and what you
that
actually
somehow
get paid,
the prices
is a
come
problem.
down.
I don't know why it's a
and
problem
the
or what we
quality
can
goes
do about
up.
it. But
and the
do you
access
have
to the
PBMs
is broader.
And
it's the marvel.
Getting prices and discounts
doesn't seem to
like
make a lot of
this
sense
in other
but it's the
countries that you compete in
of capitalism.
Yes, Mr.
Now,
Boerner,
Senator, we do not. This is a unique element of the U.S.
to
healthcare
the
system.
roof.
Is that true for you also, Mr.
That is true for
do
us as
things
well.
that are going to harm your
This is unique. The
and
inequity
the
that
trust
exists
in
in the U.S. is
marketplace,
because of
and
that
have
we
your
have higher
employees not want to
out-of-pocket
work
costs
there
for
because they're going to
patients
figure
than
they're working
anywhere
for
else
bad
in the
people.
developed world.
So wise
So I
enterprises
hope we
don't
focus
just
on
do
this.
all the things I just
We may
mentioned.
not
They
have
also say
the
we're
right
going
bad
to
guys
do other
here.
things and care for
All right,
the poor.
these are the guys
and care
developing
for people who
cures
want to come work
and
in our
helping
company.
people
We do those things
solve
too.
disease, but
Recognize
diseases.
free enterprise is about enterprises
we have something here they don't
battling
have
each
in the
other
rest of the world.
with higher
These
prices
PBMs
in many cases,
and then
higher
they
and
get
higher
pushed
list
out
prices
by
because
people
they
develop
get
new
paid
products
based
and
on
put them out
how
of
high the
business.
list price
It's-
is, because they get a
it's how it
percent
works.
of the list
But
price.
let me
I'm
turn
not
to,
sure where all the
and I
money
know,
goes.
as
Some of it goes
Senator
back
Paul
to
indicated,
patients.
there's some
Some
like
goes
price
to the
controls.
companies if
There's
they're
some with like
self-insured.
socialized medicine.
I don't know where it all goes.
And it's like,
but I think
have you seen what
that's
that
the
produces?
issue. So let me ask each of you.
It doesn't produce new drugs.
If you were in
it
our
doesn't produce
shoes,
cures.
knowing what you knew,
It
sounds great.
What should we be doing to
price
price
controls
controls?
is just another name for
products down
capitalism.
to our,
Socialism
to
light.
the people of the country
Our
and to the
system
country
works,
at large, to the
but
government
there are
that
ways
buys
to
a lot
improve
of-
it.
A lot
And
of
I'm
goods,
very
a lot of
concerned
drugs.
this disparity
what
between
should we be
list
focused on?
price
And I know that
and
you
what
sell
you
to
actually get
PBMs, so you
paid
got to be careful
is a
not to
problem.
step on their toes
I don't know
too
why
hard
it's a
because they
problem
might
or what we
punish
can
you.
do about it.
But what
do you have
what advice would you give
PBMs
us? What should we be
and,
looking at? Where's
getting
the
problem in this mess? We'll start other countries that you compete in.
Maybe three things I would offer, Senator. First, Senator, we do not. This is a unique element of the U.S. healthcare system. One, delink profits from intermediaries.
This is unique. The inequity that exists in the U.S. is because of that we have higher out-of-pocket costs for patients than anywhere else in the developed world.
Require that those rebates be passed on to lower
we may not have the right bad guys here.
Number two,
all right, these are the guys developing
I firmly
cures
believe
and helping
we have the
people
ability to
solve
help lower out-of-patient costs in Medicare.
But we have something here they don't have in the rest of the
same
world.
types of copay
These
support that
PBMs
we do on the
that
commercial
want
side
higher and higher
to
list
Medicare
prices
patients. That would
because
be a
they
second
get
thing.
paid
And the
based on
third
how
thing,
high the list price
we've
is, 'cause
referenced
they
it
get a percent
before.
of the list
We
price.
do
I'm not
innovative
sure where all the money
contracting
goes.
outside of the U.S. where
Some of it
we
goes
get
back to
paid if our
patients,
product works.
some goes to the
There are
companies that they're
constraints on our
self-insured.
ability to do
I
that
don't know
in
where
the
it all
U.S. I would
goes,
like to see those
but I
removed.
think
That would be very
that's
helpful.
the issue. So let me ask
Mr.
each
Davis?
of you.
I would say that
if you were in our
Chris
shoes,
basically covered
knowing
all
what
of
you
the things
knew,
we would also look to do.
What should we be doing to try and get the cost
three
of
things, as
products
Mr. Boerner, I
down
would
to our
make sure that
to the
the
people of the
rebates and
country and to
discounts
the
that we
country at
pay
large, to the
to
government that buys
PBMs
a lot
go
of
back to
a lot of
patients to
goods, a
reduce
lot of
out-of-pocket
drugs.
costs. I will make sure
What should
that,
we be
as
focused
we are
on?
trying
And
to do,
I
and I
know
know
that
this
you
committee
sell
is
to
looking into
PBMs, so you
that,
got to be
would
careful not
delink
to
the
step on their
compensation
toes
of the
too hard
PBMs
because they
from
might
the
punish
list
you.
price.
But
And finally, I would
but
sit down
what advice
to
would
see
you give
what we
us?
can
What should
do
we be looking
to
at?
provide
Where's the problem in this
patient
mess?
assistance
We'll
program for
start here,
patients in
Mr.
Medicare
Boerner.
Part D, but
Maybe three
also
things
look
I would
to
offer
further
up, Senator.
lower
First,
the out-of-pocket cost
to
for
the
patients
complexity that
the
you just
IRA is
described.
Thank
One,
you.
delink
You did mention the fact that the
from
PBMs are largely
intermediaries
owned
from
by
the
the insurance
list price of
companies.
the drug and
So,
the rebates
Senators, we
rather
think
that are
PBMs
provided.
are
You
going to
could
be lowering our
that would be
costs as an
important.
employer.
And
Let's say you hire a
alternatively,
PBM to lower your costs, but
require that
it might
those
lower your costs,
rebates
but then,
be passed on to
then it's
lower
passing on their profit to the insurance company. Is that a
That's
problem?
number
Is the
one.
fact that the
Number
PBMs
two,
are owned by
firmly
the insurance
believe
companies?
we have the
Is that a
ability to
problem
help
here?
lower
Is that something we need to look at as well?
in Medicare.
Do any of you have any
we
comment on
could
that?
provide the same types
The
of
three
copay support
PBMs
that
are
we
owned
do
by
on the
the three
commercial
largest
side
insurance
to
companies,
Medicare patients.
and
That
together
would be
they
a
control
second
about
thing.
80%
And the
of the
third
market
thing,
of the
we've
prescriptions
referenced
in the
it
US.
before.
Yeah,
We
I'm a
do
big
innovative
believer
contracting
in free
outside of the
enterprise,
US
as you can
where
tell
we
by
get
my
paid if
opening
our
comments.
product works.
At the same
There are
time, I'm
constraints
concerned that
on
we've
our
got some
ability to do that in
structures
the
here
US. I would like to
that
see
are
those removed. That would be very
anti-competitive
helpful.
and make markets less effective, and we probably ought to
I would
focus on
say
some of
that
those. Thank you.
Chris
Appreciate
basically
your
covered all of
testimony.
the things we would also look to do.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, three things, as Mr. Boerner, I would make sure that the rebates and discounts that we pay to PBMs go back to patients to reduce out-of-pocket costs. I will make sure that, as we are trying to do, and I know this committee is looking into that, would delink the compensation of the PBMs from the list price. And finally, I would sit down to see what we can do to provide a patient assistance program for patients in Medicare Part D, but also look to further lower the out-of-pocket cost for patients that the IRA is bringing.
The point
Thank you. You did mention the fact that the PBMs are largely owned by the insurance companies.
I can't
so,
follow the
Senators, we
dollars,
think
and it's
PBMs are going to be
complex,
lowering our
is a real
costs as an
issue.
employer, let's say, and you hire a PBM to lower your costs. But
sharing,
it might lower your costs, but
then
it's passing on their profit to the insurance company. Is that a problem? Is the fact that the PBMs are owned by the insurance companies? Is that a problem here? Is that something we need to look at as well? Do any of you have any comment on that?
The three PBMs are owned by the three largest insurance companies, and together they control about 80% of the market of the prescriptions in the US.
I'm a big believer in free enterprise, as you can tell by my opening comments. At the same time, I'm concerned that we've got some structures here that are anti-competitive and make markets less effective, and we probably ought to focus on some of those. Thank you. Appreciate your
testimony. To inform the policies
Thank you, Senator Baldwin.
Adopt. Thank you. I was pleased this last May that
very
this committee advanced into
my bipartisan
the back and
drug
forth
pricing
Senator Romney,
which I lead with
Senator Braun.
Your points about
our bill would require basic transparency from
your free market, but
at any juncture in
there are
which you
times
want to
when
raise
market
the
failures.
price.
We also have
list
an
price
obligation,
I think, to oversee
by
because
more than a certain amount.
Our committee, along with the finance committee,
Asking questions
like what is the cost to manufacture?
We need to have good stewardship of
what
Medicare.
do you invest in R&D? Something we really support. How much are you spending on marketing and advertising?
Senator Romney just
what are you
made
doing
about
in terms of stock buybacks?
I don't know.
Is there excessive
I can't follow
executive
the
compensation? Is a real issue.
I agree that we also
have
to
start
that
just by
transparency
sharing
within
some of my constituent struggles.
I remember
I have a constituent
who
literally
turns down the heat
when we were having
winter
our confirmation
because
hearing
that's how
she is able to
secretary
afford the prescription drugs she needs
for her wellness.
Who came out of the pharmaceutical industry.
There are
and I shared
with him
are making
people are rationing
a letter
their
from
medication.
a constituent
People
who
are
is
forgoing
their
medication.
He's talking about
affordability
every month, not just the insulin, but the test strips, et cetera.
And I said, what do I tell this dad about the high cost, which had just, by the way, increased to inform the policies that we adopt. It's complicated. I was pleased this last May that this committee advanced my bipartisan fair drug pricing act, because it's complicated. Which I lead with Senator Braun. I remember when basic transparency years ago now, from your companies at any juncture in which you want overnight raise the price from $100 basically to list price of a prescription drug by more than a certain amount. Certainly told me what a burden that was. Asking questions like, what is the cost to manufacture the product? If you could show me, what do you invest in follow R&D, the money, a chart, really follow the money. How much are you spending on marketing and advertising? What are you doing in additional stock buybacks? Is there excessive executive compensation? So, Mr. Duato, I agree that we also have to have that transparency. In the U.S. is $79,000 a year. I remember, by the way, in Wisconsin, the median household income is $72,000. When we were having our confirmation hearing for his secretary, Secretary Azar. Your company has out of the pharmaceutical industry selling this, and I shared with him in the rest of the world combined a letter from a constituent who has 2 diabetic sons. Under the Fair Drug Pricing Act, you would need to every month, not just the insulin, but the test strips, et cetera. So, and I said, what do I tell this dad talking about the high cost, which had just, by the way, increased significantly for this particular drug? And he just
Senator, thank you for the question. We publish every year, since 6 years ago,
I can't tell my constituent,
a report that we call the Transparency Report, and we explain our pricing practices, and we give transparency also to the different intermediaries that play into the model. We disclose our advertising expenses and our R&D expenses. What I can tell you is that in 2022, which was the last year that our report was published and is available, we spent double in R&D, 110% more in R&D than we did in sales and marketing.
Nobody could. We need additional transparency for sales.
I don't have it top of my hand, but I will sure to follow up with you to give it to you, but it was double the amount in R&D than we did spend in sales and marketing.
$79,000 a year. By the way, in Wisconsin, the median household income, the price of Eliquis is in the U.S. has increased by $4,000 since its launch. Your company has made twice as much of this drug selling this arthritis treatment in the U.S. How much did your company spend on R&D last year? Going back to 2016.
Our company spent just over $9 billion last year on R&D.
And then how much did your company spend on stock buybacks, just to look at one component of what I'm talking about? How much does Johnson & Johnson spend on marketing and advertising? Does $12.7 billion sound right from the
Senator, thank you for the question.
That's
we publish every year since 6 years ago a report that we call the Transparency Report, and we explain our pricing practices, and we give transparency also to the different intermediaries that play into the model. We disclose our advertising expenses and our R&D expenses. What I can tell you is that in 2022, which was the last year that our report was published and is available, we spent double in R&D, 110% more in R&D than we did in sales and marketing.
Literally tens of millions of dollars. Do you know what that dollar figure is for sales?
I don't have it top of my hand, but I will sure to follow up with you to give it to you. But it was double the amount in R&D.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Well, let's.
I think all of us could agree that when a doctor prescribes a needed medication,
in the U.S. has increased
that
by
cost should not be an insurmountable barrier.
In other countries,
the
cost of this drug is decreasing.
Yet, for more than half of the adults in my state, according to a survey,
our company spent just over $9 billion last year on R&D.
They're worried
and then how much
about
did your company spend on stock buybacks, dividends, and executive compensation last year?
I don't have that exact figure, Senator.
Out of 3
but
does $12.7 billion sound right from the
skipping a dose of medicine, cutting pills in half, or not
for the first
filling
time,
a
thanks to the
prescription
Inflation Reduction
because of
Act,
cost.
Medicare will negotiate
I talked to a young woman with type 1 diabetes who, after she aged out of her
families
parents'
in Wisconsin, but the truth is it's
insurance,
really not enough.
started cutting back on her insulin.
If they should turn
she ended up in the emergency room
or buy the
and was gravely ill because
all
of
while
that.
companies are
She felt she just
raking
couldn't
in
afford it
literally
and
tens
took
of
a
millions of
very
dollars or
unwise
billions.
chance.
We have more work
This
to
is
do.
a huge problem. But another
Thank you,
aspect
Senator
of
Collins.
this discussion
Thank
is
you
that
very
many
much,
new
Mr.
medications
Chairman.
represent true breakthroughs.
I think all of us could agree that
disease-modifying
when a doctor
therapies or even
prescribes
cures.
a needed medication,
And the other part
that cost should
is
not be
that
an
literally
insurmountable
billions
barrier
of dollars
are
to the
invested
patient
using
in
it.
developing
Yet
drugs
for
that
more
end
than
up
half
to not
of
be
the adults
successful.
in my state,
So I
according
think we
to a
have to
survey,
balance
it is
all of these
a barrier.
concerns.
They're worried
These
about
new
affording
drugs
the
often
cost
cost
of
more, but they
prescription
have the
drugs.
potential
And in the
to
last
reduce
year,
the number of
nearly
unnecessary
1 out of 3
hospitalizations and lead
Maine
to better
adults
patient
reported
outcomes.
skipping
They
a
may
dose
be worth
of
it.
medicine
For
cutting
disorders
pills
like
in half,
Alzheimer's, the
or not
breakthrough
filling
drugs
a
can help
prescription
patients
because of
have
cost.
healthier and active
I talked to
longer,
a young woman
benefiting
with type 1
society,
diabetes
as well as their
who,
families.
after she
For example, I've
aged out
heard
of
of a
her
patient
parents'
being diagnosed with
insurance,
mild cognitive
started
impairment early
cutting
enough
back on
that the
her
patient was able to
insulin.
benefit from
She
the
ended
newly
up in
available
the
treatment
emergency
and
room
actually returned
and
to
was
the workforce.
gravely ill
That's
because of
quite an
that.
accomplishment. Now,
She
last
felt she
year,
just couldn't
the
afford
chairman
it
criticized
and took a very unwise
this particular
chance.
company for
So
a list
this
price
is a huge
of
problem.
$26,500
But another
per year.
aspect of
Even
this
after the
discussion
company
is
in
that
a really
many new
unprecedented
medications
fashion
represent true
issued
breakthroughs,
a lengthy
disease-modifying
process by
therapies
which
or
they
even
arrived
cures.
at the price.
And
Still,
the
sticker
other
shock
part
around
is
list
that
prices,
literally
and
billions
speculative
of
claims that
dollars
certain
are
therapies will
invested
bankrupt
in
the Medicare
developing
program
drugs
have
that end
contributed
up
to
not be
restrictive coverage
successful.
policies.
So
patient
I think we
confusion,
have to
and limited
balance all of
uptake.
these concerns.
So
These
I
new
would
drugs
like,
often cost
Mr.
more,
Davis,
but if
you
they
to
have the
discuss
potential to
how
reduce
we
the number
can
of
balance
unnecessary
the need to have
hospitalizations and
affordable
lead to better
patient
patient
outcomes
outcomes
they may be
without
worth it.
hampering
For
innovation.
disorders like
And how
Alzheimer's,
access to the
breakthrough
next
drugs
what
can
would
help
be
keep
the
patients
impact
on
healthier
access to the
and
next
active
generation
longer,
of
benefiting
medications
society
if price
as well as
controls
their
like those in
families
Europe.
For example,
are
I've heard of a
implemented.
patient being
How do you
diagnosed
see
with mild
a solution to
cognitive
the
impairment
balance
early enough
between
that the patient was able to
affordability
benefit
and
from the
innovation?
newly
Yes,
available
so
treatment
Senator, thank
and
you for the
actually
question.
return
You know,
to
I
the
would start
workforce.
with, you know, at
That's
Merck,
quite
and
an
what are the principles
accomplishment.
we apply when
Now,
we think about
last
how we
year,
price drugs?
the chairman criticized
Because I think it also gets to some of the other
this
questions that have
particular
been asked
company for a
about
list
what stops you
price
from just
of
raising your price.
$26,500
And I can tell you
per
that
year,
as a
even
company,
after
and this
the
goes back to the
company
core of
in a
who we
really
are over 130
unprecedented
years
fashion
and is truly the
issued
purpose
a
we live by.
lengthy
And that is, we
analysis
look
of the
at
process
several
by which
elements.
they
We look at
arrived
what is the
at the
benefit to the
price.
patient.
Still,
But
sticker
equally, we do look
shock
at what is the
around
benefit or
list
the cost to
prices
the
and
system.
speculative claims
We look
that
at
certain
access
therapies
and
will
affordability.
bankrupt
And I can
the
tell you, for
Medicare
instance, when we
program
launched
have contributed
Keytruda, we launched
to
at parity to
restrictive
market price,
coverage
even though we knew we had a
policies,
better
patient
product, in
confusion,
part because we
and
wanted to
limited
ensure
uptake.
access. And
So
so we look
I
at all
would
of that,
like,
and then we look at what does
Mr.
it take
Davis,
to
you to
absorb the cost
discuss
of all the failed drugs. We
how
know
we
90%
can
of all drugs
balance
we will
the
bring
need
into
to
the
have
clinic fail.
affordable
The reality of it is, the drugs that make it have to
without
fund that failure. In the
hampering
case of
innovation,
Merck, it's just
and
interesting,
how
I think, to point out,
access to the
since
next- what would be
2014,
the
the
impact
minority of
on
drugs
access
we
to
have
the
launched
next
have actually even
generation
returned their cost of R&D.
medications
The minority.
if price controls like
I'm
those
sorry, the
in
majority
Europe
have not returned their
are
cost of R&D.
implemented.
So
How do
it
you
means that when
see
you do get the
a
rare drug
solution
that
to the
succeeds, it has
balance
to help
between
cover that. So that's what
affordability
we're
and
facing in the
innovation?
system.
Yes.
But as we
So,
look at
Senator,
how can we
thank you for
fix
the
this,
question.
I think
You know,
I
I
would
would
start
start
with
with
out-of-pocket
cost
and Merck,
and
and we have
what are
to
the
find a way
principles we
to
apply when we
really
think about how we
drive
price
that
drugs.
down, and then continue to find
because
ways
I think
to
it
bring
also gets to
better
some of the other
access to
questions
the
that have been
types
asked
of
about
access
what
programs
stops you
we've
from
all
just
talked about
raising
here,
your price.
whether it's and I can tell you that patient assistance as a company, and this goes back to the core of who we are. All of the ways we can help 130 individual person is address that affordability challenge, which and that is we all know look at several. I don't want to see anyone. What is the benefit to the patient? But equally, we do look at what is the benefit or the cost to the system. We look at access and affordability. And I can tell you, for instance, when we launched Keytruda, we launched at parity to market price, even though we knew we had a better product, in part because we wanted to ensure access. And so we look at all of that, and then we look at what does it take to absorb the cost of all the failed drugs. We know 90% of all drugs, we will bring into the clinic. As we look at the system, the ecosystem, the drugs that make it have to fund that. It is important to understand that all players are important. It's just interesting. The role of the NIH is important. Since 2014, basically, the minority does the basic research. Have actually will return the cost. They provide the minority the lock, but they don't have the key. Not return the cost. We provide the key. We take that basic. It means that when you do get the rare drug, we sculpt it into a molecule. It has to help. We were able to say now that we know it's targeted. So that's what we're facing in the system. But as we look at how can we fix this, I think we have to get to the out-of-pocket part of the development, and we have to find a way, which is the clinical development, to ensure safety, drive that down, to bring the drug to market. And then continue to find ways to bring. We need all players in the access.
And if I could ask you to start to wrap up,
we've all talked about here. Yes, whether it's important that we do that. Patient assistance programs. I think as you look in the COVID vaccine situation, all of the ways we can help. We did not receive any federal funding for affordability challenge, which we all know all of our own resources. I don't want to see anyone face that. We commented it was $2.5 billion. We did that at risk. But one of the programs we did do, Lagavrio, did have some basis from the NIH, and they were compensated for that.
On behalf of the chairman, Senator Smith.
How is the fact that there has been
Mr. Chair.
federal
Thanks to
help,
all of you for being
for example, in the development of the COVID
I'm going to start with you, Mr. Davis.
vaccines?
Could you tell
how
us
does
how
that
much
factor
Merck spends
into
on
the pricing?
advertising every year?
Well, so if you look in the United States, as we look at the system, our direct-to-consumer advertising is about $350 million. It is important to understand that all players are important. So the role of the NIH is important. I don't have that. The NIH, I wouldn't know that. Basically, come back to you on that. Does the basic research, if you will. They provide the lock. But they don't have the key. We provide the key. We take that basic research number, but we sculpt it into a molecule.
And so
we were able to say, now that we know a targeted disease to go
after,
how do we do it? And then we spend our resources in the most expensive part of the development and the riskiest part, which is the clinical development, to ensure safety and efficacy to bring the drug to market. So we need all players in the ecosystem.
And if I could ask you to start to wrap up for Senator Smith.
It's important that we do that. And so I think as you look in the COVID vaccine situation, we did not receive any federal funding. Yes, I'm happy to do that, Senator. So, all of direct consumer advertising, we commented it was $2.5 billion. We did that at studies that have shown, but one of the programs we drives better adherence. It drives some patients to understand from the use of their medications. They were compensated for that. Overall, will bring
on behalf of the chairman, Senator Smith.
I do believe there's a valid educational piece to direct-to-consumer advertising, and I also believe we need to be full and fair and transparent in helping people understand the cost of drugs. The reason we brought suit, the one you're referring to, so if you was our concern that the specific request direct-to-consumer advertising is about was that you show the list price of the drug. And our concern, based on all the conversations we've had, I don't have that morning, I wouldn't know that, is that can often be very misleading and in fact could cause patients not to seek the drug, when in reality, take Januvia as an example, if we put on an advertisement that it's $6,900, when in reality, but we can come back to it. If you take the total in the system, it's $690. I would hate to think someone doesn't show up to get that medicine because they don't understand the price. What we supported instead, which is what we do today, in all of our direct-to-consumer advertising, we drive you to a site that gives our list price, that gives all of the rebates we provide so that you can see it, and we give further information and education. We think that is a more effective tool and a more accurate tool to stop the misperceptions that exist. That's why we raised that concern. Yes, I'm happy to do that, Senator. So, direct consumer advertising serves an important purpose. There's been studies that have shown that it drives better adherence, it drives patients to understand the use of their medications, and it overall will bring benefits to the health system. So I do believe there's a valid educational piece to direct-to-consumer advertising, and I also believe we need to be full and fair and transparent and helping people understand the cost of drugs. The reason
Senator, I don't
we
have that
brought
exact
suit, the
figure
one
off
you're
the top of
referring
my
to,
head. What
was
I
our
can
concern
say
that the specific
is that
request that was
for
in
most
that
of our oral
was that you
oncologic
show the list
drugs,
price of the drug.
we were able, as
and our
on the
concern,
commercial
based on all
side,
the conversations
to bring
we've had
copays
here this
down
morning,
to a very
is
low
that
amount,
can
and
often
in many
be very
cases to
misleading,
zero.
and
Now,
in fact, could
to a
cause
point
patients
that was
not to
raised
seek the
earlier,
drug,
we have to
when
do
in
more to
reality,
make
take
that
Januvia as
more
an example.
widely
If
available
we
and
put
an
on
easier
an advertisement
process
that it's
to actually get
$6,900,
into
when in
those
reality,
programs, and we're
if you take
working
the
on
total in
that.
the
We've been
system,
doing that
it's
since I became CEO in
$690. I would
November,
hate to think
and
someone
that's something we're
doesn't show
committed
up to get that
And
medicine
again, I'd like to
because
be
they
able to
don't
provide that
understand
same
the price.
benefit on the
What we
Medicare side.
supported instead, which
if
is
you
what we
have a
do
list
today,
price
in
that
all of
is-
our
and I
direct-to-consumer
get what you all are
advertising,
saying about the
we
list price is just
drive
the
you
list
to a
price.
site
That isn't
that
necessarily
gives
people
our
pay,
list
but if you have a
price,
list
it
price,
gives
then you have
all
a
of the rebates we
co-insurance
provide
responsibility
so
that's a
that you can
percentage
see
of the
it, and
list
we
price.
give further information and
That could still be
education.
quite a
We
significant
think that
amount
is a
of
more
money. I mean, I
effective
think it
tool
could be,
and a more accurate
in
tool
this
to
case,
stop the misperceptions that exist. That's why we raised that concern.
$6,800 a month.
One of the
for
things
this
that I think is
medication.
really confusing
Senator,
for
what you're
patients
pointing
is
out
to
is
try to figure out
absolutely
what,
why
how
we
much
believe
things
we've got to
cost in the
also
health
look at
system
ways to
overall,
bring that list
including in
price
prescription
down.
medications.
We've been
And,
discussing at length
so
this
let me just
sort of
ask you- I'm gonna,
complexity and
ask
the
you about
intermediaries
this,
play
Dr. Boerner.
in this
How
system
much
that
would
lead to
acute
incentives to
myeloid
drive those
leukemia
list
patient-
prices
how much
up.
would that patient
But
pay
unquestionably,
every month for
because
your
out-of-pocket
drug,
costs
Adifa, the
and
cancer
co-insurance,
treatment,
for
that if,
example,
let's
are
say they
typically tied to
had
that list price,
20%
we have to find
co-insurance
ways to bring that list
responsibility.
price down. Senator, I don't have
agree with
that exact
I think
figure off the
that
top of my
is a
head. What
really
I can
significant issue,
say
particularly as I
is
think some of
that
my colleagues have pointed
for
out
most
that
of our
when you,
oral oncologic
get to these
drugs,
patient assistance
we're able,
programs,
as on the
they're,
commercial side,
they're
to
quite
bring copays
confusing
down
and
to a very
hard
low
to,
amount, and in many cases to
hard to
zero.
navigate
Now,
through, and I
to a point that
think
was raised
that,
earlier, we have to do more to
sometimes
make
that's
that
only available
more
if you have
widely
commercial
available and an
insurance,
easier
and if you don't have
process
commercial insurance,
to
then you could
actually
really
get
be flat out
into
a lot.
those programs. And we're
Senator,
working
that's
on that.
correct.
And
And
in
in
fact,
fact,
I
I
referenced that since I became CEO, one of the things we've done on the commercial side, and again, I'd like
is
to
really
be able to
begun
provide
to
that
look
same
at
benefit on the Medicare side. How many hoops do patients have to go through to get access to these copay support programs? We've provided $2.5 billion in copay support programs over the last 5 years as a company, provided $12 billion in free product.
Could still be quite a
But
significant
we've got to
amount of
make
money.
it
I mean, I
easier and
think
more
it could be,
universally available
in
for
this case,
commercial patients to get access to that.
$6,800
Again, there are some
a month
constraints to us
this
being able to
medication.
provide those services
Senator,
on the
what
Medicare
you're
side.
pointing out
There's
is
some very legitimate
absolutely
concerns
why we believe we've got to
providing those
also
on the
look at
Medicare
ways
side
to bring
because
that
you don't
list
want
price
to obviously
down.
be diverting
We've been
patients
discussing,
from, for example,
at
generic
length
products,
sort of
onto
complexity and the
branded
intermediaries
products as a
play
result of this.
in this
But we would love
system
to
that
work with
lead
members
to
of Congress
incentives
to
to
find
drive
ways
those list
to do
prices
this
up.
constructive. But unquestionably, because
true
out-of-pocket
that,
costs
the
and
cost of
co-insurance,
those
for
patient
example, are
assistance
typically
programs you can then
tied to
turn
that
around
list
and deduct
price,
on your
we have to find ways to bring
taxes?
that list price down.
To
Well, I
lower
would
your
agree
tax
with that. I
liability.
think that
Senator,
that,
I don't know
is
the
a
answer to
really
that, but I can
significant
follow
issue,
up.
particularly as I think some of my colleagues
I
have
want to
pointed out
get
that
at the
when you
question.
I
Just
get to
have a
these
minute
patient
left,
assistance
and so let me see if I
programs,
can do
they're
this really quickly.
they're quite confusing and hard to.
One of the challenges that we have are
hard to
some
navigate through,
often
and I
pretty severe
think
shortages
that,
in medications.
sometimes that's only
And,
available if you have
I've
commercial
heard so many stories
insurance, and
about
if you
this
don't
from
have commercial
Minnesota,
insurance, then you could really be
folks
flat out a
who
lot.
they have a
Senator,
preferred
that's
treatment
correct. And
for
in fact, I
a
referenced that since I became
disease,
CEO,
and
one of the
then
things we've done on the commercial
drug is
side
not available.
is
So
really
I
begun to
wanna
look
ask you
at
all,
how
I'll cut to
many
the
hoops
chase on
do
this.
patients have to go
Senator
through to get
Collins
access
and
to these
Senator
copay
Murkowski and
support
I have
programs.
a piece of
We provided
legislation that would require
$2.5 billion
reporting of
in
supply
copay
chain
support programs
disruptions
over
that
the
could
last
lead
5 years
to
as a company,
shortages, in
provided
medications,
$12
and
billion
I'd like to know whether
in free
you all would
product.
support that,
But we've got to make
concept
it
to help
easier and more
people
universally
understand
available
where these
for
shortages are
commercial
and where
patients to
they're-
get access access to that.
root
Again,
chemicals
there are
for
some
their
constraints
medications are
to
coming
us
from.
being able to provide those
We
services
work
on the
very-
Medicare
excuse
side.
me, we work
There's some
very
very
closely
legitimate
with the drug
concerns
shortage office at
to
the FDA,
providing
and
those
we're
on the
constantly
Medicare side
doing
because
all
you don't want
efforts
to
to
obviously be
dual
diverting
source
patients from,
the
for example,
entire supply
generic
chain of our
products
medicines,
onto
so
these
there
as
is
a
no
result of the, onto
discontinuations
branded
in our
products as a
supply.
result of this. But we would love to
And
work
I'm
with
not
members of Congress
familiar
to
with the
find ways
specifics of the
to do
bill,
this
but I would
construction.
say in general, the
And is
more
it-
we can
is it,
continue to help
true that,
understand what are the
the
shortage issues,
cost
we
of those
should
patient assistance
address that. But I
programs
think
you
we
can
got to
then
get at the
turn around and
fundamental
deduct on your
issues of why do we have a
taxes?
shortage in the first place. I can tell you
lower
in
your
our
tax
example.
liability?
Senator,
we
I
make a
don't know the
drug
answer to
called
that, but I
type
can
And again,
Okay,
you're
sorry.
over time, so could
I
you
want
take those answers for the record, Senator?
I just have a minute left.
On
so
behalf of the
let's see
chair,
if I can
Senator
do this
Brundage.
really quickly.
Thank you. I'm going to start with Mr. Davis.
One of the challenges that we
what
have
would your definition of a free market
pretty severe shortages in
one where
and
you are able to
I've
bring
heard
goods,
so many
and if
stories
those
about this
goods
from Minnesota
bring value,
folks who
and the system sees value
preferred
in them,
treatment
you're able
for
to bring those at a value you think is fair and reasonable,
and then
and negotiate with the other side in a world where you have free competition.
So right there you said negotiate. Most free markets are typified by this. And I'd like you all to listen to this, because I think the big challenge, if I were in your seat running your companies, is that it's not a free market. A free market means you've got a lot of choices, you've got vibrant competition,
we work very,
no barriers
we work very
entry,
closely with the drug shortage office
and you've got an
FDA,
engaged
and
consumer.
we're constantly doing all efforts
Now,
to dual
do
source
any of those
the entire
apply
supply chain of our
to
medicines,
your business?
so there's no discontinuations in
I
our
think
supply.
all of those apply, but I think one thing we need to understand in the way our business
but I would say in general, the more
for a
we
period
can
of
continue
time
to help understand
we have
what are the shortage
exclusivity.
issues, we should
That's during
address
the
that, but I think we got to get at the fundamental
thereafter,
issues of why
and in
do
that
we
period
have a
we must
shortage in the
reap
first place.
a
I can
return
tell you
on the
in our
investments
example,
we make to fund
we
the
make a
R&D
drug
we
called
do.
Type's.
And again,
Thereafter,
you're over time, so could
drugs
you
are
take
freely
those answers for
available,
the record?
and
I
there
would
is
be happy to,
total
Senator.
competition
on
in
behalf
that
of the
space.
chair,
But
Senator
yet
Pryor.
you would sue. I'm going to start with Mr. Transparency in terms of what would your definition of a free or the list price? Or you do things
one
like
where
tweak
you
patents.
are able to bring goods, and if
that
those
doesn't
goods
happen
bring
anywhere
value,
else.
and the system sees value in
you're
them,
not
you're able
alone
to bring those
there.
value you think is
Hospitals
fair and,
and insurance companies
negotiate with
do all
other
this
sides
stuff behind closed doors as well.
So
I would think right there you said negotiate. Most free markets are typified by this. Before, and I'd like y'all to listen to this. None of that stuff really applies to you guys as I challenged it. If I were in your seat, spin it that way, running your companies, is that I fixed it in my own business. Not a free market. Back free market, probably 15, 16 years ago. A lot of choices by creating healthcare consumers, vibrant competition, trying to avoid the system, no barriers and prevention, which you don't hear much about. And you've got an engaged consumer. When you do need it, now it's got to be. Do any of those apply? A lot of options, and I understand your business. You're a little different in terms of the R&D that goes
I think one thing we need to understand.
Then many years ago, you created a monster called the PBM
for a period of time.
Now is sucking all kinds of money out of the market.
That's
Why
during
can't
the patent
you
protection
fix
period.
that in
Thereafter,
doing
and in that period, we
ways
must reap a
that would
return
just
on the
smother
investments
the
we
market
make to fund the R&D
with
we do.
transparency.
Thereafter,
get it into a different
drugs
channel
are
of
freely
distribution.
available, and there
You
is
got a guy
total
like Mark
competition
Cuban that's
in
trying
that
to
space.
start a company at cost plus to keep
you're going to
transparency in terms of what the consumer price would be or the list price more often. Or you do things like and it's going to be patent where you're going to be regulated. That doesn't happen like a utility would be. And because in my opinion, you're not alone more there. Like an unregulated hospitals utility. And insurance companies, do all this stuff behind closed doors as well. Enterprise. So I would think if I were in your 19% of our GDP, you've got maybe a few years. Senator Sanders talked earlier about so none of that stuff really applies to you guys as I list 10%. Try to spin it 25%. Not the case. Overseas, I fixed it in my own business. I think I heard the excuse was well, they probably 15, 16 years ago. Well, by creating healthcare consumers, to know that sooner or later avoid the system through wellness and prevention. It's going to be up to the industry. You don't hear much about to fix it, but when you do need it, 15 to 20% of the problem. You've got a lot of options, and I understand you get the most. You're a little different. By maybe trying to get that goes more into it. Then many years ago, you created a monster called the PBM. Mark Cuban is putting out there that's based upon transparency out of the market. Why if not, you're going to get all the people in terms of doing that don't own healthcare businesses that finally saying we're not going to pay through the private transparency, the insurance get it system, into a different 3 to 4 times what it costs through government. You got a guy like Mark Cuban you complete the trying to start a company at you're going to have government as your business partner. You're going to probably need to find things like that. Why would you persist? Or you're going to be appearing in more often here that looks like it's going to be headed towards where you're going to be regulated like and that's doing like a utility federal government. Because in my opinion, you operate more like an unregulated utility
the systems as a whole, I think what I focus on
free enterprise
is what do we need
now
to do
it's up to
to
18,
drive the
19%
mission
of
of
our
our company,
GDP.
which is in the near term,
Something's got to give.
bring access
Senator
and
Sanders
affordability.
talked earlier
Make sure that
about
when we bring affordability, we
things
don't
costing
sacrifice access, and often
10%
patients lose access
to
when we try to address
25%
affordability,
overseas,
and that we fund innovation.
and I think I heard
that's
the
whatever
excuse was, well,
ultimately
they
we
have
come to
price
as a solution.
controls.
If we can protect
Well,
those elements,
I think I'd be smart
I
enough to
think we
know
will
that
both help
sooner or
patients
later
of today,
that will occur
and we can make the
here.
investments
Have you ever
that's
looked
gonna
into
be
having
up to
some
the
other
industry
system of
to
distribution,
fix it,
like
and
almost any other manufacturer
15
would
to
have
20% of the
problem? You do a pretty good job making the pill. You get the most heat you completely default by maybe how it gets from where you make it to who uses it. You're putting independent pharmacies out of business because out there PBMs and other kind of peculiarities in the industry. You're going to get all the people that don't own healthcare most people confront the finally saying we're not going to pay with a prescription the private side about the trying to restructure that 3 to 4 times what it costs through government and options. Let you complete the where people can get their stuff. You're going to have and apply that to biologics in the entirety of the spectrum. Why don't you persist the patents and try to preserve a paradigm system that looks like
so,
you're going to be headed towards what you definitely don't want,
look at
and that's
going
doing more
direct.
business
The reality
with the
of it
federal
is,
government.
as a single company,
Mr. Davis.
when you have now today, I don't want to speculate on controlling
on
80% of the lives
the
systems
as
a whole.
I
think what I focus the ability to do that takes is what do we need to do to drive the mission of characteristics, which is in the near term we don't currently have bring access, and I don't believe any one company make sure that when we bring affordability can do that. That's why we continue to believe we need free market access.
I bet if you collectively got together with the other drug companies
and that's whatever ultimately we come to as a
others
solution.
like
If we can protect those
cost
elements,
plus.
I think
Mark
we will
Cuban
both help
done,
patients of today.
Where you're going, I think you've got to
ever
looked at having some other system of distribution, like almost any other manufacturer was created by you. I mean, you do a pretty good job making the pill. PBMs. You completely why don't you encourage on how it gets structured from where you make it. Show us who uses wanting to compete. Putting independent pharmacies out of business is that if you don't PBMs and other take the bull by the horns, peculiarities in the industry, you're going to be like all other countries. You're going to be dealing most people with the federal government system as a regulated with a prescription, and I think you trying to restructure that, but in the meantime, with transparency and pointed it out. To where people can get their stuff more and then apply that to biologics outcomes and the entirety of the spectrum. And don't tweak the hospitals and try to preserve insurance. Better figure it out before it's too late.
So, we have considered, should we look at going direct? The reality of it is, as a single company,
Second, I'll thank
when you
each
have
of you for
now today
for
3
taking time out. I
PBMs
know how
controlling
busy you
80%
are.
of the
I
lives
appreciate
in
you
this
coming
country.
and answering questions.
The ability to do that takes
I grew up
portfolio
like most of us, I think,
characteristics that
looking at
we don't currently have. And I don't believe any one company
companies as
can do that. That's why we
companies
continue
in
to
America
believe we
could
need free
be
market.
rightfully
But we
I bet if you collectively got together with the other drug companies,
that's slipping away.
Encourage
back in Colorado,
others like
I hear
a cost plus.
Let's just be
that Mark Cuban has done.
Let's be gracious.
Where
and say
you're going,
wider,
I think you've got it under
diversity
your control,
of opinion.
Not to
according to a recent
perpetuate
YouGov survey, more than a third of Americans report the created by you. I mean, you make it. You don't have to necessarily use PBMs.
A
separate Kaiser Family Foundation poll.
Alternative structure.
This one just from
At
last
least
year.
show us
83% of Americans rated
because all I can
profits
tell
made
you
by pharmaceutical
is that if you
companies
don't take the bull by the horns, do
overwhelming
something
contributing
different,
factor to the high
you're going to
cost
be
of
like
prescription
all
drugs.
other countries.
You've
You're
all
gonna
talked
be
about the
dealing
R&D,
with the federal
innovation
government
which
as
there
a
can be no
regulated
question about
entity,
that.
and I think we
what
could
is the
lose
value
some
of
things.
these
But in the meantime,
cutting-edge drugs
Senator
and therapies
Sanders
if
pointed
so
it
many
out.
people can't
It
afford
costs
them? And
a lot more
I think
here.
that widespread
The
belief
healthcare outcomes
that
are better
Americans
there,
feel your
and
companies
pharma,
are too focused on
hospitals,
profits.
and insurance
It
better figure it out
damages
before it's too
your
late.
credibility. I think the culture of your businesses and the culture of your customers.
First,
So I want to see how you feel about that in
each
terms
of
of the
you
importance of
taking
people
the time out.
believing
I know how busy
in
you
your
are
mission
and
again.
appreciate you coming and answering
believing
questions.
strongly that you are.
I grew up
leaders of the mission.
like most of
Why
us.
don't we start with you, Mr. Duato? Looking at
Thank you, Senator. I can assure you that the
pharmaceutical
50,000
companies
employees
as
of Johnson
treasures,
& Johnson in
as
the U.S.
companies in
wake
America
up every day
could be rightfully
thinking
proud
what they
of
can
as
do for
innovators.
patients. And I can represent
But
proudly that
that's
sentiment.
slipping away.
What
when
can
I'm
we do
back in
to
Colorado,
address the real inequity that exists in the U.S., which is that seniors and patients that need the medicines the
diversity
most
of opinion.
pay higher
according to a recent
costs.
YouGov survey,
In my
more than a
view,
third
that's
of
the real
Americans
problem. There are
report
other
that
things
costs
that
has
are positive
prevented
in the
them
U.S.
from filling a
healthcare
prescription
system,
they need.
like the access to breakthrough
A separate Kaiser
cutting-edge
Family Foundation
treatments
poll,
earlier than any
this
other
one just
country
from
in
last
the
year,
world,
said
but
that
still we have a
83%
real
of
inequity
Americans
there.
rated
I think we have
profits
to
made
work
by
together in
pharmaceutical
order to address
companies
that inequity.
as
And there's
the
multiple ways
overwhelming
that we
contributing
can
factor to the high
work
cost
on
of
that.
prescription drugs.
One is to make sure that
just give me one, about the R&D, I've got a couple more questions.
One is to make sure that the discounts and rebates, we pay $39 billion in 2022, that we pay to the middlemen are passed to the patients so we can lower the out-of-pocket costs.
I think that widespread belief that
So,
Americans
Senator, I appreciate
feel
the
your
question, and I
companies
can
are
tell
too
you
focused on
at
profits.
Merck, we've lived
it
by
damages your
the
credibility. I
statement
think
our
the
founder put
culture
out
of your
that
businesses
medicines
and
are
the
for the
culture of your
patients, not for the
customers. So
profits.
I want to
But
see
so long as we've
how you
remembered
feel
that,
about
the
that in
profits
terms of the
follow. And it really
importance
says
of people
we can both
believing
do good
in your mission again.
and do well for our shareholders
believing as
together.
strongly
And there's a
that
balance.
you are
And I
good
think what you're
leaders.
talking about is where
Why don't we
is the
start with you,
balance.
Mr. Duato?
And we are always trying to find that
Thank you,
balance.
Senator.
And I'm
I can
very
assure
much
you that the
focused on it
50,000
as the
employees
CEO
of
the
Johnson &
company
Johnson
because
in
the
the U.S.
legacy of Merck,
wake up every day thinking what they can do for
the pride
patients.
of our
And I can
70,000
represent
employees and what we
proudly
do
that
matters to
sentiment.
me.
What can
and
we
a
do
strong
to
belief
address
in the mission of the company
the
is
real
why I came to
inequity
the
that
company, and
exists
it's
in
why
the
I'm in
U.S.,
this
which is
industry.
that
So we are very
seniors
committed to
and
that.
patients that
But
need
I do
the
think
medicines the most
the challenge we
pay
continue to
higher
face
out-of-pocket costs.
is the structural
In my
issues
view,
in the
that's the
system
real problem. There are other things that
creating
are
the
positive
problem.
in the U.S. healthcare system,
Yes.
like the access to breakthrough
Senator, the challenge that we're
cutting-edge
facing in
treatments
this committee
earlier
today
than
and
any
what
other
we've been
country in the
discussing
world.
is how do
But
we
it's true, we
ensure
have a real
affordability
inequity there.
today without
I think we have to work
sacrificing
together in order to address
tomorrow's
that
innovation.
inequity.
That's
And
what we're
there's
focused
multiple
on.
ways
We've
that
got to
we
make
can
sure we do what
work
you've
on
heard
that.
from all of us.
One
of
is to make
bringing
sure that
highly
Just give me
innovative
one, because I want to make
medicines
sure
to
I've got a
patients.
couple more
But
questions.
One
we
is
also
to
have
make
to do
sure
a
that
better
the
job of
discounts and
ensuring that we're
rebates, we
bringing
pay
drugs like
$39
Eliquis
billion
to
in
market,
2022
which save
that we
the
pay to
healthcare
the
system
middlemen
money for
are
every
passed to the
100,000
patients so we
patients on
can lower
Eliquis.
the out-of-pocket
We estimate we
costs.
saved
Got it. It's a good
the
one.
healthcare
So,
system $5
Senator, I
billion.
appreciate the question,
We've
and
got
I
to
can
place a
tell
high
you
bar
at
on the
Merck,
medicines we bring to
we've lived
patients
by
and stick by that as an industry.
the statement our
Well,
founder put
and I
out
appreciate that. And I do.
medicines are for the patients, not
Health
for the
is so
profits.
precious to
But
people that
so
they'll
long as
pay
we
almost
remember
anything
that,
if
the
it's
profits
serious. So
follow.
that
And it really
in a funny
says
way, sometimes
we
we
can
see
both
increasing
do good
costs
and
based
do
on
well
that
for our
calculus
shareholders
of how much money
together.
we avoid.
And there's a
which I
balance.
think's
And I think
be a
what you're
false
talking
pathway
about is
sometimes, but
where is
certainly
the balance.
as a user of
And we are
Eliquis,
always trying to find that balance.
and grateful,
I'm very much
recognizing what the old
focused on
system
it as
was
the
and how
CEO of the
better
company
Eliquis
because
is.
the legacy of Merck,
I salute that.
the
higher cost
pride
in other,
of our
the
70,000
lower cost in other
employees and what
countries.
we do
We've all
matters
answered
to
that.
me.
I understand there's some price setting
and
there.
a strong belief
But I think the
in the
solution,
mission of
I
the
mean, we're
company.
paying
It's why I
double.
came to the company,
Even when you
and it's
take
why I'm
out
in
the
this industry.
PBMs
So
and
we are very committed to
the
that.
list price
But I do
from the
think
net price.
the challenge we
we're paying
continue
double
to face
what
is
Europe,
structural
Canada, and
issues in the
Australia are
system
paying.
that are
And
creating
somehow
the
that's got to
problem.
be a negotiation that
Yes.
the rest of the world probably has to pay
Senator,
more.
the
and you
challenge
guys are
that
gonna
we're
have to figure
facing
out a
in
way
this
to do that.
committee
I'm
today and
not
what
saying
we've been
it's easy,
discussing is how do we ensure
but
affordability
it's one of those
today
things.
without sacrificing
It's one of those things that we have to
tomorrow's innovation.
address as a.
That's what we're
as a-
focused on.
as a
We've got to
country
make sure
and
we
as an
do what
industry.
you've heard from all of us, are
I
bringing
want to ask,
highly innovative
earlier there was some
medicines to
mention of
patients.
river blindness.
But we also have to
issues
do a
in-
better job
in,
of ensuring that we're bringing drugs like
underserved
Eliquis to
countries.
market,
I want to see if each of
which
you have
save
just a
the
quick
healthcare
example of
system money.
something
For
where
every 100,000
your company has
patients on
gone in
Eliquis,
there.
we estimate we
obviously we've heard
saved
about Merck,
the
but
healthcare system
and done
$5
something in a
billion.
country like that where it
We've
really
got to
was
place a high bar
philanthropic.
on the medicines
Thank Thank you. We dedicate billions of dollars every year to treat diseases that don't have an economic counterpart. For example, one of the diseases that we have contributed to is treatment and eradication is intestinal worms. We donate billions of pills every year in order to
as a user of
intestinal
eloquence,
worms. We have programs
and grateful
to support
recognizing
frontline healthcare
what the old
workers
system
in
was
the
and how
developing
better
world that have
eloquence is.
supported more than 1 million
I salute
frontline
that.
healthcare workers.
The
And we
higher
develop
cost
a
in other,
medicine
or the lower
for
cost in other
multidrug-resistant
countries, we've all answered that. I
which is
understand there's some
widely
price
used in every
setting there.
single protocol
But I think the
in which we are
solution,
not
I mean, we're
enforcing our
paying
patents
double,
as we speak.
even when you take
So
out the
we make
PBMs
significant
and the
contributions.
list
It's
price
impressive,
from the net price. Most people don't know about that stuff.
We're paying double
what Europe or Canada or Australia are paying.
Well, you mentioned the Mectizan.
And somehow
donation
that's
where
got to
we
be a
got 4.6
negotiation
billion.
that
I
the
would
rest of
add
the world
another
probably
one we
has to
did,
pay more,
recently.
and you guys are going to have to
we were
figure out a
very
way to do
focused
that.
on COVID
I'm
now.
not saying
We
it's
forget
easy,
about Ebola,
but
and
it's one of those things.
scourge of
I want
Ebola that hit in 2014,
it's one of those things we have to
2016
address as a
in Western Africa.
country,
We actually,
as an industry.
at no profit to us,
earlier there was some
developed Ebola
mention of
vaccine,
river blindness.
have distributed that, continue to distribute that drug. underserved countries. Let's see if each of you have just a quick example of something where your company has gone in there. Obviously, we've heard about Merck.
And I'm incredibly proud that in the late 90s, our foundation
really was
worked with governments and local communities
Thank you.
to set up the
We
core
dedicate
infrastructure to deliver
billions
HIV
of dollars every
medicines to
year to
sub-Saharan
treat
Africa,
diseases
focusing on children. The president of Botswana recently congratulated
one of the diseases that we
the
have
BMS
contributed
Foundation
to
for
is
saving
treatment
a
and
generation
eradication
from
is intestinal
extinction,
worms.
his words.
You know,
we are now
billions of
leveraging
pills
that
every
same
year
infrastructure,
in order to
partnering with
treat
Baylor College of
intestinal
Medicine
worms.
to
We have
reverse
programs
something
to support
in
frontline
childhood
healthcare
care.
workers in the developing world that have supported more than 1 million frontline
thank you
healthcare
all,
workers.
and I think those
And
stories
we develop a
need to get out,
medicine
but we also
for
have to solve this
multiple
issue of
tuberculosis,
the price
which is
disparity.
widely used in every single protocol.
Thank you. Since I have
and which we
7
are not
minutes, I'm going to do
enforcing
2
our patents
minutes
as we
to
speak.
celebrate
So
innovation and then
we
5
made
minutes to
significant
go after
contributions.
the
It's
cost
impressive, but
question.
most
On the
people don't know
innovation
about that stuff.
side, there's an
Mr.
article
Davis.
that came out in Health
You mentioned the
Affairs
Mectizan
Journal in
donation where we
September
got 4.6 billion. I
and
would
I'd like
add
to put
another
it in the
one we
record.
did,
Contributions of public health,
we were very focused
pharmaceuticals,
on
and other
COVID
medical
now.
care
We
to
forget
U.S.
about
life expectancy
Ebola
changes
and the
1990
scourge
to
of Ebola that
2015.
hit in 2014,
And the article looked at the
2016,
fact that between 1990 and
in
2015,
Western Africa,
life
we actually,
expectancy in the U.S. increased
at no
by
profit to
3.3
us,
years.
developed
And
Ebola
the
vaccine,
authors of the
have
researchers
distributed
and
that,
authors of the
continue to
study
distribute that
were able
drug
to say
to address that
44% of
devastating
that
disease.
increase was because
Mr.
of public health.
Senator, we had, as I referenced, a
35% of
large
the
presence
increase
in
was
HIV.
attributable to
And
pharmaceutical
I'm incredibly
innovation,
proud that in
and
the late 90s,
13%
our
of the increase
foundation
was attributable
worked
to
with governments
other
and local
improvements in
communities to
medical
set up
care,
the core
with
infrastructure to
7%
deliver
unknown.
HIV medicines to
But the fact
sub-Saharan
that
Africa,
pharmaceuticals
focusing
led
on
to
children.
nearly
The
more than
president
a
of
third of that
Botswana
increase in
recently
life expectancy is
congratulated
something that we need
or
to
thanked the
acknowledge as
BMS
a
Foundation for
context
saving
to
a
this
generation
discussion.
from his
And a Virginia
extinction, his
example,
words.
Mr. Davis,
We are now
you'll know this
leveraging
example
that
very
same
well. In
infrastructure,
Elkton, Virginia,
partnering with Baylor
there's
College
a
of
plant
Medicine
that produces
to
Gardasil,
reverse
which
something
your company
in
developed
childhood cancer.
Bernard, thank you.
and
I'm
began to
sorry.
market in the mid-2000s, 2006,
Anyway,
2007.
thank you all, and I think those
And
stories
it is a,
need to get out.
it is a
But we also have
vaccine
to solve
against
this issue
a virus,
of the
the
price
HPV
disparities.
virus that creates. Thank you. Since I have 7 minutes, I'm going to do 2 minutes to celebrate innovation and then 5 minutes to go. And that's just been revolutionary. The cost question in terms of on the innovation. We were one of the first states to put there's an article vaccine that came out in Health Affairs Journal in September 2020. Cervical cancer, I'd like to put it in the record, among contributions of public health, pharmaceuticals, and other medical care to U.S. life expectancy just in the last 15 years. I mean, it's truly remarkable. And the article looked at the fact that between 1990 and 2015, life expectancy in the U.S. increased by 3.3 years. Helped so many Americans, but people authors of the researchers and authors of the study were able to say 44% of that increase was because of public health measures. Too much out of pocket. 35% of the increase was attributable to pharmaceutical innovation, and 13% of the increase was attributable to other improvements in medical care, with 7% unknown. Passed by only one vote in the Senate, so each of us who voted for it, we were the deciding more than a third of that increase. And I know not everybody likes that, but it's working. Context to this discussion. And a Virginia example, Mr. Davis, you'll know this example very well. In Elkton, Virginia, there's a plant that produces Gardasil, and thank goodness that your company developed market signal and began many of the companies that were reducing insulin cost $35 2007. And it is Medicare patients. It is a vaccine against a virus, the HPV virus that creates. But there is more that we can do, and I really want to focus on one thing, and that's just been revolutionary. In terms of cervical cancer, this committee took, we were one of the first bipartisan action vaccine mandate about 9 months ago on this PBM reform bill, and cervical cancer among vaccinated populations. And I don't expect you to be the masters of all the details of that bill, but just in the last 15 years, I mean, it's truly remarkable, and I've been to that. And much of the conversation today has been about this and believe that they've been at the vanguard difference between list revolution and actual helped so many Americans. But if we were able to pass a meaningful PBM reform bill, okay, what would now we got to get to the reality for the hearing, which is American patients are paying too much out of pocket for pharmaceuticals. Together with my colleagues here who voted for the Inflation Reduction Act, you to address that, we said for a long time.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for recognizing the value for patients of pharmaceutical innovation. If we were able to pass meaningful reform, meaning a reform that would delink the revenues of the PBMs and insurance companies from the list price
and that would pass rebates and discounts to the patients, I would anticipate two things. One, it would affect list prices. Two, it would significantly reduce the out-of-pocket cost for the patient. So I welcome the bipartisan efforts of this committee to go through PBM reform. It's a linchpin of lowering the cost for patients.
But there is more that we can do.
I also
and I really want to
believe
focus
that
on
the
one thing
provisions
because I
that
think
are
it's
in
just
the bill, at
right
least, some of the
before
big
us.
ones around
This
transparency
committee
and
took
also
strong
delinking
bipartisan
are
action
definitely steps in the right
about 9
direction. I
months
think we
ago
need them. They're
on this
a lot of
PBM
what we've all
reform bill
been
that is
focusing
sitting
on
the
in our
floor of the
testimony
Senate
and in
right
the question
now.
and answers.
And I don't
do
expect
think
you to
it
be
will-
the
it can
masters
benefit
of all the
patients if we
details
move
of
in
that
that
bill,
direction.
but if
So I'm
we
very
were to
supportive
pass
of
a
what you're trying to
meaningful
do.
PBM reform
Mr.
bill,
Boerner.
and much of the
Senator,
conversation
if we
today
could do
has been
that
about
and
this
we could reduce the
weird
significant amount
difference
that we are
between
paying
list
in
prices
rebates to
and
intermediaries who
actual
are
net
not
prices.
passing
If
those
we were able
rebates
to
on
pass
to
a
lower
meaningful
out-of-pocket
PBM
costs.
reform bill, what would
Speaking on
that
behalf
do
of Bristol
to the
Myers
cost
Squibb, we
that,
could work almost immediately to begin
American
to bring down
patients
list
are
prices, and
paying
I would
out
welcome
of
the
pocket
opportunity to
for
work with this committee
pharmaceuticals?
to do that.
Well, I know that in
and I'll
conversations with the chair, the intent is to move
Thank you,
on that
Senator,
bill
and thank you
pretty
for
soon,
recognizing the
potentially with some
value
other
for
health
patients of
items as
pharmaceutical
well. And I think
innovation.
that the
If we were
opportunity
able
is
to
right
pass
before us.
meaningful
The bill
reform,
passed out of committee
meaning a
overwhelmingly
reform that
bipartisan. I
would
think it was an 18-3
delink
vote. And that tells us that we have some
revenues of the
amendment on the
PBMs
floor.
and insurance
The
companies from
delinking
the list
provision was
price,
not in the bill.
and
The-
that would
the
pass
chair and ranking were
rebates and
supportive of
discounts to the
the
patient,
concept, but at the
I would
time we
anticipate two
marked it
things.
up, the
One,
CBO hadn't
it
given
would
us the
affect
score.
list
And
prices.
so we agreed that we
Two,
would wait
it
on
would
that until we
significantly
got,
reduce
on
the
the
out-of-pocket
floor.
cost
But
for
the
the
CBO
patient.
has
So I
now
welcome
scored
the bipartisan
delinking
efforts
bill
of this
that
committee
Senators
to
Marshall,
go
Capito,
through
Braun,
PBM reform.
and
It's a
I
linchpin
and
of
Tester have
lowering the cost for
co-sponsored, and the
patients.
CBO says that it would save about
Yes,
$650 million
I also
over 10
believe
years.
that the
And that's in
provisions
addition
that
to
are
the
in the
savings
bill, at least
for
some
patients.
of
So
the
I
big
know
ones
we
around
would try,
transparency
hopefully
and
on the
also
floor,
delinking
add that in.
are definitely steps in the right
the-
direction. I think we need
my-
them. They're
my
a lot of
colleagues
what
have
we've all been
all
focusing
talked
on
about
in
the
our
reality
testimony
of
and
what
in the
they
question
hear
and answers.
from
And I do think it
constituents, and I hear the
can
same
benefit
thing. And I
patients if
know,
we move in that direction.
I
So I'm
think
very
the
supportive of
complexity
what
of
you're
the
trying to do.
system and the fact that list price
Senator,
is different
if we
than
could
net
do
price,
that and we could
and the
reduce
fact
the
that we have
significant amount that we are
rebates,
paying
quote,
in rebates to
that never show
intermediaries
up
who
in
are
people's
not passing
pockets, and then
those rebates
you
on
have
to lower
programs to try to
out-of-pocket costs.
assist folks
Speaking
who
on behalf of
can't
Bristol
afford
Myers
medicines,
Squibb, we
but they
could
have a
work almost
6-page
immediately to
application
begin to
form,
bring down list
and
prices,
both
and I
a
would
sticker
welcome the
price might
opportunity to
scare
work
'em
with
off,
this
or a
committee to do that.
Page application. Well, I know that in conversations with the chair, the intent is to out a lot of that middlemen pretty soon, potentially with some other health items as well. And I think that, Chair, the opportunity is right before us. PBMs, because the bill passed out. We might fight with you about whether you're researching enough, or should your research be more than your tells us that we would have some amendment on the floor. The delinking provision was not in the bill. They're not producing a single and ranking were supportive of. And yet they seem to me to be the ones that are scooping up. It up. The CBO had most of the money, and so we agreed that we would wait on that until we got. So I hope we can address that soon. Thank you, Mr. Chair. But the CBO has now scored the delinking bill that Senators Marshall, Capito, Braun
here today,
and I
biosimilar competition is one way to drive down drug costs
save about $650
for
million
patients and increase
over 10
access.
years.
Would you all agree with that?
And that's in addition
Yes.
to the savings
Yes.
for
Appreciate
patients.
that.
So I
Now,
know we would try.
one of the concerns I have is
add that in.
we often see competition stifled.
My colleagues
particular
have
area with
all
biosimilars.
talked about the reality of what they hear.
The concern that I have is
from
tactics and
constituents,
delays
and I hear the same thing.
that
And I know
lead to entry of
I
the
think
lower
the
cost
complexity
biosimilar
of the
drugs
system
keep patients
and
from often
the fact that list
having
price is
a
different than
choice,
net price. And the fact
but
that
also
we have
being able to afford
rebates,
their
quote,
prescription
rebates
drugs. Now,
that
Mr.
never
Davis,
show up in people's
yes
pockets.
or no, will
And
you
then
commit to
you
not
have
blocking
programs to
other
try to
drug makers
assist
from entering the market
folks
when the
who
primary
can't
patent
afford
on
medicines, but they have a
Keytruda
6-page
expires?
application form, and
Well, Senator,
and both a sticker
at
price
Merck,
might scare them off, or a
we do believe
6-page
that
application might scare 'em off.
biosimilar
We just have
competition
to
and
simplify
generic
this and cut
competition
out a lot of
is
the
core to the
middlemen in this
system. We need the
instance.
patent protection, and then we need a
I've long
robust
said to the
biosimilar
chair that
generic market, and I can tell you that when the composition of matter patents expire on our drug Keytruda, I fully expect, and I will not try to stop a biosimilar IV version of Keytruda coming onto the marketplace.
They seem to me to be the ones that are scooping up
That's a
the
yes.
most
I
of
appreciate
money
that.
that's just sloshing through
Boerner,
the system
yes or
right
no,
now.
will you commit
So
to
I
not
hope we
blocking
can
other
address
drug
that soon.
makers
Thank you,
from
Mr.
entering
Chair.
the market when
Senator
your
Lujan.
primary patent on
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman, thank you to everyone who's here today.
Senator, we have
Biosimilar
a number of
competition
patents
is
on
one way to
Eliquis,
drive
and
down
we
drug
have
costs
certainly
for patients and
anticipated
increase
that
access.
when
Would you all
the
agree with that?
patents that are most
Yes.
relevant for that
Yes.
product expire, we
Appreciate
will
that.
have
Now,
generic
one of the concerns
competition,
I have
in this case, not
is
biosimilar, but generic competition.
we often see
and that would be
competition
around
stifled
2028.
in this particular area with biosimilars expires on Eliquis. And
The concern that I have is tactics and other drug makers from entering the market that lead to entry
Senator,
of lower cost
I'm
biosimilar
not
drugs,
a
keep
patent
patients
attorney, so I'm
from
not
offering.
entirely.
You're the CEO, having a choice.
Senator, I would say that
But
when
also
the
being able
most
to
important,
afford
most relevant
their
patents
prescription drugs.
expire
Now,
on
Mr.
Eliquis,
Davis,
we will
yes or
welcome
no, will
generic
you commit to
competition.
not
So is
blocking
that a
other
yes or
drug
a no?
makers from entering the
That's a
market
yes,
when the
Senator.
primary patent on Keytruda
Mr. Boerner,
expires?
I have the same question.
Well, Senator, at
Yes or
Merck,
no, will you commit to not
and
blocking
we
other
do
drug
believe
makers from
that
entering the
biosimilar
market when your
competition
primary
and
patent
generic competition
expires?
is core to the system.
When the most
we need the
relevant
patent
patents for
protection,
Opdivo
and then we
expire,
need a
we would
robust
fully expect biosimilars
biosimilar
to
and
enter
generic
the
market.
market.
So your
And I can
answer
tell you
is
that,
yes when
the composition of matter
the words
patents
you're using are
expire,
relevant patents,
on
not the
on our
primary
drug
patent. Is
Keytruda,
that
I
a
fully
clarification that I
expect,
can?
and I will not try to
Yes,
stop
Senator, I'm just
a
not certain
biosimilar
exactly
IV
what the
version
most,
of Keytruda coming onto
what
the
you're referring to
marketplace.
as the primary
a
patent,
yes?
but when
That's a yes.
those
I
patents
appreciate
expire,
that.
we
Mr.
welcome generic
Boerner,
competition.
yes or no, will you commit to
Primary.
not blocking other drug
Initial
makers
the
from
one that was
entering the
filed
market when your
you got
primary
this drug
patent
done.
on
Look,
Eliquis
I'm not a lawyer,
expires?
I'm not a CEO, I don't work at all. If I'm not
Senator,
using the wrong
we
words,
have
please help me a little bit.
a
You know
number
what
of
I'm
patents on
talking about here.
Eliquis, and we have
when the
generally
it's when the
certainly
composition of matter
anticipated
that
patent
when the
expires,
patents that are
that
most
doesn't
relevant
sound
for
like
that
a
product
yes.
expire, we will
I
have
hear what you're saying.
generic
I-
competition, in this case, not
I'm
biosimilar,
going
but
to move
generic
on.
competition.
Mr. Duato, we know that
and that would be
J&J
around
entered into
2028.
settlement agreements to delay the launch of some Stelara biosimilars in 2025. To not blocking other drug makers from entering the market. This will prevent competition
Senator,
in the drug market.
I'm not a
and
patent
Medicare
attorney, so I'm not
negotiation.
entirely.
You're the CEO. Will you commit to lowering
Senator,
the price of
I would say
Stelara
that
in
when the
2025?
most important, most relevant patents
Senator,
expire on
thank you for the
Eliquis, we
question.
will
I
welcome
anticipate
generic
that the
competition.
price of
So is
Stelara
that a yes
will
or a no?
actually
That's a
be
yes,
lower
Senator.
in 2025 as it
Mr.
has
Boehner,
been
I have the same question
lowering
on
during the past
Opdivo.
decade.
Yes or
The
no,
price
will
of
you commit
Stelara
to
has
not
been
blocking
steadily
other drug makers
declining the
from
net prices,
entering the market
and I
when your primary
anticipate that
patent
the
expires?
biosimilars in 2025
When the most
will
relevant
further
patents for Opdivo
decrease
expire,
the
we
price
would
of
fully
Stelara.
expect biosimilars to
Are you
enter the
answering
market.
yes?
Yes.
Your answer is
Yes.
yes when the words
appreciate
you're
that.
using are relevant.
Now, we've heard over and over that
not the
Medicare
primary
drug
patents.
pricing
Is that
negotiations
the
will
clarification
kill
that I
innovation.
can?
Yes, Senator,
Mr.
I'm
Boerner,
just
I want
not
to get a few
certain
things
exactly
clear.
what the most,
Yes or no, is it
what you're
BMS's
referring to as the
position
primary
as
patent,
stated
but
in its
when
lawsuit
we,
against
when
the
those
Health and Human
patents expire, we
Services
welcome
that,
generic
quote,
competition.
IRA's real victim
Primary.
is innovation,
Initial
and
one. The
in
one that
turn,
was filed
the
when
millions of
when you got
patients
this drug
who are
done.
counting on
Look,
the
I'm not a lawyer,
pharmaceutical
I'm not a
industry to
CEO, I don't
develop
work at all.
new therapies
If I'm not
will
using the
save
wrong
lives
words,
and
please help me a
improve
little
health
bit.
and
You know what I'm
well-being.
talking about here.
Yeah, when the generally it's when
Senator,
we have
composition of
serious
matter
concerns
patent
about
expires.
elements of IRA.
That doesn't sound like a yes.
Specifically,
I hear what you're saying.
the fact that this isn't an actual
I'm going to move on.
negotiation.
Mr. Duato, we know that
we
J&J
obviously
entered
like
into
some elements
settlement
of IRA,
agreements to
notably
delay
the
the
out-of-pocket
launch of
costs,
some
but
I appreciate Stelara that, biosimilars in
do you stand by this statement that was filed
in the
this
lawsuit
will
to prevent competition in the drug market and Medicare
we have very serious
negotiation, the way
concerns
I
about the
read it.
implication of
Will
IRA.
you commit to
stand by this
lowering
statement?
the price
Yes, sir.
of Stelara in 2020?
Yes or no? Is it also true that you
Senator,
said in your
thank you for
Q4
the
earnings call,
question.
quote,
I
we see a
anticipate
legacy
that the price of
portfolio
Stelara
of
will
well-established
actually
products facing
be
headwinds
lower
such as
in
IRA.
2025 as it has
Through
been,
this portfolio, or
been
though this portfolio is
lowering during the
declining,
past
it
decade.
is expected
The
to
price of
continue to
Stelara has
generate
been
strong
steadily
cash
declining
flows
the net
to
prices,
enable
and I
investment in
anticipate
our
that
future growth
the
drivers.
biosimilars in 2025 will further
you stand by
decrease the
that?
price of
Yes,
Stelara.
we actually have
Are you
a
answering yes
legacy
to my
product
question?
Yes.
portfolio that will continue to
I appreciate
provide
that.
the
Now,
necessary
we've heard
funds
over and
to
over that
innovate,
Medicare drug
and
pricing
bring the next wave of
negotiations will
innovation
kill
to market. Yes,
innovation.
sir.
So based on that, can I
Mr.
interpret
Boerner, I
that
want to get a few things clear.
cash flows
Yes or
were
no,
generated
is it
even though the
BMS's
IRA
position
as
went to place
stated
and they're
in its
sufficient
lawsuit
to
against the
support
Health and
new
Human
innovations,
Services,
as was
that,
reported
quote,
to
the
the investors?
IRA's real victim is innovation, and in turn,
Senator, we
the
don't yet
millions of
have IRA having been fully implemented, negotiation, that process is ongoing. But we are generating cash flows off of our existing products. Senator, we have serious concerns about elements of IRA.
In the same filing to Health and Human Services with that case said,
the fact that this isn't
this
an actual
portfolio, though the
negotiation.
portfolio is declining, it is
We
expected
obviously
to
like
continue
some
to
elements of
generate
IRA,
strong cash
notably the
flows
out-of-pocket costs.
to
But
enable investment in our
Do
future
you stand
growth
by this
drivers.
statement that was filed in the lawsuit
is it
to
generating cash?
the United
Our
States Health and
legacy
Human Services
portfolio of
Department?
products, we have very serious concerns about the application of IRA.
Do you stand in the face of
Yes,
IRA,
sir.
you're generating cash? Yes or no? Is it also true that you said
Again,
in your
Senator,
Q4 earnings
haven't
call,
actually
quote, we
finished
see a legacy
negotiation yet
portfolio
on our first
of well-established
drug.
products
I'll move
facing
on.
headwinds such as IRA.
This is one of
Through this portfolio, or though this portfolio is declining, it is expected to
when
continue
a cow
to
does
generate
its
strong
business in the
cash
barn, there's a
flows
pile of
to
stuff I've
enable
got to go
investment in our future.
That's what it is. It's
growth
manure.
drivers.
It has other languages.
But that's what it is. You stand by that? I don't understand why this is so complex.
Yes, we actually have a legacy product portfolio that will continue to provide the necessary funds to innovate and bring the next wave of innovation.
When a question was asked, based on that, can I interpret where the money goes on this particular cash flows? The answer is, well, generated, even though the IRA went in place, and hoping it's included in the filings for investors, as was reported. People know where the money. Well, I'll follow up with more questions. I have several, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, we don't yet have IRA having been fully implemented in negotiation.
Around the world.
That process is ongoing.
To be able to understand what the heck is going on.
We are generating cash flows off of our existing products.
You all have some good lawyers. Maybe one day I'll go to law school and try to get a gig with one of you. Filing to Health and Human Services with that case said. This portfolio, though the portfolio is declining, it is expected to continue to generate strong cash flows to enable investment in our future growth drivers. So is it generating cash?
Our legacy portfolio of products is continuing to generate cash.
That's what it's all about. So even in the face of IRA, you're generating cash.
That's what I represent in Boston.
Again, Senator, we haven't actually finished negotiation yet on our first drug, which is...
I'll move on. I appreciate that very much. This is one of the help that industry. I grew up on a small farm in northern New Mexico.
And to be able
when a cow does its business in the barn, there's a pile of stuff I've got to go clean. That's what it is. It's manure. It has a lot of other languages.
Like my
that's what it is.
A truck.
I don't understand why this is so complex.
And the companies have done
people in the room make these darn things so complex so no one understands
that funding, which
I'm beside myself, Mr. Chairman, that when a question was asked, can you break down where the money goes on this particular drug? The answer is, well, it's complicated. We don't know.
Those NIH dollars
I'm hoping it's
delivered
results. In the filings
for example,
between
2010 and 2016,
know where the money,
every drug
I'll follow up with more questions. I have several, Mr. Chairman, but
was in some way based on biomedical research
across
funded
the country and around
the
the
NIH.
world. To be able to understand what the heck is going on.
My father, the truck driver.
You all have some good lawyers. Maybe one day I'll go to law school and try to get a gig with one of you all. I don't know, but this is just frustrating. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
To make sure that the funding will go to NIH. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. So the research could be made. Research is medicine's field of dreams, from which we harvest the findings to him and help his families. That a cure can be found. Merck's the disease which is Pharma president, their family's history. You've already quoted him. That's what it's all about. That's what we all said, we never try to forget that medicine is for the people. In Boston, it is not for the profits. And 2 miles from my house, and states that this philosophy is embraced by their leaders and industry, the employees, to be able to grow and to be able to. So FDA approved the cancer drug to make the Keytruda in 2014 to ordinary families, based on NIH research. Like my father, who drove a truck that my father helped to pay for, milk company. As a truck driver. The companies have done great work. And last year, the list price that was funding, $190. I was on the health committee in the House for this cancer drug that helps patients with lung cancer and other cancers. Those NIH dollars delivered results. For example, between 2010 and 2016, every meeting and proxy statement by the FDA was in some way says that based on it brought in $21 billion funded by the NIH, and it was driving key growth for my father, the truck driver. And at the same time, at the Hood Milk patients 1 mile from Kendall Square, also he paid his taxes, straining to make sure that the funding would go to NIH, struggling to afford this drug, research could be made, debt or skipping treatments altogether. The breakthroughs. So Merck that would help has now filed help his families 168 patents. Merck's on this cancer drug and Keytruda. You've already quoted him, Mr. Davis, and he said we never try to forget that medicine is for the people. From this earlier discussion, it is not for the profits. When we discuss this, we can be talking about website primary states that this philosophy is embraced by their leaders and the employees. What I heard earlier was that so FDA approved in general the cancer drug secondary Keytruda also in 2014. Now, based on a very large extent, research, 168 my father helped to pay for. Then bring as a truck driver at least 168 lawyers. And last year, the list price was $190. Another smaller company. Hundreds of smaller companies from now making the breakthroughs that advance even further with lung cancer, the breakthroughs, and other cancers. 191 innovating discovery a year. And the annual 168 meeting and proxy statement extend further using lawyers says that it brought in $21 billion in revenue for the company, a lower price drug, and it was driving key growth so that they can get the treatment Merck's business they need, and at the same time patients are also straining. Yeah, we believe in competition. Premiums, struggling, and we really believe in taking on debt, shipping treatment in Massachusetts. We believe in Darwinian paranoia, and has now filed. But when there's a monopoly on a drug, which is the key drug on this cancer, there is no competition. Keytruda. There is no paranoia. And if, as we know, 168 patents just from this earlier discussion extend, when we discuss this, we can be talking about primary new companies, smaller companies, smarter new scientists to make the new additional breakthroughs. And that's the play. We understand the play. Earlier was that's how lawyers get into it, not scientists. Witnesses in general. The lawyers all the secondary, the smarter new, also 25-year-old out with the new insight. To a very large extent, 168 patents. So I do believe in research. Then bring at least Adam Smith hated monopolies. It was the number one thing. How do we use this patent? Monopolies. In order to support another smaller in this particular instance, my father died now making the breakthroughs from advance even further. The breakthroughs. And my father discovering was 168 new patents. So the list price for Keytruda is more than his entire pension. The time at which that's what he got from the hood. It can be a lower price. So 1 year of it available, entire pension, so that they can get the treatment, which he died from lung cancer. They need. And lung cancer. I don't think that Judge Merck really intended that. Yeah, we believe in competition. What the result of and we really believe ultimately in competition. So, Mr. Davis, we believe in Darwinian have been consistent with Judge Merck's philosophy. But when there's a monopoly on research funded by my father's tax dollars, there is no competition to invent a life-saving. There is no paranoia. Lung cancer drug. 168 patents just charge him. Extend hundreds of thousands of dollars, the ability of his hard-earned retirement, new companies, smaller companies, smarter new scientists using patent law to block out competition. And that's the play. We understand the play. Scientists. That's how lawyers get it and lower the cost. Keep the lawyers keep the smarter. As a result, the cost of 25-year-old out with the new and then just use the income and extending. You got from him. So I do believe in research. Investors about the drug. Adam Smith hated monopolies. It was the number one thing he hated for your business. Monopolies. Do you think that's what Judge Merck intended? In this particular instance, my father died philosophy, which from lung cancer, used to describe Merck's.
17 seconds.
My father.
Are you looking for the answer now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I would say
so the list price
the
for
quote
Keytruda
was
is more than his entire pension.
Medicine is for the patients, not for the
That's
profits.
What he got from the hood.
But so long as we remember that, the profits have always followed. And what he was capturing was if you focus on bringing new medicines to benefit patients today and make sure you have an investment and a return to bring medicines for the future, which we are a biopharmaceutical research company. Research is who we are. Innovation is the lifeblood of our company. Then we can deliver for the mission to the patients. And I can tell you at Merck, I'm very proud of this. We always put patients at the center, and we always look at ways to do that, and that will continue to be what we do. So I do think actually what we're doing is consistent because it allows us to be sustainable for the long term, to deliver for patients in the future.
Thank you. I just turned into new medicine for the shareholders. They could have improved it and lowered the cost, like my father. And as a result, the costs are unaffordable. And then use the income you got from him to brag to your investors about the drugs as
we're now going
a key growth
turn to our second panel. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Do you think that's what Judge Merck intended when he had that high-minded philosophy, which he used to describe Merck's?
17 seconds.
Are you looking for the answer now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I would say the quote was, medicine is for the patients, not for the profits. But so long as we've remembered that, the profits have always followed. And what he was capturing was if you focus on bringing new medicines to benefit patients today and make sure you have an investment and a return to bring medicines for the future, which we are a biopharmaceutical research company. Research is who we are. Innovation is the lifeblood of our company. Then we can deliver for the mission to the patients. And I can tell you at Merck, and I'm very proud of this, we always put patients at the center. And we always look at ways to do that. And that will continue to be what we do. So I do think actually what we're doing is consistent because it allows us to be sustainable for the long term to deliver for patients into the future.
I just think it's turned into medicine for the shareholders and not medicine with
Okay.
people like my father.
That's the last line of questioning. So let me thank our three panelists for being here today and all the senators who participated. We're now going to turn to our second panel. Thank you all very much, gentlemen. Okay,
thank you very much.
Thank you all very much for being here. We have three very knowledgeable guests, panelists on prescription drugs and pricing. Our first witness will be Peter Maybarduk, who is the Director of Access to Medicines Program at Public Citizens. He's a lawyer who has advocated for stronger price regulation and stronger public health protections in patent law in the U.S. and around the world. Mr. Maybarduk, thanks very much for being with us.
Chairman Sanders, Ranking Member Cassidy, members of the committee, thank you. Public Citizen is a national public interest organization. We have 500,000 members and supporters, and for 50 years, we've advocated with success for health and consumer protections. Drug prices are high because of monopoly power, leading to the rationing of treatment and preventable suffering. 1 in 3 Americans has failed to take medicine as prescribed due to cost. Like Lois Chisholm of Fort Worth, who tells us of Merck's diabetes drug, "I need Januvia to control my blood sugar, but I can't afford it while on Social Security." Or Robert Cheravano of Loveland, Colorado, and his wife, both trying to afford J&J's Xarelto. Why do we have to pay so much? We are 90 and 81 on Social Security. Does anyone care about the elderly?
Thank you all very much for being
Keith Clyburn,
here.
Lafayette, Louisiana, on paying for Eliquis and other pricey meds from BMS.
Three very knowledgeable
So what do I do?
Guests,
I ration them so that I can eat and pay rent.
On prescription drugs and pricing.
Patients for Affordable Drugs has compiled 34,000 such stories from people struggling to afford their medicine. And that's a tiny fraction, a mere sample of the heartbreaking problems out there. High prices cost people their health. They can cost lives. They force impossible family budget decisions. We all pay for high prices, whether we are patients or not, whether
Chairman Sanders, Ranking Member Cassidy, members of the committee,
wasted tax dollars.
Thank you.
Medicare, Medicaid
Public Citizen
nearly
is a national public interest organization. We have 500,000 members and supporters,
in the world, 3
and for
times
50
what other
years,
countries pay.
we've advocated
That's net prices,
success
not
for health and consumer
protections. 3 times more in net
Drug prices are high because of monopoly
We also do
power,
the most to support research
leading
and
to the
development.
rationing of
The
treatment
world's largest
and
biomedical
preventable
research
suffering.
funder is a public funder.
1 in 3
The National
Americans has
Institutes
failed
of
to
Health,
take medicine as
and we should be
prescribed
very
due to
proud of
cost.
it. Like Lois
Contributing more
Chisholm
than
of Fort Worth,
$45 billion
who tells us
a
of
year
Merck's
and laying
diabetes
groundwork
drug,
for many, if
I
not
need
most new
Januvia to
medicines.
control my blood sugar,
Plus, public
but I
support
can't
is
afford
now
it
indispensable
while on
to
Social
late-stage
Security.
development of 1 in 4 drugs.
Robert
also.
Cheravano of
We
Loveland,
the people
Colorado,
drive
and his
innovation
wife,
together.
both trying to afford
So,
J&J's Xarelto.
Americans
Why
first
do we
pay
have
for
to
the
pay so
research,
much? We are
then
90
contribute to
and
the
81
development,
on Social
and then on
Security.
top of it, when a
Does
drug comes to
anyone
market,
care
pay the
about
highest
the
prices
elderly?
in the world.
Other
Keith
countries
Clyburn,
broadly
Lafayette,
negotiate
Louisiana,
prices
paying for
to
Eliquis and
protect
other
their
pricey
people.
meds from
But
BMS.
here, Pharma has
So
accrued
what do I do?
tremendous
I
influence in our
ration them
politics,
so that I
spending
can eat
hundreds of
and pay
millions a year
rent.
in lobbying, outranking
Patients
every
for
other
Affordable
industry.
Drugs has compiled 34,000
Now,
such
our government
stories
provides
from people
patent
struggling
protection
to
and
afford their
exclusivity on
medicines.
In theory,
That's a
this
tiny
should
fraction,
support
a mere
innovation.
sample,
But in
of the
practice,
heartbreaking
drug
problems
corporations
out there.
write the rules.
High
Extending
prices
monopoly
cost
power
people their
sometimes
health.
for
They can cost
decades,
lives. They
blocking
force
competition
impossible family
far
budget
longer
decisions.
than this body intends.
We all pay for high prices,
Senators, it is
whether we are
not
patients or
a
not,
market
whether out of
in the way
pocket
that you
or through
may
higher insurance
believe,
premiums and
respectfully.
wasted tax dollars.
Medicare,
corporations
Medicaid
testifying
spent
here today
nearly
claim
$200
any
billion
price
on
relief would
prescription
compromise
drugs
their
last
ability
year.
to invest in new medicine.
Americans pay the highest prices in the world, 3 times
That
what
framing
other countries
erases the
pay.
millions of Americans
That's
rationing
net prices,
treatment.
not lists.
It erases
To
the
point to
tens
last
of
panel.
billions of dollars
3 times
that
more in
taxpayers
net
invest in
prices.
R&D
Real
for real
prices.
health priorities.
We also
And
do
it
the
erases
most
the
to
hundreds
support
of billions
research
of
and
dollars that
development.
industry spends
The world's
on
largest
self-enrichment.
biomedical research
Last year,
funder
drug
is a
makers
public
selected
funder.
from
The
Medicare
National
negotiation
Institutes of
spent
Health
$10 billion
we should be
more
very
on stock
proud of it.
buybacks, dividends,
Contributing
and
more than
executive
$45 billion
compensation
than they
they
spent
spent
on
on
laying
R&D,
groundwork for many,
J&J
if not
and
most,
BMS,
new medicines.
each spent
$3
$3
billion
billion
more
more
on
on
these
self-indispensable to the late-stage
and over the
development
prior
of 1 in
decade,
4
Merck's
drugs
buybacks
also.
and dividends.
We the people
also
drive
exceed
innovation.
R&D by $3
Together,
billion.
J&J spent an
So,
impressive
Americans
$43 billion
first pay
more
for the
on buybacks and
research,
dividends than
then
R&D
contribute to
over
the
this
development,
period.
and then on top of it, when a drug comes to market, pay the
drug
highest
makers
prices
do
in the
not
world.
set prices
Other
according to
countries
R&D
broadly
costs.
negotiate prices
Instead,
to protect their people.
The price of a
But
patented
here,
drug
Pharma has accrued
simply
tremendous
the most
influence in our
that we,
politics,
as a
spending
society,
hundreds of millions
are
a year
willing
in
to
lobbying,
pay to care for our
outranking
sick and
every
loved
other
ones.
industry. country, where monopoly power blocks affordable alternatives and exclusivity on medicines. In theory, this market competition But in practice, drug corporations write the rules. Today, perhaps for the first time, our country is making progress, blocking competition, challenging high prices and rationing than this body including through price negotiation, and countering price spikes. We commend the committee's attention to this problem. But the problem is getting worse, much worse. And more corporations testifying here today claim any price from the moment compromise their ability to invest in not wait a decade as we are today, which costs taxpayers. That framing erases the millions of Americans rationing treatment. We support legislation before your tens of billions of dollars to strengthen market competition, invest in R&D for real health generic entry. And it erases the hundreds of billions of dollars that industry spends on self-enrichment. Monopoly power. Last year, drug makers selected the Medicare Foundation, allowing drug makers to project more on stock buybacks, to game the law, and keep prices high. Than they spent other real challenges, including providing patient assistance, $3 billion challenging middlemen who take advantage activities, real problems. And over the prior decade, Merck's flow inevitable dividends from the patent monopolies that make it so lucrative and so easy to rip off patients. $43 billion more on buybacks. We must do better for health, for access to medicines. Thank you for your time. Please count us with you in this fight. Drug makers do not set prices according to R&D costs.
CEO,
Instead, the price of a patented drug is simply the most that we, as a society, are willing to pay to care for our sick and loved ones.
Chairman Sanders,
where monopoly power
Cassidy,
blocks affordable alternatives.
It is my honor to be invited here to share
blocks
with you
market
a root cause of why the U.S.
we have little
pays
choice.
By far the highest prices in the world for prescription
Today, perhaps
drugs.
For the first time,
that
our country is making progress, challenging high prices and rationing,
patent system
including through price negotiation and countering price
its
spikes.
Market monopoly.
We commend the committee's attention to this problem.
All while increasing prices.
But the problem is getting worse, much worse.
So I qualified as a UK attorney in intellectual property.
We should negotiate prices from the moment a drug hits market, not wait a decade as we are today,
of my legal career practicing as an attorney at international
We support
law
legislation before your committee
companies,
to strengthen market competition and transparency.
Through this work, I learned both the legal and business side of intellectual property.
We will have to confront monopoly power.
Inventors,
that is the rotten foundation allowing drug makers to project
I also learned
to game the
how
law
to use
and keep prices high.
To game the system.
Other real challenges,
these loopholes
including providing
to
patient assistance and challenging middlemen who take advantage.
Companies
real
could
problems.
And maintain a monopoly
from
in
the
the
patent
market while
monopolies that make
continuing
it
to
so lucrative and so easy to rip off patients.
It was the reason why I co-founded IMAC and left the commercial world.
For access to medicines. Thank you for your
America
time.
is in a severe drug pricing crisis. More than one-third of Americans say they are not able to fill a prescription for medication because of its cost. Black Americans are most heavily impacted as they are more likely to require medication for chronic conditions and earn less. Chairman Sanders, Ranking Member Cassidy, now prescription drug spending on retail and non-retail drugs is here to share with you a root cause of why the U.S. pays by far the highest prices in the world for prescription and branded prescription drugs, which are under how the pharmaceutical industry account for 84% of the patent system to lengthen patent protection. These price hikes correspond with a dramatic increase in competition, patenting activity, all while increasing prices sector. So I qualified as a UK. Now, we have analysed some of the top 10 selling drugs in the United States, and we have found a total of decades of my legal career practicing as an attorney for international law firms and for multinational companies. 741 patents have been granted on through this work. I learned both on average that is more than 140 patent applications filed per drug, and 74 inventors, investors, and companies. 66% of I also filed after the drug how to use loopholes by the FDA to game the system. Now, if we look at some of the drugs, these loopholes are able today with the companies that were here, Keytruda's, Merck, Eliquis, Costa-Line, Johnson & Johnson, maintain a monopoly in the market while between them there's a combined maximum 494 patent applications. It was the reason why I co-founded IMAX and left the commercial world. 235 were America is in a severe drug price. I just want to dig a little bit deeper. One-third of Americans, particularly Senator Luan's question, able to fill whether Merck would medication because of allowed biosimilar competition. Black Americans are most heavily impacted as they are more likely to require medication. You have to remember, Keytruda actually represents 47%. Now, prescription drug spending on retail and non-retail drugs is now as of June 2002, we've counted 190 patent applications, of which 78 are granted. And branded prescription drugs, they have patent under protection at least until 2039, which is in total 37 years. These price hikes correspond with a dramatic increase in patenting activity in the pharmaceutical. You're supposed to get a patent for 20 years, remember. Market and media we have analysed some of the top 10 selling drugs in the United States, and we have found a total of 1,400. I put myself on record here today. We will not see, as of 2022, until 741 litigate the hell out of it, and they will use every on average that is more than 140 patent applications filed per drug, and 74 patents granted per drug. That's 66% talk of R&D, and, new indications, these patents are already disclosed. Now, if we look at some of the drugs that are on the discussion today with the companies that were here, Bristol Myers Squibb, Eliquis, same problem. Bristol Myers has actually increased the price of Eliquis. Between them, there's a combined 494 patents in 2012. That's higher than the general rate of inflation. 235. They have filed more patents here in the United States. I just want to dig a little bit deeper into Merck, and in fact, the patents that of whether the CEO from BMS was talking about, the relevant patents, those were actually invalidated in Europe, and that's why we have generic competition in Europe. You have to remember, but those patents are actually represents 47% and it's going to cost Merck's total pharmaceutical revenue. Branded Eliquis. Now, as of June this committee should recognize that the use of patent tickets to extend the market which 70 years are granted is not a case of a few bad actors. They have patent protection at least until 2039, which is in total 37 years of patent protection since they raised the bar for what classifies which is 2002. You're supposed to get a patent for 20 years. It's an enormous monopoly power. Market and media analysts are currently reporting that we should see biosimilar and we shouldn't leave it to the market and litigation to resolve the Luan's question. I put myself on record goes well beyond the time limits of monopoly that the biosimilar competition until 2024. Lawyers, they will litigate the hell out of legal marketing, and they will use every cent they use and they can to kind of. We need to actually not get sidetracked by this innovation talk to them. Most of these patents, and all this talk of R&D and new indications, and that's what the pharmaceutical industry does today. I've been in the business and I know what it's about. 2024. Thank you very much. Bristol Myers Squibb, same problem. Bristol Myers has actually increased the price of Eliquis by 124% since its introduction in 2012. That's higher than the general rate of inflation. They have filed more patents here in the United States, 2.4 more times than in Europe. In fact, the patents that the CEO from BMS was talking about, the relevant patents, those were actually invalidated in Europe, and that's why we have generic competition in Europe. But those patents are actually preventing competition here in the United States, and it's going to cost us $48 million in branded Eliquis. So this committee should recognize that the use of patent tickets to extend the market monopoly period on a product is not a case of a few bad actors. It's endemic.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
If you want to get to the heart of the problem, first and most important thing Congress can do is solve the problem, raise the bar for what classifies as an innovation that deserves a patent. It's an enormous monopoly power that in a single hands of a drug maker, and we shouldn't leave it to the market and litigation to resolve these issues. So the patenting activity goes well beyond the time limits of monopoly that the Constitution required. Lawyers exploit sophisticated legal marketing Jedi tricks that they use under the guise of innovation. We need to actually not get sidetracked by this innovation talk. Most of these patents are tweaked deliberately for the financialization of profits. And that's what the pharmaceutical industry does today. I've been in the business and I know what it's about. Thank you very much.
The value of this program was fully realized 5 years later when highly active antiretroviral therapy emerged as a life-saving treatment for patients with HIV. Today, 9 out of 10 patients receiving care through the Ryan White program enjoy viral loads so low that they're no longer infectious. Thanks to breakthrough medical innovation and to forward-thinking public policy that made innovative HIV therapies affordable to many, HIV-positive patients can now expect to live well into their 70s and beyond. But increasing patient access through bold expansion of affordable care means little when there are no valuable cures or treatments to access. Thank you. And breakthrough medical therapies provide little value honorable high cost sharing pushes them out. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today about drug prices and the assessment of medical technologies. This trade-off between innovation and affordability is played out in different approaches taken across the globe. There's little doubt that U.S. consumers access newer drugs sooner. I'm also the director of research at the USC Schaeffer Center for Health Policy and Access to the latest treatments. The opinions I offer today Schaeffer Center research suggests that introducing European-style pricing policies would ultimately reduce innovation. I'd like to start with a story. Just over half in December of 1984, a young boy from Indiana would be lost if all American surgeons suddenly forgot how to perform a result of a transfusion with infected blood. Yet there's no denying sentiment that U.S. consumers unfairly Congress passed the Ryan White Care Act, ensuring affordable care. The deteriorating accessibility of prescription drugs. The value of this program was fully realized. The access advantages and highly active antiretroviral consumers have so far enjoyed, and is one component of this growing sentiment. Today, 9 out of 10 patients with good insurance are struggling to access the therapies enjoy viral loads so low. Plans frequently employ co-insurance requirements thanks to breakthrough medical innovation severely restrict public policy. These changes likely harm health since the link between increasing out-of-pocket costs and HIV-positive patients can now expect to live well into their 70s and surprisingly, But increasing patient access, even while the average manufacturer net prices means little when there are no valuable cures manufacturers receive after rebates and discounts. Breakthrough medical have declined in each of the last 5 years. Schaeffer research analyzing the flow of money spent on insulin found that while net prices fell by 31%, this trade-off between innovation and affordability has played out in different approaches taken across the additional rebates and price concessions. There's little doubt that U.S. consumers access newer drugs sooner. Transparency in pricing throughout the pharmaceutical distribution system would be a major step towards ensuring that drug prices reflect the actual value provided to patients and don't simply enrich innovation. And rewarding drugs that do provide value promotes investment in the right kind of therapies. About what would be lost if all American surgeons suddenly forgot how to perform generations to come. Decades of economic research demonstrate that where innovators unfairly pay higher drug prices than innovative effort and discovery follow. The deteriorating accessibility of prescription drugs in recent years threatens to derail the access advantages in health chains, or make it hard to predict future returns to innovation. And is one component of this growing sentiment. The UK, Australia, and Canada, even patients with good insurance are struggling to access the therapies that nonetheless rely on quality-adjusted plans frequently employ co-insurance requirements and utilization management tools. On the other hand, restrict access. France and Germany avoid changes likely harm health and focus on rating increasing out-of-pocket in a way that often fails to correspond to the eventual price. Surprisingly, these trade-offs also deteriorated even while the average manufacturer net prices of brand would tie American prices to those charged receive after rebates and discounts. In so doing, have declined in each of the last 5 years. To live with the vagaries of Schaeffer research analyzing the flow of money spent on insulin around priorities while net prices fell by 31%. Ultimately, the right policies for American patients need to focus on the affordability of pocketing the additional rebates affordable and generous health insurance instead of passing them on to consumers. Transparency in pricing throughout the pharmaceutical distribution system would be a major step towards ensuring that drug prices reflect the actual value provided to patients and don't simply enrich intermediaries. Rewarding drugs that do provide value promotes investment in the right kind of therapies and ensures good health will be increasingly within the reach of American patients for generations to come. Decades of economic research demonstrate that where innovators predict higher returns, innovative effort and discovery follow. Outside the U.S., many countries adopt pricing approaches that either fail to measure value to patients or make it hard to predict future returns to innovation. The UK, Australia, and Canada employ relatively transparent and predictable methods that nonetheless rely on quality-adjusted life years, which discriminate against vulnerable
prices
patients.
are high because drug makers have monopolies over products we can't just substitute. A patient can't just say, I'll take this alternative. The patents block them from having affordable access. That is a monopoly, not a market system. American taxpayers stand up the world's largest and most productive funder of biomedical R&D at NIH, and it's we the people that found
policies for American patients need to focus on the affordability
that support the risky early stage
affordable
research,
and generous health insurance,
but has led to such significant medical breakthroughs in areas of mRNA, cancer, heart disease, gene therapy.
In other words, the
secures
government
the
has
health
played
of
a very
American
active
families
role
now
in the
and for
entire
generations
process
to come. Thank you.
What about free market capitalism and monopoly?
Well, I mean, it's the Constitution grants Congress the power to promote the progress of science and useful arts, securing for limited times a right to their inventors. What we have now is a system where the patent system is not a limited time, it's a monopoly that gets extended. When we think about the free markets and the principles of capitalism, it's interesting, Senator Paul mentioned Milton Friedman. In fact, the neoliberals actually didn't like monopoly power, and they really did actually believe in the free market, but the fact that the intellectual property system, patents, has been corrupted by the modern pharmaceutical
precisely,
system to
Senator,
extend those monopolies actually goes against the principles
prices
of the free
are
market.
high because
in a sense,
drug makers have monopolies over products we can't just substitute. A patient can't just say, I'll take this alternative. The patents block them from having affordable access.
Well,
so that is
truly
a monopoly,
free markets exist
not
only
a
on the whiteboard
market
in my
system.
classroom at USC.
American taxpayers stand up the world's largest and most
without
productive
patent protection,
funder
there
of
would be no
biomedical
innovation.
R&D at
That's a
NIH.
result that's
and
been known in
we the
economics
people
for
that found
centuries.
the risk.
So the real question is, how do we
balance
balance
the risky
patent
early
protection,
stage
which induces
research
innovation,
that has led to such
against
significant
the value of new innovations and being able to broadcast them more widely
cancer, heart
after the
disease,
end
gene
of the
therapy.
patent?
In other words,
and that trade-off can be tricky, although in the case of pharmaceuticals, we have a useful instrument, which is health insurance, and that allows
well,
patients to
I mean,
access
it's
drugs
the Constitution
at much lower prices
grants
than
Congress
what
the power to
manufacturers
promote
receive
the progress
even
of
during
science
the
and
patent
useful
period.
arts,
And that's
securing
an
for
opportunity
limited
for us
times
to expand
a right to their
accessibility
inventions.
even during
What
the
we
patent
have now
protection
is a
period.
system where the patent system is not a limited time. It's a monopoly that gets extended. And when we think about the free markets and the principles of capitalism, it's interesting. Senator Paul mentioned Milton Friedman.
What would you
In
say,
fact, the neoliberals actually didn't like monopoly power, and they really did actually believe in the free market. But the fact that the intellectual property system, patents, has been corrupted by the modern pharmaceutical system to kind of extend those monopolies actually goes against the principles of free market. So, in a sense, they're not living up to the bargain of the free market.
Okay.
Well, Senator, we heard some wild stuff up here this morning, including a lot of blaming middlemen for the problem of high prices. Look, drug makers' high prices are the whole reason that we have
truly free
a
markets
middleman
exist
problem.
only on the
It's
whiteboard
because we
in my
have
classroom at
exceedingly
USC,
high prices at the outset that
but
there's
it's
an
also true
attractive
that
market
without
for
patent
middlemen
protection, there
to
would
enter.
be no innovation.
But
That's a
the
result
fish
that's been
rots
known in
from
economics
the head.
for
If
centuries.
you break up the market, if
So
you
the
look
real
at
question is,
where the
how do we
revenue is, drug
balance
makers
patent
capture
protection, which
two-thirds,
induces innovation,
$323 billion.
against the
Pharmacy
value
benefit
of new
managers are a
innovations
small
and being able to
slice,
broadcast
$23
them more widely
billion.
after
So
the end of a
you can't
patent. And that
fix the
trade-off
problem
can
of
be
the
tricky,
pharmaceutical
although in the
industry
case
by
of
going off
pharmaceuticals,
middlemen who are
we
just
have a
trying to
useful
skim off the
instrument,
top.
which
You
is
have
health
to get to
insurance,
the
and
root
that
of the problem,
allows patients
which is
to
the monopoly
access
power.
drugs at much lower prices
I
than
agree with what Peter says, and I would
manufacturers
just
receive even
add
during the patent
that
period. And that's an
some of the
opportunity
answers that
for us
these
to expand
CEOs gave, for
accessibility
example,
even
Merck
during the
CEO
patent
about
protection period.
allowing biosimilar competition in when their primary patents end, I believe that is not going to happen. I think if you look at all the patents that they've stacked up, they know what their game plan is. You just have to look at what happened with Humira and AbbVie. Similarly, I believe you just look at what's happening with these weight loss drugs. We're looking at the patents on those now. These are potentially going to become $1 trillion drugs.
The issue as to why we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs and why one out of 3 people can't afford the medicine.
I think an important point that maybe is often missed is that net prices of pharmaceuticals
Well,
have been
Senator,
falling
we
for
heard
the
some
past 10
wild
years very
stuff up here
consistently.
this
CMS
morning, including a lot of
released its
blaming
national
middlemen
health
for the problem of high
expenditure
prices.
accounts
Look,
data, and it
drug
confirms
makers'
this
high
fact
prices
as
are the
well.
whole reason that
we have to reconcile that
a
with
middleman
rising
problem.
costs for
It's
consumers.
because we
and
have
so I think
exceedingly high
intermediaries are
prices
actually
at
playing
the
a bigger
outset
role
that there's
than
an
it might
attractive
appear.
market
About
for
40 cents of every
middlemen
dollar
to
spent on
enter.
pharmaceuticals goes to
The
intermediaries.
fish rots
and unlike
from the
pharmaceutical
head.
firms,
If you
they're not
break up the
engaging in
market, if
innovation
you look
that
at
ultimately improves
where
health.
the revenue is,
Thank you
drug
very much.
makers
Senator
capture two-thirds, $323 billion. Pharmacy benefit managers are a small slice, $23 billion. So you can't fix the problem of the pharmaceutical industry by going off middlemen who are just trying to skim off the top. You have to get to the root of the problem, which is the monopoly power.
And you mentioned the patent thickets, which is actually
I agree with what Peter says, and I would just
add
that some of the answers that these CEOs gave, for example, Merck CEO about allowing biosimilar competition in when their primary patents end, I believe that is not going to happen. I think if you look at all the patents that they've stacked up, they know what their game plan is. You just have to look at what happened with Humira and AbbVie. Similarly, I believe you just look at what's happening with these weight loss drugs. We're looking at the patents on those now. These are potentially going to become $1 trillion
the degree of
drugs.
the profit taking, if you will.
Okay,
I'll point out, by the way, that the 3 examples you gave seem to be all Medicare patients.
No problem.
And there is legislation out there.
I think an important
will
point that maybe is often missed is that net prices of pharmaceuticals have been falling for the past 10 years very
I think
consistently.
it'll be $2,000
CMS recently released its national health expenditure accounts data, and it confirms this fact as well. We have to reconcile that with rising costs for consumers, and so I think intermediaries are actually playing a bigger role than it might appear. About 40 cents of every dollar spent on pharmaceuticals goes to intermediaries, and unlike pharmaceutical firms, they're not engaging in innovation and ultimately
the
improves
Medicaid
health.
program are now
Thank you very much,
35%
Senator
of the
Cassidy.
total. Thank you all. And so,
Mr.
yes, maybe we could do some value-based purchasing.
I think
That's
it's
a
made
lot of
very
money, though.
persuasively.
It's a huge. By the way, clearly patents are part of the free market system. It's the way that you protect intellectual property and you incent creativity. Now, whether it's being abused is another issue. And you mentioned the patent thickets, which is actually
what we're really talking about
legislation
is more than
sponsored by
the
John
profit
Cornyn to
required
do
to
away with
incent.
it. Would you disagree with that? But I think without protection of
I
intellectual
think the
property, we would not
question
have this innovation.
is really how much,
Why
whether
would
we
you?
want
Why
to
would you put the
decrease
time into
profits
it?
or
Let's
not.
just make that
And
point.
we know that whenever
But,
you decrease
Ms. Maybarduk,
profits, you get less innovation.
Lakdawalla
And the research that we've
makes,
done
I think,
gets
persuasive
exactly that
point that
question.
without
If you
the
were to
profit
reduce
incentive,
prices
you will not
and
get the
profits,
innovation.
what would the net result be? You'd certainly save money, but you would also lead to fewer new drug discoveries and
the degree of the profit taking, if you will. Or could we point out, by the way, that three examples you gave seem to be all Medicare program, for example. And there is legislation out there which will obviously how they're initially the out-of-pocket exposure for Medicare patients. But if you have a compelling, I think it'll be $2,000 in June of 2025. And it's going to be very difficult for a Medicaid program not to cover. But this could bankrupt taxpayers. Somebody's paying.
Yes, so I don't think we are at a spot where lowering prices makes us better off. But for gene therapies, I absolutely agree there's a significant problem. And the issue is that the prices are all paid up front when there's the most uncertainty about whether the gene therapy is going to work in the long run.
And so value-based purchasing could obviously maybe we could do some value-based purchasing. That's a lot of money. But if you do value-based purchasing, that's not hospitals and doctors. How do you negotiate the upfront cost? So I think Mr. Maybarduk would say, listen, they've got enough profit to innovate. I treated a lot of sicklers. You want to treat them. What we're really talking about is more than the profit required to incent. Would you disagree with that? I can't believe they would get that.
Well, I think the question is really how much, whether we want to decrease profits or not. And we know that whenever you decrease profits, you get less innovation. And the research that we've done gets exactly that question. If you were to reduce prices on the whiteboard, yes, that's true. What would the net result be? It's actually not the case that you should negotiate the actual price up front. Instead, a value-based price would mean that the price will respond over time. So imagine a situation where gene therapies were paid for in installments.
I get that. And believe me, I've written about initially price is only based upon the restraints of the company. Dig up something out of stat. But if you have a compelling gene, but it still means that if you've got an initial high price, no matter what your value-based purchasing arrangement is, Medicaid program, it could still be something which society could not afford. But this could bankrupt taxpayers. What do you think of the German model?
Yes, so I don't think we are at a spot where lowering prices makes us better off. But for gene therapies, I absolutely agree there's a significant problem. And the issue is that the prices are all paid up front. Yeah, I think the challenge with the German model is it's actually very hard to predict the outcomes. But if you look at the ratings that the Germans produce of the benefits of drugs, they're not well correlated with negotiated prices. So if I'm an innovator trying to figure out what I'm going to get paid in Germany, it's really hard. And if you can't predict your returns, then they're not going to work as financial incentives.
I treated a lot of Mr. Amin, have you had a chance to evaluate the bill that's working its way through the Judiciary Committee and might be included in a year-end package as to its effectiveness in addressing I can't believe they would get that, but you see, the only thing that would stop them from asking that may be the sticker shock.
Senator Blumenthal and
so how do you negotiate that?
I think it will potentially cap for biologics patents that can be enforced for about 20.
You're the free market guys.
I've actually
on the whiteboard, yes,
that's advice on that bill. I don't think
it's actually not the case that you should negotiate the actual price up front. Instead, a value-based price would mean that the price will respond over time. So imagine a situation where gene therapies were paid for in installments, and the size of the installment.
And believe me, I've written about that.
That is the end of our hearing today, and I want to thank all of our witnesses for the participation, for any senators who
but it still means that if you've got an initial high price, no matter what your value-based purchasing arrangement is, it could still be something which society could not afford.
Entered the record. Three
what do you think of the
statements
German
from stakeholder groups and experts about the cost
Dr.
of
Baker,
drugs
I think, came up with
without the committee stands
in which
adjourned.
there is, you can ask whatever price you want for the first 2 years, but then after that, there's going to be some sort of negotiation based upon real-world data.
Yeah, I think the challenge with the German model is it's actually very hard to predict the outcomes, that if you look at the ratings that the Germans produce of the benefits of drugs, they're not well correlated with negotiated prices. So if I'm an innovator trying to figure out what I'm going to get paid in Germany, it's really hard. And if you can't predict your returns, then they're not going to work as financial incentives.
Mr. Amin, have you had a chance to evaluate the bill that's working its way through Judiciary Committee and might be included in a year-end package as to its effectiveness in addressing patent thickets? Yeah, push your button, ma'am.
Senator Blumenthal and Cornyn's
yes.
bill? I think it will potentially cap for biologics patents that can be enforced to about 20. I've actually given some technical advice on that bill. I don't think it's going to resolve the problem.
You don't think it's going to resolve the problem?
No.
I see. Okay. Well, thank you all. Very thoughtful.
All right. Thank you all. Very good discussion. Appreciate you being here. That is the end of our hearing today, and I want to thank all of our witnesses for the participation. For any senators who wish to ask additional questions for the record will be due in 10 business days, February 23rd at 5 p.m. Finally, I ask unanimous consent to enter the record 3 statements from stakeholder groups and experts about the cost of prescription drugs. With that, the committee stands adjourned. Thank you.